Our story begins in a distant and barren place where the orange sky seemed unbearably hot. A woman was crawling across the dry, scorching sand. She seemed lost, and there was no one else around. A drop of sweat rolled down her face. The ground was so hot that it evaporated instantly. The woman looked up as if begging for someone to save her. While clutching a compass in her hand, she kept saying that this situation couldn't possibly be real. Going back a little in time, we discover that the girl's name is Alyssa Lane, the only daughter born into the Lane Marquise family in 200 years. The beloved youngest daughter who posed in a perfect family portrait. Alyssa had beautiful violet eyes, brown hair, and wore only the finest clothes that nobility could offer. She was so precious that her parents forbade her from leaving the house, as if Alyssa were a delicate flower being carefully cultivated. That was her public image. A girl was reading a book about a timid young woman who stuttered whenever she spoke, was afraid of people, spent all day locked inside a mansion reading books, and was an illegitimate daughter. In the end, it is revealed that the girl in the book was the real Alyssa Lane. Alyssa Lane knew her situation all too well. She had survived despite being born as an illegitimate daughter. Even so, she was accepted as the official daughter of the Marquise. And she was allowed to live as the only young lady of the Lane family, simply because she had been born as a girl who would one day be useful to them. Her father's looming figure towered over her like an evil spirit, so when the Marquise forced her to marry at the age of 17, no one found it shocking. A gentle golden light filtered through the surrounding plants. Alyssa and her future husband finally met, and he said it was an honor to meet her. The white-haired young man introduced himself as Gregory, one of the sons of the Baker Count family. Our protagonist curtsied gracefully and introduced herself as the daughter of Marquise Lane, a leading power behind the imperial capital, and a noble family from the north. A marriage between the two houses seemed to proceed without any major issues. Until the infamous day Gregory was caught committing adultery with a young woman who was married to another nobleman, and everything spiraled out of control. The enraged husband demanded to know how Gregory dared to touch his wife, threatening him with his sword. He demanded a trial by combat and charged straight at Gregory. Gregory survived the duel but was left crippled. The Lane family proceeded with the annulment of the marriage, despite the Baker family's protests. The legal proceedings dragged on for years and years. By the time the ruling was finally issued in favor of the Lane family, Alyssa was already 25 years old. To society, an unmarried woman of that age was considered old and was looked down upon as unwanted leftovers. Alyssa went to her father's office and asked if he needed anything. The Marquis declared that her next marriage had already been decided. He revealed that she would marry the Grand Duke of Tessin, and those words left our protagonist absolutely terrified. Oh my god, what was that supposed to mean? Riker Tessin, the commander of the Tessin Empire, the land of gold and death. He was the guardian of the western frontier, and also the Emperor's half-brother. And to make matters worse, apparently, he was a serial wife killer. It was well known that he had already been married 6 times. His first wife died under mysterious circumstances while returning to Tessin after her wedding to Riker. His second wife could not endure Tessin's harsh conditions and returned to her family, only to die from a mysterious illness. His third wife fled to save her life, but the Imperial Guards brought her back, and her carriage mysteriously plunged off a cliff. The fourth wife died as well. The fifth followed shortly after, and the sixth wife didn't last very long either. Alyssa had a terrible feeling that if she married Grand Duke Riker, she wouldn't live much longer. She could hardly believe that her father was unaware of those facts. She felt a deep fear that her father simply wanted her gone. Our protagonist absolutely did not want to get married again, because it could end very badly for her. Her father interrupted her, asking if she had anything else to say. Alyssa snapped out of her thoughts. Her father's gaze was cold and piercing. Alyssa was shedding tears and sweating from sheer nervousness. The girl was left speechless. She said she had nothing more to say, and he ordered her to return to her room immediately. The door closed behind her. Looking out the window, Alyssa noticed that the weather had been clear just a short while ago. Heavy, dark clouds brought the rain. Now back in her room, one of the maids was fixing her hair. Alyssa stared absent-mindedly ahead as the young woman gently ran her fingers through her hair. Then the maid called out to her. Clearly distressed, the young woman begged Alyssa not to marry the Grand Duke. She was startled by her own outburst. Wow, seriously. The maid quickly apologized for speaking out of turn, saying she had spoken without thinking. Alyssa told her it was all right. Stammering slightly, she asked to be left alone for a few moments. Our protagonist remembered a chest filled with wedding gifts that had arrived for their marriage. Alyssa recalled that he had asked her to look inside a small jewelry box. She lifted the lid of the little box. Wow, the jewelry sparkled brilliantly. Alyssa thought it all looked a little too extravagant. However, inside the box was an object she didn't recognize. What was it? She picked it up and wondered what it could be. It was far too large to be a pendant. Could it be some kind of royal artifact? It was a clock. It had golden hands and a deep blue face, the color of the night sky. Suddenly, Alyssa's entire room became dark and warped. Our protagonist was hurled into a distortion of time, where silver hands pointed towards strange runes and unrecognizable symbols. She continued falling, screaming in terror, unable to understand what was happening. The girl fell even farther, feeling her body plunge into nothingness. And at last, she fell into darkness. Alyssa got to her feet, wondering where she was. Suddenly, a thick drop landed on her face. She touched her skin, wondering if it was saliva. Right behind her, a ferocious creature roared, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Alyssa finally realized the danger she was in. She turned around to look, but it was already too late. Our protagonist let out a nervous laugh, hoping all of this was nothing more than a terrible nightmare. And so, on the first day of January in the year 350 of the Benedict calendar, Alyssa fell into the underworld. From atop a crimson mountain, an intense white light shone brightly. Deep within the dark caves of the underworld, the sounds of things shattering echoed through the darkness. Alyssa was hiding behind a massive boulder, trying to protect herself from a gigantic creature. The girl looked utterly terrified. The enormous stone wolves were finally asleep. She knew this was her only chance to escape. Ever since she had fallen into the underworld and been found by that monster, that had been the day she left the world of the living behind. Alyssa refused to believe she was dead. Instead, somehow, she had been torn away from her own reality. She knew it sounded insane, but it seemed that she had become immortal. Something as small as a cut used to take an entire week to heal completely. Now, even if she suffered severe injuries, a single day was enough for her body to recover. But even when she first realized that she would never lose her life, no matter how desperately she wished to, Alyssa screamed at the stone wolves, but they ignored every word she said. All she could do was beg them to show her mercy. Skulls rolled across the cave floor as our protagonist demanded to know why all of this was happening to her. As time passed, despair gave way to fury, and the girl shouted at the savage beasts, asking what she had ever done to deserve such a fate. More skulls rolled across the freezing stone floor, clattering loudly as they bounced. Then Alyssa finally fought back. She did everything she could to resist. And at last, the girl decided to run, crawling her way through the grotesque figures that surrounded her. Would Alyssa truly be able to escape the underworld? What would happen if she were captured? What would those enraged beasts do to her? Our protagonist cried as she stared at her trembling hands. Alyssa was truly terrified, and so were we. She clenched her fist tightly, biting her lip as she desperately wished for a way out of that horrible place. She sat down on the cold stone floor, holding her own hands, and told herself that she would do whatever it took to escape. How brave! Alyssa started running. Just ahead, she could already see the exit. The girl was getting closer and closer to freedom. Then Alyssa wondered if she was even running in the right direction. Her exhausted feet pounded heavily against the ground. Ahead of her, a brilliant white light began to shine. It was her salvation. Our protagonist's eyes sparkled with hope. Now she just had to get a little closer. "You're almost there, dear." Within just a few more meters, she could already see the rocky mouth of the cave. "That's it, girl. Just a few more steps." Alyssa was determined to escape that hellish place once and for all. As she ran, however, she couldn't see the creatures closing in behind her. Massive stone claws lunged dangerously close to her face. The sound of claws scraping through the air echoed around her. Oh no! Once again, Alyssa's plans seemed to have been crushed. The stone beasts had gotten far too close. The wolves tore her clothes apart. Alyssa was disappointed in herself. How could she have failed again? That nightmare seemed like it would never end. She had lost her chance to escape and had become nothing more than entertainment for the stone wolves' cubs. Our protagonist cried as she realized they were still young and inexperienced hunters. She begged them to put an end to it all. The beasts drooled profusely. Their inexperience meant they couldn't finish off their prey with a single strike. The pile of bones in one corner of the cave kept growing larger and larger. Then one day, Alyssa had already lost count of how many times she had come back to life. She bitterly realized that perhaps marrying the Grand Duke wouldn't have been such a bad idea after all. Our protagonist felt deeply ashamed because she would have done anything to become the perfect bride for him. If she had known all of this would happen, she probably would have fallen to her knees and begged him to marry her. It would have been the perfect opportunity for him to get rid of his reputation as the bride killer. As she listened to the wolves, she realized they were taking much longer than usual that day. Alyssa hated having to endure that same pain over and over again. The stone beasts let out low growls. The cave was completely stained with crimson splatters. Then, in the middle of all that pain, Alyssa had an idea. What if she turned the situation around? She wondered how she had only just realized something so simple. After that thought, things should become much easier. The bones scattered across the ground were hard and sharp enough for her to use as weapons to defend herself. Unlike her, those stone creatures did not live forever. This time, the odds were completely in her favor. She started with the weaker beasts, taking them down one by one. Even so, they continued to snarl ferociously. Alyssa used the bones to defend herself from the wolves' massive jaws. Our protagonist was giving it everything she had. Yes, girl power. You go, girl. Her face covered in crimson stains, Alyssa yelled at the beasts to go to hell. Their stone bodies began to crack. And finally, they shattered into thousands of rocks that crashed onto the ground. Alyssa looked around in annoyance as the stones continued to fall. Finally, it was about time. At last, she dropped the bone onto the ground. Our protagonist crouched down to retrieve something she had hidden inside a narrow crevice. It was something she had done ever since she first found herself trapped in the underworld. At last, her fingers touched something round. She had hidden the clock, the very object she was convinced had brought her to that hellish place. Alyssa was relieved to have found it. Deep within that dark place, the clock was the only object that allowed her to keep track of time. Its hands pointed to January 19th. She was certain she had fallen into the underworld on January 1st. She looked sadly at the clock, wondering how many times she had died and come back to life in less than 20 days. Then she turned away. Consumed by rage, she kicked several rocks while repeating the question to herself. She was furious after enduring so much pain at the hands of those creatures. No matter how many times they had attacked her, she was still standing, alive and strong. She cursed every creature that had ever hurt her in that hell. Consumed by anger, Alyssa kicked more and more rocks. Suddenly, her shoe split a boulder clean in half. She stared in shock at what lay before her. Right beside her foot, a small yellow crystal shimmered brilliantly. She bent down to pick it up. The stone was diamond-shaped and radiated a golden light. Wow, what could it possibly be? Alyssa held the small crystal as though she were hypnotized by it. Her eyes followed every fragment of light, and she wondered what it was. In another world, a golden jewel gleamed from a cufflink. A nobleman was summoned by his butler, who announced John's arrival. The man apologized for disturbing his lordship's rest and explained that an urgent matter required his attention. The nobleman revealed that he had seen a carriage bearing the Rain family's crest pass through the front gates not long ago. He asked whether another young lady had already departed. John stammered before replying that it wasn't exactly what had happened. Finally, he revealed that the Marquise's daughter had disappeared. The nobleman laughed once again, saying that such riddles made no sense at all. He rested his hand against the window. Then he declared firmly that it didn't matter whether she had truly disappeared or had simply run away to escape the marriage. Either way, she had been destined to be eliminated. Far away from there, a young woman leaped high into the air to attack a monstrous creature. It was April 1st, in the year 3058. Alyssa, our protagonist, had become a fearless warrior after spending 8 years in the underworld. She struck the beast's armor with perfect accuracy. That strike seemed to be incredibly effective. The truth was that Alyssa had survived hell, and now she stood victorious atop the body of her defeated enemy. She flashed a wide smile. The girl looked remarkably cheerful during the hunt. Despite everything she had been through, she was still beautiful and radiant. Alyssa searched through the enemy's armor, looking for something. In the distance, unnoticed by her, someone with cat ears was watching her. Wow, who could that be? The mysterious young man had long, razor-sharp claws and a mischievous grin. The girl managed to collect several beautiful gemstones. He seized the opportunity to make a huge leap. The young man stealthily approached Alyssa, as agile as a cat. Meanwhile, Alyssa admired the jewels she had obtained from the hunt. However, the catboy's ambush was completely unsuccessful, and he ended up punching the ground instead. Alyssa skillfully leaped into the air, grabbed him by the hair, and demanded to know who he thought he was. He was so shocked that he couldn't react quickly enough. She placed both hands on his head, then used the momentum to drive her knee straight into him. Alyssa kicked him hard in the face, demanding to know how he dared try to steal her precious belongings. Our protagonist jumped back and declared that stealing was a sin even in hell. The catboy was sent flying. With a piercing stare, Alyssa asked whether she had made herself clear enough. The fallen young man tried to shield his face from another blow. He begged her to spare him. "Are you kidding me? Is he really asking for mercy in hell?" Alyssa was completely astonished when she realized the monster could actually speak. Her staff slammed into the ground right between his legs, leaving him completely cornered. The catboy bowed low to the ground, begging for forgiveness and offering his mana stones as an apology. Still bowing, he even promised that he would never set foot in that place again. Alyssa remained silent after hearing his words. She asked the young man if he knew where they were. The catboy answered that they were in West Arik. Our protagonist was stunned to learn that this place actually had a name. Long ago, when she first fell into this place, the only thing she knew was that she was in hell. She raised a hand to shield her eyes, wondering what kind of place this really was. She had made that discovery thanks to a book she had read while she was still young, during her time at a monastery. It described a desolate land where the relentless heat never ceased. Evil creatures roamed freely, and enormous fissures scarred the earth. Alyssa asked the young man what those gemstones were. All she knew was that those pink crystals made her stronger whenever she ate them. She asked the catboy if they were mana stones. The young man asked whether she really intended to leave something so precious lying on the ground. Alyssa became curious about how valuable they really were. The catboy explained that they were extremely valuable and that they were the largest mana stones he had ever seen. Deep down, he thought about how much stronger he would become if he obtained those stones. To his complete surprise, Alyssa revealed that she would let him keep every single one of them. Wow, now he was the one who was completely confused. Alyssa confirmed that she was serious, but in return, he would have to give her some information. Far away, a large crow let out a loud cry. Mana stones were crystals of pure power created by the concentration of magical energy. Alyssa suddenly pushed open the massive doors of a grand green hall. If she wanted to obtain more mana stones, simply hunting monsters would never be enough. Mana stones found inside wild monsters were merely the result of chance, because every creature had a limit to how much magical energy it could accumulate. Demons, however, possessed intelligence and were completely different from the monsters wandering the wild. They controlled magic itself, accumulating power before attacking weaker beings to steal their strength and increase their own. That meant the stronger the demons Alyssa hunted, the more power she would gain. Alyssa walked forward with determination as she thought about every region of Hell: East Noah, West Arik, South Fenzi, and North Kaya. She thought about all the demon lords who ruled over castles throughout Hell. An intricate painting depicted an ancient battle that had lasted for ages. Alyssa pounded forcefully on the door. It creaked open with a loud groan. Just ahead, a demonic creature sat upon a green throne. The demon welcomed Alyssa, who had finally arrived at the castle of West Arik. It introduced itself as the warden of the West Hall and master of the castle. Before the creature could say another word, Alyssa hurled her spear across the room. Wow, a direct hit. She looked at it coldly and simply said that she had no interest in knowing who that beast was. The great green hall fell completely silent. Alyssa walked up to the throne to retrieve her spear. She smiled brightly as she looked at the mana stone, declaring that it was the largest mana stone she had ever obtained. As the mana stone floated in the air, she wondered whether she should head north or east first. Before she could make a decision, the stone shattered into smaller pieces. Alyssa looked relieved because no matter which direction she chose, she had plenty of time. Suddenly, something caught her attention. Her expression became frightened and confused. She asked what was happening. All of a sudden, above her was a ceiling adorned with a golden chandelier. Alyssa was back in her old bedroom. How was that even possible? Her legs were still weak from what had just happened. A white dress fluttered through the room. Alyssa touched her head and wondered if she had returned to the real world. She opened her eyes, trying to understand what was happening. The girl knelt in front of her mirror and demanded to know what was going on. Yeah, we don't understand either. Apparently, she had gone back 8 years into the past and was young once again, with none of the scars she had earned from her battles in the underworld. Alyssa was completely astonished. Her skin was flawless once again, yet her beautiful lilac eyes remained just as striking. She noticed how much younger she looked. Could it have been because of the mana stones she had obtained? Wow, she seriously needs to tell us what kind of treatment that is. However, her ankles still hurt badly. The girl wondered if she had twisted it during the fall. Then she noticed one crucial detail. Alyssa took a closer look at her body and realized she was nothing but skin and bones. What had happened to the strong physique she had built over the years in Hell? Our protagonist panicked as she wondered what had happened to her body. She was far more fragile and vulnerable now. Like this, she would never be able to lift a spear, let alone throw one. Alyssa was devastated because she had lost all of her strength and vitality. She had worked so hard to gather countless mana stones and become powerful, but now it was all gone. Suddenly, someone knocked on her bedroom door. The unexpected sound startled our protagonist. From outside, a maid introduced herself as Daisy. Alyssa flinched when she heard the young woman asking for permission to come in. The room seemed to spin around her. The whole world felt like it was moving at incredible speed. Alyssa hurried beneath the blankets to hide herself before finally allowing the maid to enter. Daisy wished her lady a good morning. The maid asked whether she had slept well. Alyssa replied that she felt well rested before asking the maid something, but she quickly sat back down on the bed, clearly frightened. After all, what in the world was happening now? Our protagonist asked the maid how old she was. Daisy couldn't understand why she was asking such a question. Alyssa remembered the last conversation they had shared. Back then, the maid had worn a completely different hairstyle. The maid simply replied that she would soon turn 22 and asked her lady if something was wrong. Alyssa's hair fluttered gently in the breeze. As she sank deeper into her own thoughts, our protagonist realized that she hadn't merely become younger, she had actually traveled back in time, precisely to when she was 17 years old, before her life had been ruined. Outside, the sky was bright blue with only a few clouds drifting by. What a beautiful day. Alyssa lay in bed, supported by a young woman with long hair and Daisy. She tossed and turned restlessly, perhaps dreaming of terrible things while someone tried to touch her. When she woke up, she was terribly thirsty. A woman wearing a green dress tried to bring her back to her senses. She embraced Alyssa and gently told her to drink the water slowly so she wouldn't choke. Alyssa remained silent as she listened to the woman ask whether everything was all right. The woman had been deeply frightened after learning that the girl had suddenly fainted. The woman was stunned when Alyssa said, "Thank you, mother." Apparently, that response had caught her completely off guard. In a brief journey into the past, a maid called out to someone in the palace corridors. Further ahead, a butler begged the lady not to continue, but the woman was determined and refused to stop for anyone. She declared that she had no idea there were places forbidden to the lady of the house. Or were they hiding something from her? The butlers whispered nervously among themselves because she was heading toward the south wing of the palace. They needed to inform Marquise Lane immediately, or things could end very badly. The Marquise had secretly brought an illegitimate child to live with them in the mansion. Until that moment, she had been raised without the lady's knowledge. Lady Lane's presence was intimidating. As she stared threateningly at the little girl, Lady Lane asked if she was Alyssa. The little girl looked back at her with obvious concern. One of the maids hurriedly tried to explain the situation. The lady knelt down and softly greeted the little girl. She introduced herself as Alyssa's mother, while the maid watched the two of them with great concern. Alyssa was overcome by a terrible feeling, and her expression changed. She remembered a terrible moment from her past, when that very same maid had shielded her from her father as he shouted at the little girl, telling her that nothing belonged to her. The man told her she should be grateful for being given that chance in life, but that she must never dare to desire anything more. Those words haunted the little girl, whose future was uncertain. Frightened, little Alyssa hid behind one of the maids. Lady Lane apologized to her, explaining that she hadn't wanted to frighten the little girl with such an unexpected visit. Alyssa heard the woman say that she was overflowing with joy to have her there, and that was why she had come without warning. However, she would leave shortly. The little girl felt so guilty for her father's sins that she didn't believe she deserved to be the daughter of someone so kind and beautiful. Her very existence was a living symbol of her father's infidelity, weighing upon her like a sin. But that didn't seem to affect Lady Lane, who gently called Alyssa's name. It took Alyssa a very long time to realize that her mother's smiles had always been genuine. Years later, our protagonist would become a fragile young woman who was too ashamed to call her mother. Alyssa sadly remembered that this had become one of her greatest regrets during her time in the underworld. That was precisely why calling Lady Lane mother had surprised the noblewoman so much. She smiled and noticed that her daughter must be very thirsty. The noble lady told the girl that if she needed anything else, all she had to do was ask. Meanwhile, Daisy quietly closed the door behind them. She had unexpectedly noticed that Lady Alyssa had spoken without stuttering and had finally called Lady Lane mother. The maid walked away, wondering how someone could change so completely overnight. It was as though Alyssa had somehow come back to life. Lady Lane asked whether she had fainted because of weakness. A cup of herbal tea would surely do her some good. Our protagonist gently held her mother's hand. Then she asked the lady whether Sir Gregory Baker had already been chosen as her future fiancé. The lady looked at her in surprise. Lady Lane took her daughter's hand and gently reminded her that she was still very young. Alyssa realized that she had traveled back to a point before her engagement to Gregory had been announced. She tried to convince her mother by explaining that she didn't truly love Gregory. Perhaps she still had a chance to change her fate. Marriages between noble families were powerful political alliances between kingdoms and their great houses. Even with the influence of House Lane, would her mother truly be able to help her? Lady Lane told her to leave everything to her. To Alyssa's surprise, the lady confessed that she didn't like Gregory as a suitor either. Although she couldn't quite explain why, there was something about the young man that reminded Lady Lane of her husband when he was younger. Mother and daughter embraced, and Lady Lane assured her that she had nothing to worry about. Everything would be resolved soon, and Alyssa would never be forced into a marriage she didn't want. Sometime later, someone hurried down the corridor. Seated in his office was Marquis Lane. He was writing something indecipherable with a fountain pen. What could it be? A secret message? Some ridiculous conspiracy? As he continued writing, he heard someone ordering him to release her mother once and for all. She had been incredibly bold to walk into his office without first being announced by a butler. Honestly, how rude could that be? The cruel Marquis ordered his daughter, Alyssa Sirius Lane, to return to her room immediately. Now glaring at him threateningly, Alyssa asked if that was truly all he had to say after she had discovered that her mother was being confined inside one of the palace's rooms. She stepped dangerously closer to him, calling him by his full name, Marquis Walter Lane. The Marquis coldly warned Alyssa to be more careful with her words because walls had ears. The girl found it outrageous that he tried to justify himself by claiming that her mother was gravely ill and needed extensive care and complete isolation in order to recover. Alyssa slammed her hand down hard on the desk. That confinement was actually because Lady Lane had opposed the arranged marriage with Gregory. That's right, girl. She accused the Marquise of imprisoning the lady of the house inside her own chambers, despite never having truly cared about her health. He was a petty man who cared only about protecting his own reputation. Our protagonist stepped toward him in a threatening manner. Then, with a cold, ominous gaze, she asked what he would do if she smashed her fiancé's head with a hammer. The Marquis was horrified by the damage such an act would do to his reputation. Alyssa had no right to defy him. The cruel man slapped her across the face. Alyssa revealed that she wasn't threatening him. Rather, she was simply demonstrating the extent of her self-control.
Woohoo! She was incredibly brave.
The girl stared at the man with a piercing gaze, revealing that he was actually the one she wanted to eliminate immediately. The Marquis was shocked by her expression, wondering if she had always looked at him that way. He had always known there was something wrong with his daughter. How could she have gone from being such an obedient creature who never dared utter a single word of protest, to becoming a defiant woman who would dare march straight into my private office and glare at me with such hateful eyes? Her eyes had hardened like those of a warrior who had gone to hell and returned. He realized he was entertaining ridiculous thoughts. A bead of sweat rolled down his chin as he thought that this creature was the very same child who once trembled at the mere mention of his name. There was no way she could have changed so abruptly. The cruel Marquis believed it was merely a belated display of rebellion. After all, children were like that, weren't they? Once again, he insisted that she return to her room immediately. Defying the orders of the head of the household was a grave offense worthy of punishment. The man said that because she was still very young, he would let this incident pass. However, she would remain confined to her room until she showed genuine remorse for her actions. Alyssa asked the blonde young man what he thought about everything that had happened. He nearly spat out his tea. The young man asked her what she had just said. Alyssa replied that he was speaking far too loudly. He was Harry, the second son of the Lane family, a young man with delicate blonde hair and blue eyes. He shouted at his sister, saying that she had been banished from the main castle and didn't seem to care in the slightest. Harry asked whether she wasn't worried about having displeased their father. Alyssa simply replied that it was a relief not to have to live with him anymore. Then the girl asked whether there was any news about their mother. Harry revealed that she had been released from confinement, but had been forbidden from going anywhere near the south wing of the castle. After hearing that order, she had still tried to go there. However, their older brother had been doing everything he could to stop her. The eldest son of the Lane family was Felix. Alyssa imagined how difficult things must have been for Felix. The girl asked her brother whether, given her current situation, he could at least deliver a message to their mother on her behalf. She heard Harry say that he had been worried about her, which was why he had come to see her. Then Alyssa suddenly realized something she had completely overlooked. But what could it be? Our protagonist hadn't realized that she and her brother had actually been close. That realization caught the young man completely off guard. He gave an awkward smile and said that apparently she had no idea just how much he cared about his only sister. Alyssa found that comment rather strange. The girl admitted that she had never realized Harry felt that way. Although it was an unfamiliar feeling, she couldn't say it was unpleasant. She was an illegitimate child who had never expected them to necessarily hate her, but she certainly hadn't expected their kindness either. Alyssa felt grateful that she had returned to the past. Our protagonist asked her brother how far the preparations for her marriage had progressed. He revealed that the negotiations between the two families had already been completed. Only the imperial approval and the official public announcement remained. Alyssa fell deep in thought as her brother asked whether she really hated Gregory that much. She asked whether he remembered her debut. He answered that of course he did. On the night of her debut, she had stepped into the center of the castle's grand ballroom. The humiliation Alyssa experienced that night had been so overwhelming that she shut herself away in her room for weeks afterward. Unfortunately, she still remembered every cruel remark made by the guests. Those words would continue to haunt her for a very long time. A man stopped directly in front of her and sarcastically asked whether she needed any help. Alyssa recognized him immediately. Our protagonist revealed to her brother that the cruel young man was Gregory Baker, and that was how her debut ball came to an end. Harry asked whether she wanted him to get rid of that bastard right then and there. As she picked up an envelope, she admitted that she didn't think her brother should do that. Still, she appreciated the offer all the same. Alyssa regretted not realizing these things sooner. With a threatening look in his eyes, Harry asked whether he could challenge Gregory to a duel. Wow, what a brother. Instead of answering him, Alyssa handed the young man an envelope decorated with a purple ribbon. Harry became curious about what was inside the letter. We're curious too. He was utterly shocked when she asked him to deliver the letter to Riker, the Grand Duke of Tessin. The blonde young man became even more confused, having no idea what to make of it. Wow, that definitely caught us by surprise. He asked her what the hell was going through her mind, but she refused to tell him, saying only that Harry had to be as quick and as discreet as possible. Far away from there, in the kingdom of Tessin, at the Grand Duke's estate, a man tossed several ornate documents aside. The marriage negotiations between the imperial family and House Greitz were classified as extremely confidential. Even so, a very courteous letter arrived for Riker, warning him to be careful with his future bride because she was very frail. Those men were the head butler, Henrik Lang, and his assistant Roderick. Riker Tessin asked the men who could possibly have leaked that secret. Roderick nervously replied that he had only learned about the marriage arrangements that very day, explaining that it was impossible for the rumors to have originated there. The ruthless Grand Duke thought for a few moments. Then he ordered Henrik to remain at the main castle while Roderick prepared for an immediate departure. The men looked surprised, and Roderick asked whether Riker truly intended to go meet this Alyssa Lane. The Grand Duke tapped the letter with his fingers, saying, "On the day autumn becomes winter, at the great stones beside the Grand Monastery." He asked whether that was truly an invitation or not. Riker ordered them to keep the escort as small as possible so they wouldn't attract attention. Shortly afterward, the two men were dismissed. They departed, leaving Riker alone in his office. He thought the stationery looked terribly tacky. Who on earth would be wishing him congratulations? Riker had no idea who Alyssa Lane was or what she could possibly want with him. Meanwhile, the girl wondered whether he had already received her letter. The carriage continued peacefully through the forest. Alyssa asked Daisy how much longer it would take to reach the rocks near Dolores Monastery. The maid replied that they were almost there. The girl commented that it was much farther away than she remembered. She was relieved that her mother had lent her such a comfortable carriage because the constant swaying usually made her nauseous. Alyssa was happy because, thanks to her mother's thoughtful gesture, she wouldn't suffer from motion sickness. Wow. Lady Lane truly was incredibly kind. However, her plans were suddenly ruined when a massive impact struck the carriage. Our protagonist gasped and her eyes widened. The horses neighed loudly in panic. What could possibly be happening? The large carriage shook violently. The horses galloped about in confusion, their pounding hooves echoing loudly. The carriage wheels spun at incredible speed. A tremendous crash filled the air. On the opposite side of the carriage, Daisy shielded herself while Alyssa felt a sharp pain in her head. She could hardly believe that a single violent jolt had left her so dizzy. After all, back when she lived in hell, she had ridden gigantic beasts without the slightest problem. How could she have become so weak? But the bigger question was, were they being robbed? She doubted anyone would be bold enough to openly attack a carriage bearing the Lane family crest. Daisy asked Alyssa to stay inside while she went out to investigate. Our protagonist panicked and begged Daisy not to go outside. The maid opened the carriage door just a crack. Before she could step out, something struck her. Oh no! Alyssa caught Daisy in her arms, desperately calling for her to wake up. The girl realized that she was still breathing, but she had lost consciousness. My God! A poison dart had struck the maid. She recognized the scent of cinnamon and cypress. It was a very specific poison. Alyssa couldn't believe such a thing was possible. She remembered the name of that toxin. Suddenly, the carriage door swung open, and a blonde man found them inside. A young man stepped into the carriage, apologizing for the intrusion. Alyssa continued holding Daisy in her arms without saying a word. The young man gently took the unconscious girl into his own arms, explaining that they couldn't allow any further Imperial information to be compromised, so they had been forced to take drastic measures. Wow, so they were the ones who shot Daisy. Riker Tessin asked Alyssa Lane to step out of the carriage. Or would she prefer that he call her by her codename, Sirius? He had hair like molten gold, skin as white as snow, and clear, brilliant eyes. People often said that he hadn't inherited the Imperial family's features. Instead, they claimed that Riker Tessin possessed a sinister appearance. But then, how could he possibly be so handsome? Wow, he really was unbelievably attractive. The Grand Duke judged that, based on Alyssa's appearance, it was hard to imagine she was the kind of bold woman who would send such a strange letter. Alyssa looked sadly at her dress, now stained from all the chaos. To everyone else, it probably looked as though he were cornering a delicate, noble lady like her. Riker commented that he had heard Lady Lauren of House Greitz suffered from a heart condition. Our protagonist smiled sweetly at him. Apparently, considering her frail constitution, there was a very good chance she wouldn't survive the long and grueling journey to Tessin. Alyssa's condition was a secret known only to her closest relatives and her personal maid. Alyssa asked if he really wanted to know. Riker extended his hand to help her out of the carriage. However, to his surprise, she declined and stepped down from the carriage on her own, saying that the meeting place mentioned in the letter wasn't there. She said they only needed to walk a little farther to reach their final destination. Riker clenched his hand in irritation, annoyed by the girl's audacity. He had heard she was a timid and submissive young lady, but this girl matched that description in no way at all. Turning to leave, the Grand Duke asked whether there was any chance he could refuse her offer. However, he was curious to know why he had been invited there in the first place. Alyssa simply replied that there was something she wanted to confirm. Legend had it that those 7 stones formed a sundial. From sunrise until the end of the day, it marked the time of the living. But the night belonged to the realm of the underworld. That was why non-human beings could not pass through the ruins during daylight. Alyssa asked curiously whether the Grand Duke had ever stepped inside the sundial. He answered that he had not. The girl seemed a little disappointed and admitted that she had expected that answer. Then Riker walked past her. He slowly turned around and asked whether she wasn't coming with him. The Grand Duke found the girl's behavior extremely strange. What could she possibly be plotting? Was there some hidden trap among the ruins? In the end, Alyssa's smile revealed nothing. Riker walked between the stones, thinking that even if there were a trap, escaping it would be easy for him. Standing outside, Alyssa remarked that apparently he really was a human. He didn't understand why she had said that. The girl asked whether he wasn't worried as the leaves swirled around him. Wow, what a tense atmosphere. What happens next? Alyssa explained that if he had been unable to enter the ruins, it would have meant he wasn't truly human. Riker asked whether there had been any real reason for him to worry. Apparently, Alyssa had believed the rumors claiming that he was a demon. The girl told the Grand Duke that he was a very brave man. What if those ruins possessed some kind of mysterious power? After all, Alyssa knew that hell was real. So why couldn't a sundial distinguish humans from other kinds of beings? And what did that reveal about her? Our protagonist had fallen into hell and traveled through time. Was Alyssa still human? Or our protagonist absent-mindedly played with her dress while Riker stared at her? Apparently, Alyssa was still human. Phew! What a relief. Riker thought the girl was very peculiar. She thanked him for his patience. Alyssa stepped very close to the Grand Duke and declared that her curiosity had finally been satisfied. Wow, look how close they're standing together. Then our protagonist realized just how close she had gotten. Much too close. Too close for comfort. Noticing the distance between them, Alyssa quickly stepped back and decided it was finally safe to introduce herself properly. She curtsied gracefully and introduced herself as Alyssa Lane, the person responsible for sending the letter to the Grand Duke. Alyssa revealed that she was the daughter of... Before the girl could finish speaking, Riker interrupted, saying that he already knew who she was. She was the daughter of Marquise Lane. The girl replied that if he already knew her identity, then everything from that point onward should be much simpler. She knelt on the ground, addressing him by both his name and his royal title. That completely caught the Grand Duke off guard. Alyssa extended her hand toward him and asked Riker Tessin to marry her. An awkward silence fell between them. The Grand Duke was absolutely convinced that Alyssa was completely insane. On a beautiful sunny day, right there among the ancient ruins, Alyssa proposed marriage to Riker. "Somebody pinch me, I can't believe this is actually happening." Alyssa continued, insisting that the Grand Duke of Tessin accept her as his wife. However, he seemed completely disgusted by the proposal. She tried to explain that she understood how sudden everything seemed, but she assured him there were absolutely no disadvantages. Riker angrily asked whether she truly believed he had come all that way just to listen to such utter nonsense. He began walking away from Alyssa, saying that the entire conversation was utterly ridiculous. Alyssa watched the man walk away. She called out, asking him to wait. The girl got to her feet, explaining that he still hadn't heard the rest of her proposal. Riker simply replied that he wasn't interested. She hurried after him, trying to persuade him by asking whether he wasn't curious about how she had learned the Empire's secret. Alyssa grew more and more anxious because things weren't supposed to turn out like this. He was supposed to be curious. Meanwhile, Riker was mentally calling our protagonist every name under the sun, until suddenly he seemed to be struck by some kind of violent attack. His body appeared to be overtaken by sinister vibrations. Apparently, it was a vicious cycle that had never truly ended, and agonized voices began consuming his body.
Oh no! How horrifying!
Riker began to writhe in agony, wondering if he had wandered too far away from Tessin. He needed to return immediately. The Grand Duke leaned against a tree, and Alyssa, worried about him, cautiously approached to see what was happening. She asked if he was all right, but the man didn't seem to hear her. Alyssa reached out her hand, trying to support him. The voices had completely taken over the Grand Duke's mind. Acting on pure instinct, he shoved Alyssa away, causing her to fall to the ground. Riker was breathing heavily, overwhelmed by the terror consuming his body. Our protagonist looked at him in complete confusion. Suddenly, her expression became far more determined. Our girl wasn't about to let this go. Out of nowhere, something seemed to catch the Grand Duke completely off guard. Alyssa grabbed his hand. The girl begged him to let her help him back to his carriage. That single gesture left the man speechless. And then Riker Tessin realized something completely unexpected. The voices had disappeared. Now all that remained was the sound of the wind. He wondered whether that had happened because of that strange girl. Meanwhile, Alyssa could only wonder whether he was angry that she had taken his hand without permission. She slowly began pulling her fingers away. To her surprise, he grabbed her hand again. Alyssa hadn't expected that at all. Neither did we, girl. Riker pulled the girl closer and ordered her not to let go of him. Our protagonist was completely confused now. Sometime later, the two of them were sitting together on a bench. How adorable. The girl was still trying to process everything that had happened. Then she asked whether they were really going to continue the conversation while holding hands. Riker looked rather surprised and replied that it was a condition for the conversation to continue. The Grand Duke anxiously asked what Alyssa wanted from him. She was absolutely delighted. At last she might finally get what she wanted. She insisted that they get married, and if he agreed, she would make 4 prophecies about his future. Riker thought the proposal was completely absurd. He asked how he was supposed to believe her prophecies. Alyssa cheerfully replied that he had come to meet her because everything written in the letter had been true. The man fell silent because he realized she was right. He admitted to the girl that no sane person would ever dare propose marriage to him. Getting straight to the point, Riker asked Alyssa who she wanted him to get rid of. She gave him a name, Gregory Baker. Riker thought for a few moments before replying that severing ties with the Baker family would be a considerable loss. Still, she seemed to know exactly who she was asking for that favor, considering she knew the rumors. On the other hand, he thought that perhaps he should be interested in accepting that deal. Alyssa was overjoyed to hear that he agreed to her terms. Phew, that's a relief. However, he had no intention of marrying immediately. She asked why not. The man suggested that they become engaged first, since there was no reason to rush. An engagement agreement should be enough to keep Gregory away. Riker also told her not to worry, because he would make sure she received a generous allowance as his future Grand Duchess. What more could she possibly want? Alyssa replied that she trusted him to handle all the arrangements and preparations, and he should know one thing in advance. She was a very ambitious girl. Riker said he would always keep that in mind. Our protagonist declared that she was pleased they had reached such a successful agreement. Then she asked whether he could finally let go of her hand. Apparently, he had completely forgotten about that little detail and had been crushing her tiny hand the whole time. The Grand Duke hesitated for a few moments. At last, he released her hand, and time itself seemed to slow down for an instant. Alyssa said she could hardly wait for their future endeavors together. Riker replied that he felt the same way. Far away, in a distant kingdom, newspapers fluttered through the air. My goodness, what's happening now? A young newspaper boy shouted the latest headlines. Everyone was talking about the breaking news. The Grand Duke had become engaged to a young lady from a northern noble family, yet no one seemed to know who she was. Some even claimed that he had completely fallen in love with her, lost his mind, and all sorts of other rumors. As an engagement gift, he had even given her Chateau Ludern, designed by the architect Brennan Leon. It was such a luxurious estate that it even had its own golden hall. On top of that, it was a strategic fortress located between the imperial capital and the southern region of the empire. That same day, someone was training intensely. Alyssa was drenched in sweat, thinking that all the training in the world would never be enough to make her strong again without mana stones. Just behind her, someone came running. Harry, her older brother, was holding a newspaper. He pointed to an article announcing that Alyssa Lane had been named the Empire's Grand Duchess. The illustration showed only Riker Tessin from behind. Alyssa asked someone whether the rumors had already reached the north. She took the newspaper from Harry's hands, impressed that the Grand Duke had kept his word. What truly shocked her, however, was that the news was only about him, even though she was the main character. Her brother asked what she had been doing so far from the monastery, since she had lied to him by saying she was going there to pray. She admitted to Harry that she had lied because she knew she was under confinement and they would never have allowed her to leave. Looking at the newspaper again, Alyssa tried to change the subject by saying that a new mine had been discovered during an expedition and that investors were now being sought. Harry quickly snatched the newspaper out of his sister's hands. The worried young man told her to stop reading the news. Alyssa replied that he had brought the newspaper specifically for her to read, hadn't he? Harry asked what had happened to his sweet little sister. Then our protagonist heard the sound of someone approaching. One of the butlers arrived with a white horse, announcing that Lady Alyssa's mount was ready. The siblings remained silent for a few moments. The girl was delighted that it hadn't taken long, but Harry revealed that Alyssa had never ridden a horse in her entire life. She happily ran toward the beautiful animal. With the agility of an acrobat, Alyssa leaped onto the horse. The poor horse looked completely confused as well. With a big smile, she confessed to Harry that she had learned how to ride. However, she didn't tell her brother where she had learned those skills. Harry held himself back as he watched his sister gallop away. Suddenly, the horse came to a stop. Alyssa looked to the side because something had caught her attention. She told her brother that apparently someone was looking for him. One of the household butlers came running in panic while calling out Harry's name. The man said that Harry needed to return to the main house immediately. The confused young nobleman asked what had happened. He glanced awkwardly to the side, unsure of how to handle the situation. The butler whispered that he couldn't discuss it there and insisted that Harry accompany him back to the house. The blonde young man apologized to his sister, saying she would have to continue her ride alone, and asked her to stay out of trouble. Alyssa smiled and waved goodbye to her brother. Harry hurried off, leaving the young woman by herself. Alyssa seemed rather pleased despite the unexpected interruption. She urged the horse to continue galloping. The girl took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled. "That's our girl." Woohoo! The horse made a graceful leap. She remembered how grateful she had been to the maids who had treated her broken ankle. Alyssa's body still seemed to remember many of the movements. However, no matter how hard she trained or tried to regain her strength, her physical limits remained painfully obvious. She made a tremendous leap and grabbed onto a very high branch. Our protagonist seemed quite pleased with her landing. Wow! Alyssa really was incredibly skilled. However, the moment she stepped onto the next branch, it began to crack. Oh no! Our protagonist managed to jump away, but fortunately she caught herself on the tree. She sadly remembered what she missed the most ever since returning from the underworld. Oh heavens, her hand slipped. Alyssa fell to the ground with a loud crash. She missed her mana stones terribly. Lying among the fallen leaves, she reflected on how this kind of training was only partially useful. The strength she had gained from the mana stones could never be recovered through physical exercise alone. Suddenly, someone approached. Alyssa looked closely to see who it was. Riker Tessin asked the girl whether everyone in her family was as strange as she was. Our protagonist rolled awkwardly to the side. She looked completely surprised to see the Grand Duke again. The girl asked what he was doing there. Riker extended a hand to help her up and explained that he had come for a business meeting. However, something unusual about the man caught Alyssa's attention. Their fingertips lightly brushed against each other. How cute! Alyssa noticed something that would change her life forever. The Grand Duke's cufflink concealed a special secret. Riker impatiently asked what Alyssa was still standing there for. Without taking his hand, our protagonist quickly got to her feet, stepped away from him, and simply replied that she had just been exercising. He commented that this unusual style of training could be very useful for Tessin's cavalry. At that point, Alyssa asked if they could please change the subject. Riker asked whether he could at least remove the leaves from her hair. But the girl simply stepped back, avoiding his touch as much as possible. Alyssa began moving around in a rather chaotic manner, leaving the man disappointed by her behavior. Finally, he reached toward her hair to remove the leaf that had been bothering him. He gently brushed it away. Riker said that everything was fine now. The Grand Duke noticed Alyssa staring intently at his wrist and asked what she was looking at. She stood on her tiptoes to get a better look, and he asked what she was doing. Suddenly he lost his footing and began to fall. Alyssa fell straight into Riker's arms. Our protagonist thought she must have been mistaken, but now that she was holding his hands, she was certain. Riker asked her to let go of his hand. He wanted to move away from her, but if he pushed her aside, she would surely get hurt. Alyssa mentioned his cufflinks. To the Grand Duke's surprise, the girl asked if she could have them. Our protagonist was certain they were made from mana stones. Riker looked at her without saying a word. The man replied that unfortunately, he couldn't give her those cufflinks. Those jewels were a family heirloom that had been passed down through generations of the Grand Dukes of Tessin. Alyssa asked if that was really true, while the little voice in her head told her to steal them when he wasn't looking. Haha. What a little troublemaker. Then Riker asked the young woman to get off him already. Alyssa apologized, and he brushed the dust off his coat with a few pats. The Grand Duke stood up and explained that although he couldn't give her those particular cufflinks, he was certain there were similar designs, and he would send her one as a gift. Alyssa was absolutely delighted to hear that. He explained that he couldn't promise anything, but he would do his best. The girl was already happy just knowing that similar ones might exist. Our protagonist insisted on accompanying him during his walk, now much happier after learning that mana stones apparently existed in Tessin. Then the girl offered to repay the gift with a prophecy about the future. Riker was completely surprised when she revealed that there would be no snow that winter. Alyssa continued her prophecy, declaring that he would face an unexpected blizzard during the last week of March, lasting into early April. If a blizzard struck at the end of March, many people in the villages would suffer, and he needed to prepare for it. Alyssa graciously explained that this prophecy was a gift and did not count toward their agreement of 4 prophecies per year. The Grand Duke looked at her with a serious expression. The girl's confidence made her prophecy sound completely believable. The man thanked her for the unusual gift and admitted that thanks to her warning, he might be able to reduce the damage the people of Tessin would suffer. Alyssa replied that she was happy to help him. Meanwhile, every servant in the palace silently watched as the two of them arrived. Daisy welcomed the couple. Roderick handed Riker a small ornate box. What could possibly be inside that box? Let's hope it isn't another one of those clocks. The Grand Duke approached Alyssa and said he had something to tell her. One of the butlers informed the nobleman that Lord Felix Lane was waiting for him in the entrance hall of the main house. Alyssa asked whether he intended to reveal that he had come specifically to see her. The Grand Duke informed the butler that he had indeed come there specifically to visit Lady Alyssa. With a piercing gaze, he ordered every servant to leave them alone. Everyone obeyed immediately. The truth was, perhaps no one would have dared defy him. Among the servants, Daisy heard her name being called. Alyssa whispered to the maid, asking her to return her horse to the stables. She nodded. Daisy truly was very kind. Then Riker asked whether Alyssa was finally finished. Suddenly, our girl turned around so quickly, perhaps she had forgotten that the Grand Duke was still standing right behind her. He opened the box, saying that he was pleased to finally present this gift to her. Inside the box, something shimmered softly. Nestled inside was a beautiful choker, accompanied by a matching pair of earrings, all crafted from the purest ruby in the Empire. Our protagonist was utterly amazed. Wow, all of that? For her? He explained that the ruby had once belonged to an important marchioness of Tessin, and had long been inseparable from the county of Everlands. The delicate earrings perfectly matched the necklace and were exquisitely crafted. Riker explained that she should observe the highest standards of etiquette whenever she wore them, as the future Grand Duchess of Everlands. Alyssa declared that she would honor his words. The Grand Duke smiled for the first time and asked whether it really required that much determination. The girl replied that it absolutely did. Wow, was he actually smiling? There's a first time for everything. He noticed that she had an unexpectedly adorable side, though he kept that thought to himself. Then he asked her how much she knew about the current imperial family. Alyssa found it strange that he was testing her like this, and replied that the late emperor had 5 princes, one of whom was Riker Tessin, who had been appointed Grand Duke, as well as 1 imperial princess. Among the imperial children, the second eldest, Luke Tessin, had died in an accident 7 years earlier. The ones who remained were the 3rd prince, Lennox the 4th prince, Stephen, and finally Riker Tessin the 5th prince. Besides them, there was Princess Louise, who ruled over Lirin and was his full sister. From what he had heard, the Grand Duke judged that Alyssa's knowledge was sufficient. She explained that although she might not look like it, she was an avid reader. Riker informed her that he would arrange a tutor for her to learn everything else. Now, regarding her peculiar exercises while standing on a horse's saddle, he thought it would be best if she kept those hidden. Sometime later, Riker bid Alyssa farewell, saying that he looked forward to seeing her at the upcoming ceremony. She told him that she would let him know the color of her dress, so they could match their outfits. Suddenly, he bent down and moved very close to the girl. Wow, they're awfully close. He whispered something into her ear. All right, now I'm really curious. Looking concerned, Alyssa asked whether he was certain about what he was saying. Riker admitted that he was certain because he had seen it with his own eyes. The white horse pawed the ground with one of its hooves. The Grand Duke said he hoped that information would be useful to her. Alyssa watched him leave beneath the setting sun, and before long, he was gone. As she turned to leave, Alyssa thought about how much his visit had caught her by surprise. Still, he seemed to be a much warmer person than she had expected. The moment she turned around, every servant rushed toward her. Everyone wanted to know what the Grand Duke had whispered to her. What a bunch of gossips. While one of the maids asked whether she was all right, another repeatedly demanded to know what the nobleman had whispered. Our protagonist became thoroughly annoyed by everyone's curiosity. Didn't they have anything better to do? How dare they meddle in something that concerned only her? Alyssa shouted for everyone to leave except Daisy. The flames of fury practically surrounded our girl. At last, everyone left, and only Daisy remained, waiting for instructions. She asked whether she should prepare some tea for Alyssa now that her training was finished. Alyssa explained to the maid that she had many things she needed to do, and for that she needed Daisy's help. Then our protagonist instructed the girl to prepare everything for their immediate departure. They were going to Everlands. The memory of the Grand Duke leaning close to her returned like a pleasant dream. So adorable, wasn't it? But even that moment had hidden meaning. Riker had quietly confessed to the girl that her father, Marquis Lane, would be unable to return to the mansion for quite some time. The truth was that Alyssa's father had fallen out of the Emperor's favor after opposing the imperial decree that annulled his only daughter's engagement to Gregory Baker. Because of that, he was now confined within the imperial palace until further notice. Riker also confided that if there was anything Alyssa intended to do, now was the perfect opportunity. With a bright smile, she declared that her first choice was to get out of there. Massive chains descended rapidly. Someone shouted for the gates to be opened for an elegant carriage approaching the castle. Someone hurried down the staircase, asking who had arrived and what all the commotion was about. Harry awkwardly tried to straighten his coat, while Lady Lane reminded her son to be careful as he hurried downstairs. Felix Lane asked his mother whether she knew anything about what was happening. The lady looked rather confused. She replied that she hadn't been informed of anything. She explained that her husband usually notified everyone in advance whenever he was returning because he refused to arrive unless everyone was ready to greet him. Harry suddenly remembered one tiny detail. Where was Alyssa after all? Right, where could she have gone? The three of them stared at one another for a few moments. Suddenly, the entrance hall doors were flung open. The servants had lined up to welcome Marquis Lane home, but he wasn't interested in any of that. He kept shouting only one name, Alyssa. The furious man repeatedly called for his daughter, demanding that she show herself immediately. He shouted at the servants, demanding to know where she was and why she hadn't come to the entrance hall. The Marquis clenched his teeth. How dare she fail to appear to greet her own father? The servants looked completely bewildered by both the Marquis's sudden arrival and his overwhelming fury. Before one of the servants could assist him, the cruel man shoved the young servant aside. What a brute. He grabbed the handle of his daughter's bedroom door, then he threw the door wide open while shouting for her. However, Alyssa's room was dark and completely silent. There wasn't a single sign of the girl. Felix stepped forward, trying to explain that people were already searching for his sister. The Marquis looked at his eldest son in utter disbelief. The only daughter in a household full of people had simply disappeared, and they expected him to believe that no one knew where she was. Suddenly, in the middle of the crowd, someone announced that Alyssa had gone to Everlands. The Marquis demanded to know who had said that. Someone wearing a yellow dress stepped forward through the crowd. It was his wife who revealed Alyssa's supposed whereabouts. Lady Lane answered with a smile that her daughter had gone to Everlands. Sometime later, in a private room, the Marquis asked his wife what had actually happened. His wife confessed that their daughter had left behind a letter, explaining that now that Alyssa had received a title and her own domain, she wanted to visit her new territory. The Marquis exclaimed, "What nonsense is this?" He rudely told his wife that she should have stopped Alyssa from running away. Lady Lane, as sharp as ever, asked how exactly he expected her to have done that. She explained that she could never have stopped Alyssa because she could barely even see her daughter, since both of them had been confined under the Marquis's own orders. The man was stunned by her answer. He asked why his wife, Marcella Lane, was behaving so childishly over something so trivial. The woman simply replied that she was telling him the truth and had no idea what he was talking about. The Marquis remained silent for a while. Lady Lane pointed out that throughout all 17 years of Alyssa's life, she had never once claimed she was incapable of doing something. Sometime earlier, Daisy had arrived carrying a letter. It was the very first time Alyssa had called her mother and asked for a great favor. She needed to escape the mansion, and she needed her mother to buy her some time. Returning to the present, Lady Lane said she was tired and wanted her husband to put an end to the conversation. She told him that their children were not tools for him to use whenever it suited him, and that he should stop treating them that way. The Marquis replied, "That's enough," and declared that he would leave her alone. He firmly stated that as long as she bore the name of a noble house, it was her duty as his wife to serve the interests of the family. As for Alyssa, he would send people to bring her back from Everlands. Before leaving, he informed her that once their daughter returned, she would once again be allowed to walk freely through the palace as she had before. Lady Lane listened as her husband slammed the door behind him. She let out a sigh of relief and hoped she had bought Alyssa enough time. Had she already reached her destination? Far away, somewhere else, two butlers grasped the ornate handles of another palace's great doors. They opened the heavy doors in perfect unison. A line of maids, together with their head maid, welcomed Lady Alyssa. Wow, our protagonist looked absolutely beautiful in that pink and white dress. She seemed amazed by such a warm reception. The head maid introduced herself as Violet and declared that she would serve as Alyssa's personal tutor in imperial etiquette and her new life as the Grand Duchess. Our protagonist thanked her for her kindness, admitting that she had never expected such an extravagant welcome after arriving on such short notice. Petunia explained that the Grand Duke had personally informed them of the importance of Lady Alyssa's arrival. As a result, the young lady's chambers had already been prepared so she could rest after her exhausting journey. She explained that, from that moment onward, Annie would be responsible for attending to Lady Alyssa's every need. The young maid politely asked Alyssa to follow her so she could show her to her room. The two young women exchanged warm smiles, but Daisy remained silent. What could possibly be bothering her? Annie cheerfully explained that everyone had been eagerly awaiting Lady Alyssa's arrival. Everyone had done their very best to ensure the palace would feel comfortable enough for her to truly feel at home. The girl pulled open the large door handle. Finally, she led Alyssa into the elegant room, decorated with delicate white walls and countless ornate details. Our protagonist was deeply impressed. She thought everything was perfect. Annie was delighted that she liked everything and informed her that she would leave her to rest. Alyssa was amazed by it all because this palace had been the final masterpiece of the architect Brennan Lyon. It truly lived up to its legendary reputation. Daisy called out to her mistress, saying that she thought they were supposed to be going to Everlands, but instead, they had come to the imperial capital, a magnificent city filled with impressive buildings, elegantly dressed people walking the streets, and a vibrant atmosphere. Alyssa simply replied that the ceremony would be taking place very soon, so how could they possibly travel all the way to Everlands and return in time? With a sweet smile, she asked Daisy whether she would like to go shopping with her. The maid looked completely bewildered by the invitation. "Come on, Daisy. A little shopping never hurt anyone." Alyssa replied that they deserved to have a little fun since they had made it all the way to the capital. The two of them arrived at an elegant boutique filled with refined fragrances and luxurious perfumes. Alyssa remembered the rumors that Karen's perfumes were exceptionally extravagant, and even the bottles themselves were exquisitely refined. She remembered how her past self could never have imagined being in the imperial capital, let alone inside such an elegant perfume boutique. The girl asked to sample one of the fragrances, and one of the attendants replied that she would prepare a sample for her immediately. The attendant skillfully placed a few drops onto a scented paper strip. Alyssa smelled the perfumed paper. Someone approached, the sound of their shoes clicking against the wooden floor. The girl opened her eyes to see who it was. The red-haired woman introduced herself as Karen, the owner of the perfume boutique. She was a prodigy of the Western Empire. Alyssa knew that, in the future, Karen would become incredibly famous, and her business would flourish. Before long, Karen would become a sensation throughout the empire. Soon, every fragrance trend would be dictated by her. She explained that since Alyssa had been the very first person to try that fragrance, she was curious to know whether the girl liked it. Our protagonist knew that Karen would soon create a famous perfume collection that would captivate the entire empire. Because of that, it would be wise for Alyssa to secure her as an ally. She thought the fragrance was delicate and wonderful. The way its intensity changed according to the wearer's body made the fragrance truly unique, as though it had been carefully crafted specifically for each individual. Karen was delighted that Alyssa had noticed that detail. Alyssa said she was very happy to become friends with someone so talented. Karen replied that it would be a true honor for her. Our protagonist declared that she would purchase an entire bottle of that fragrance. Karen revealed that she would love to invite Alyssa to her estate soon to try more fragrances. Alyssa said she would gladly accept the invitation. The perfumer cursed and said it would be an honor to welcome her. Our protagonist walked through the streets of the imperial capital. Outside on the street, Daisy quietly admitted to Alyssa that she had no idea she knew so much about perfumes. Alyssa replied that she only knew a thing or two. The sweet fragrance remained etched in her memory. She had merely mentioned things that sounded right based on the quality of the perfume she had been offered. After all, people in the capital looked down on anyone who appeared ignorant. Alyssa asked Daisy whether she had sounded convincing. The maid replied that she had sounded like someone who had studied perfumes her entire life. Our protagonist smiled and told the girl they still had several more places to visit. She chose a beautiful yellow dress for the ceremony. In addition, Alyssa picked a lovely pair of matching earrings. Our protagonist chose even more jewelry that perfectly complemented her. She found a beautiful pink fan to complete her look. More and more little gifts. Shopping really was wonderful. That shopping spree left every shopkeeper in the capital delighted, and they could hardly wait for Alyssa's next visit. Daisy was already exhausted. Alyssa asked whether she was tired, but the maid denied it. Our protagonist asked her to hold on just a little longer. When they arrived at a modest house, Alyssa told Daisy that it would be the last place they visited that day. Inside the house, a craftsman was smoothing the sole of a leather shoe. The man asked whether he could help them with anything. Alyssa replied that she had come to commission some embroidery. The man explained that the embroidery shop was on the second floor of the house. He called for a young woman named Jordana, telling her that a customer had arrived. The young woman, dressed elegantly in green and cream, quickly came downstairs. With a warm smile, she invited Alyssa and Daisy to come upstairs and see her workshop. The two waited while Jordana prepared tea for them, apologizing for the mess in her studio. She explained that if she had known customers would be coming that day, she certainly would have cleaned up better. Alyssa assured her that it wasn't a problem and that Jordana's shop looked lovely. She served the tea while thanking Alyssa for the compliment. The shop owner introduced herself as Jordana Pearl, though they could call her Jody. She apologized once again, saying that she might not know all the proper imperial etiquette required to receive someone so important. Alyssa introduced herself and explained that she had heard many compliments about Jordana's embroidery and sewing work, so surely she accepted private commissions, didn't she? Blushing slightly, Jody replied that she wasn't sure she was good enough for people to be spreading rumors about her. Alyssa asked Daisy to hand over the designs. She passed several drawings to Jody and asked whether she could take a look at them. The seamstress asked whether she should follow the designs exactly as they were. She examined the sheets until one mysterious drawing caught her attention. Alyssa asked Daisy to leave the two of them alone for a moment. Jody gripped the papers tightly, crumpling them in her hands. Alyssa explained to the seamstress that only the two of them knew the secret, and that she had gone to great lengths to ensure no one would discover she was there. Alyssa said that Daisy had become very tired, especially without understanding what was going on. Jody gripped a pair of scissors tightly. Oh my god, what was about to happen? Our protagonist asked whether the craftsman downstairs also made women's shoes, because she wanted to reward Daisy for walking around so much. Suddenly, Jody lunged at Alyssa, demanding to know who on earth she really was. Our confident protagonist tossed her fan into the air, saying that she was currently the most famous person in the capital. But before Jody could strike her with the scissors, Alyssa used her fan to deflect the attack. Finally, she revealed that she knew Jordana Pearl belonged to the largest information syndicate in the Empire. Jody asked how Alyssa could possibly be so strong. Our protagonist revealed that she wanted to become her friend. Wow, what a plot twist. That was the symbol of the Krona clan. Jody held her injured hand while listening to Alyssa explain that the clan was led by 6 leaders, including a Grand Master. That fact was common knowledge among the people. However, the seamstress remembered that she had hidden a blade inside a basket. Before she could react, Alyssa began telling the story of 6 farms that had all been burned down simultaneously. Why did that information shock her so much? Jody remembered that incident making headlines in the newspapers. How could Alyssa possibly know that the families who had been attacked were members of the Krona clan's council? Someone was desperately running through a forest. Jordana, still just a child, begged someone to let her go. Her parents had been left behind. Oh no, what was happening? A man, was he the craftsman from the shop downstairs, ran away from the danger, saying it was already too late for them. Jody had to survive. It was the only way she could one day do something about it. The little girl watched her home burst into flames. Suddenly, the fire spread and completely engulfed the estate. What a tragedy. Moments later, everything collapsed. Jody cried endlessly, especially because she knew the fire had left no survivors. However, the body of the family's youngest daughter had never been found. Back in the present, Jordana grabbed a blade hidden inside a basket and ordered Alyssa to shut up. The seamstress demanded that the girl leave immediately. Then she declared that the Krona clan no longer existed. Alyssa firmly replied that would only be true if she continued running away. Those words stunned Jody. How dare Alyssa say something like that? What did she possibly know about their history? Then came the revelation. Our protagonist knew who had betrayed the Krona clan. Alyssa pushed the blade aside with her fan and repeated that she knew the identity of the clan's true traitor. She promised Jordana that she would help her get her revenge. The seamstress asked why she would ever help her. The girl opened her fan and explained that she hoped she and Jordana Pearl could become friends. Alyssa believed that such an alliance would benefit both of them. She stepped closer to the seamstress and explained that publicly everyone believed the Krona clan was ruled by the 6 members of its council. But in reality, there was another council known only to the Grand Master. It was called the Krona Hexagon. Those 6 hidden members were the true traitors of the original clan. Jody asked whether Alyssa was truly telling the truth. Alyssa explained that she would have to discover the truth for herself, because after everything, Jody would become the clan's new Grand Master. Our protagonist advised that it would be wise for Jordana and her family to leave that place as quickly as possible. Otherwise, she might end up in danger before she ever had the chance to take her revenge. Jody asked whether her hiding place had already been discovered. Alyssa realized that quite a bit of time had passed since she had arrived. Our protagonist requested that her commission be completed by spring, assuming Jody survived until then. If she ever needed anything, she could find Alyssa at Chateau Ludern. And just like that, she left. Even though the seamstress still had countless questions. Oh no, what would Jody do now? Was Alyssa simply a crazy woman? Downstairs, Daisy patiently waited for her mistress. Jordana wondered what on earth had just happened. What kind of madness was that? Inside a hidden shelter, 2 twin girls asked whether everything was all right and whether it was finally safe for them to come out. The blonde young woman apologized to the children, explaining that she had taken longer than expected. The 2 girls replied that everything was fine and that they had enjoyed themselves while waiting. She asked Flora, one of the twins, to go call their uncle. Jody told the children that they would soon be setting out on another journey. However, one of them, Amelie, looked very sad. The seamstress noticed immediately and became concerned. She knelt down and gently asked the little girl whether she wanted to stay there instead. Amelie replied that wasn't the reason. If they stayed, they would all be in danger. Jody sadly admitted that they had to move once again, but she promised that this would be the very last time. Amelie brightened up and asked whether, this time, they wouldn't have to leave without saying goodbye to her friends. The blonde young woman promised that they wouldn't. Once everything was over, they would never have to move again. The craftsman working downstairs asked whether Jody had finally made up her mind. He was her Uncle Brandon, the twins' father, the very man who had saved Jody from the fire. Jody admitted that she had hoped he would become the new Grand Master of the clan, but he simply replied that she already knew what he was going to say. He was nothing more than a shoemaker. Jody asked whether he truly believed she was capable of doing it. Her uncle took his niece's hands and told her that she was capable of anything. No matter what decision she made, he wanted her to remember that they would always stand by her side. Those words filled Jordana with happiness. She needed to act quickly because there was a very important commission that had to be finished before spring. Back at Chateau Luderon, Annie walked calmly down the corridor. Another maid announced the arrival of the pink-haired girl. Annie apologized for the interruption but explained that she needed Alyssa's attention for just a moment. Petunia said that the dance lessons had already ended and that she would leave the two of them alone. Alyssa invited Annie to come closer. Annie explained that the invitation to the upcoming ceremony at the palace had arrived. However, surprisingly, another letter had arrived as well. Alyssa looked completely confused. Who could possibly have sent the second letter? Far away from there, at the Imperial Palace, Grand Duke Riker of Tessin was announced before the Emperor. Riker sat across from the monarch and asked whether he had read the request he had submitted. The Emperor asked whether it concerned the reinforcements along the western frontier. The blonde-haired man replied that it was quite a request, especially with such a short deadline. It was Riker's older brother, the current Emperor Leonard Tessin, who asked whether he didn't already have enough soldiers. The Grand Duke declared that the Emperor already knew how limited Tessin's forces were. At that very moment, the northern tribes were running out of food, which would likely drive them to attack the villages. Leonard countered by saying that Tessin already possessed sufficient forces, and sending additional soldiers would create problems with the other noble houses. He explained that although they were brothers, there were certain things even he couldn't do. Riker stated that several recent military movements had appeared highly suspicious. Leonard looked at him without saying another word. He asked his younger brother whether he was absolutely certain about what he was saying. The Grand Duke replied that he had received Roderick's reports. Leonard declared that if Roderick had reported it, then there was a very high chance it was true. The Emperor hesitated for a few moments before speaking. At last, Leonard announced that he would approve his brother's request. The Grand Duke solemnly thanked him. He certainly hoped Riker appreciated it. The Emperor remarked that Riker had no idea how much the other noble houses would be complaining to him over the coming days because of that decision, as though the last few days hadn't already been exhausting enough while everyone prepared for the upcoming ceremony. Because of all the chaos, he and Empress Eleanor had argued terribly and had been sleeping in separate bedrooms for weeks. Riker asked whether Her Majesty was truly that upset. Leonard explained that the preparations had been exhausting for Eleanor as well because the entire capital wanted to know who the future Grand Duchess of Tessin would be, and countless young ladies kept trying to obtain information through the Empress. He declared that it was all Riker's fault. Well, brothers will always be brothers no matter where they are, won't they? The Emperor admitted that it hadn't been easy trying to calm his wife while the two of them continued sleeping in separate rooms. Leonard took the opportunity to ask how the future Grand Duchess of Tessin was doing. However, Riker simply replied that she had not yet officially been appointed. Apparently, Alyssa was adapting well to her new life at Chateau Luderne. The exhausted Emperor replied that wasn't what he had asked. Leonard ordered that the moment Alyssa turned 18, they were to be married immediately. Going back in time, Marquis Lane stood before the Emperor, who explained that he understood the Marquis's concerns regarding the girl's age. Leonard stated that he had never intended for her to marry so soon. However, considering that she was already 17, once she turned 19, it would be the perfect age for marriage. He believed that 2 years would give her enough time to mature, and would also allow the Marquis to prepare himself to give his youngest daughter away in marriage. Didn't that sound like a reasonable plan? The Emperor asked sarcastically why the Marquis looked so gloomy. After all, was the Marquis opposed to joining the imperial family? The man nervously replied that he was honored by the opportunity that had been granted to him. Leonard Tessin said, "Very well, that's what I thought." He could hardly wait for the future. Back in the present, the older brother tried to justify himself by saying that he had been manipulating Marquis Lane. Riker replied that the matter had already been settled and that the imperial family should keep its word. Leonard quickly stood up, slamming his hand on the table, accusing Riker of handing Everlands away on a silver platter. Once Alyssa received Everlands as a gift, not even the Emperor would be able to take it back. Riker said he already knew all of that. Leonard asked whether he was so deeply in love with the girl that he no longer listened to his older brother's advice. The Grand Duke replied that she was someone whose value surpassed even the loss of Everlands.
Wow, how sweet. Our protagonist truly was a very special girl.
He mentioned that Leonard should stop wasting time on that matter and instead deal with the rumors spreading throughout the capital. Some people were even claiming that he had kidnapped Lady Alyssa. Leonard nervously admitted that perhaps it was all because of Riker's terrible reputation, since he himself had only tried to spread romantic stories. Considering the Grand Duke's past, that was rather difficult to believe. Riker remained silent for a few moments, staring at his older brother. The Emperor looked somewhat uneasy. Finally, the Grand Duke decided it was time to leave. But before he departed, Leonard had something he wanted to tell him. He asked his brother to be careful because another moon ritual would soon take place, once winter ended and the new year began. Riker remained silent after hearing Leonard's words. Then he left, leaving the Emperor alone inside the grand office. Leonard leaned his head back. He looked deeply lost in thought. As he walked through the palace, Riker wondered what his brother had to do with that matter. Standing behind one of the pillars, Henrik asked whether the Grand Duke had managed to obtain what he wanted. Riker told the butler that the Emperor had agreed to send additional soldiers to Tessin. Henrik felt relieved because they would now be able to protect the future lady of the house more effectively. The Grand Duke pointed out that the future lady of the house was only a 17-year-old girl. Henrik argued that someone brave enough to send him a letter directly and propose marriage certainly wasn't an ordinary girl. Furthermore, she would turn 18 the following year, just after summer. That would be the perfect age for marriage. Henrik asked whether the Emperor also believed it would be a good idea for them to marry once she turned 18. Riker looked suspiciously at the butler and asked whether he had become one of the Emperor's spies as well. The butler explained that Emperor Leonard had wanted his younger brother to marry for a very long time. Riker replied that there were only 2 years between Alyssa and Josephine, his niece. Henrik pointed out that even Lady Josephine was already engaged, while Riker was falling behind. The Grand Duke ordered him to drop the subject. After all, he had no intention of truly marrying Alyssa. That's shocking. We never saw that coming. Suddenly our girl appeared, calling out to the Grand Duke. The two men were stunned by Alyssa's unexpected arrival. Riker was left speechless when he saw her standing there. Alyssa explained that she had noticed the Tessin crest on the carriage and wondered whether he might be nearby. She said she was happy to see him again after so long. What a beautiful smile she has. Alyssa remained silent as she admired the Grand Duke's elegant carriage. Riker became extremely nervous. Had the girl overheard what he had just said? He had only moments earlier told Henrik that he had no intention of truly marrying Alyssa. She asked whether everything was all right with him. After all, he had suddenly become so quiet. The man let out a sigh of relief and replied that it was nothing. Riker simply explained that he hadn't expected to run into her there. After all, what was the young lady doing at the Imperial Palace? Our protagonist revealed that she had been summoned by the Emperor himself. He had sent her a letter requesting a meeting before the ceremony. The Grand Duke remembered that his brother, the Emperor, had ordered him to have Alyssa sign the marriage contract as soon as possible. He asked whether Alyssa remembered the cufflinks she had liked so much. Riker said that he would give them to her if he found another similar pair. The man revealed that he had discovered another jewel at his residence in the capital. The girl was absolutely thrilled by the Grand Duke's invitation. At last, Alyssa would recover another mana stone, and she would even get to visit the home of her future husband. Sometime later, they arrived at the Tessin residence, an elegant mansion decorated in shades of green and cream. Riker opened a delicate jewelry box, explaining that the family's artisans were delighted to finally receive some new commissions. Alyssa was completely amazed by the brilliance of her gift. Wow! It really must have been something extraordinary. Even the jewelry box itself was adorned with brilliant, refined details. The truth was that our protagonist hadn't expected anything like this, since she never imagined she would find mana stones on the surface. That jewel was the largest mana stone Alyssa had ever seen in her entire life. Oh my! Even the tiny crystals surrounding it were mana stones. The Grand Duke asked whether Alyssa liked the gift. The girl was still far too amazed to answer. She said that apparently the rumors about Tessin were true. Diamonds floated in the streams, and precious gemstones appeared spontaneously on the ground. Alyssa told him that the gift was magnificent. What she truly wanted was to devour it immediately and absorb its magical power. The girl was surprised when Riker revealed that there really was gold dust in a river within the Marsh Valley, though not nearly as much as the rumors claimed. To find it, someone had to know the terrain extremely well because the gold settled at the bottom and required special tools to collect. Alyssa was amazed that the rumors were true, at least to some extent. A place where gold could be found in the rivers, and diamond mines sparkled throughout the mountains. For a land known as the Land of Death, Tessin seemed more like paradise. Our protagonist became incredibly excited about visiting Tessin someday. Soon afterward, servants arrived carrying tea and a selection of light refreshments. While sipping a cup of tea, Riker explained that he would return to Tessin immediately after the ceremony ended. There would be a banquet right after the ceremony, leaving them with no opportunity to talk. Oh, what a shame. Because of that, Riker wanted to say goodbye to her in advance. Alyssa looked completely confused by that statement. She knew the Grand Duke rarely ever left his territory, but why did he have to return so quickly, especially when his fiancée was so close by? She asked whether he would return to the capital soon after arriving back in Tessin. Riker explained that he would most likely return at the end of the following spring, and if they needed to communicate, they could exchange letters. Alyssa wasn't happy about that situation at all.
Yes, girl.
That's not right. The girl asked whether she could accompany him to Tessin. Chateau Luderne was certainly charming, but she would truly love to travel there with him. Riker replied that Alyssa would adapt very well to Chateau Luderne. Once she was completely settled there, she could visit both Everlands and Tessin. Our protagonist grew increasingly irritated. After all, if he didn't want her to come, he could simply say so. She hated it when he danced around the subject. She told him that if he was going to keep acting like that, Alyssa paused for a moment, carefully reconsidering her words. There would be plenty of opportunities to visit Tessin in the future since they would be married. She decided to let it go this time, behaving like a proper noble young lady. Back in her carriage on the way home, Alyssa told her fiancé that they would probably only see each other again on the official day of the ceremony. She informed him that she would be wearing a deep crimson dress, with her hair flowing loose. The Grand Duke replied that he would keep that in mind. At last, he was left standing alone in front of his residence, and Alyssa's carriage departed. Sometime later, Henrik asked Riker what he intended to wear to the banquet. He simply replied that he would wear one of his old ceremonial uniforms. The butler smiled and pointed out that His Grace couldn't possibly wear his usual uniform. However, the man insisted that he could wear the special formal uniform reserved for important occasions. Henrik suggested that the imperial dressmakers would be delighted to create a new outfit specifically for the ceremony, with a touch of color. At last, the day of the ceremony arrived. The imperial palace was truly magnificent. One elegant carriage after another continued arriving. Inside the palace, Riker asked Alyssa whether she was nervous. The girl admitted that she was. He asked whether she remembered the order of the ceremony. Alyssa explained that she remembered the entrance but had forgotten everything after that. Riker Tessin, dressed in a magnificent crimson military uniform, explained that all she had to do was continue walking until she reached the center of the Grand Hall. He looked straight ahead and assured Alyssa that she had nothing to worry about. The Grand Duke told his fiancée that she was the true star of the ceremony. He gently took her hand so the two of them could enter together. How sweet! It truly was a beautiful moment. As the two of them entered, Alyssa overheard countless compliments. People remarked that she had the face of an innocent angel. Others admired the magnificent rubies adorning her jewelry. Some even claimed that Riker had fallen in love at first sight and kidnapped the girl. But seeing them together now, it was obvious that he was completely smitten with her. A few malicious nobles whispered behind their fans. Alyssa and Riker made an incredibly beautiful couple, and their perfectly coordinated outfits made them look even more stunning. Together, they truly were a feast for the eyes. Our protagonist curtsied before the Emperor and the Empress and declared that it was an honor to stand in their presence. Emperor Leonard Tessin said that it was an honor to meet Lady Alyssa Lane, who was currently more famous in the capital than he was, and invited her to step closer. The nobleman tapped her with his sword, formally naming her the Duchess of Everlands and Tessin, and declared that from that day forward she should devote herself to the greater good of the Empire. Alyssa accepted the honor. He believed it truly was a very special day. The Emperor declared that the realm of Everlands now had a new duchess and that his younger brother was finally engaged. Welcome to the imperial family, Alyssa. Everyone applauded as the nobleman congratulated his brother on finding such a wonderful future wife. Well, let's hope Riker doesn't go back on his promise. Leonard motioned to two butlers carrying a large chest and politely asked the couple to accept his wedding gift. Inside the chest was a delicate white veil adorned with exquisite lace. Riker recognized it immediately, although Alyssa did not. It was the imperial veil, used only during the most important ceremonies and passed down from generation to generation. Apparently, Leonard intended to firmly establish Alyssa's place within the imperial family. Leonard Tessin declared that he could hardly wait for the day Lady Alyssa officially joined the imperial family. But were his intentions truly sincere? Inside the Golden Hall, everyone commented that they had never seen the imperial family make such a proactive gesture. The ladies of the court noticed how quickly Alyssa had been accepted as part of the empire. They remarked that they had never imagined the emperor favored his younger brother so much. Even though the marriage had not yet taken place, Alyssa was already being regarded as the Grand Duchess of Tessin. The Empress called out to her brother-in-law. She revealed that she knew he intended to return to Tessin as soon as the ceremony ended. Leonard called his brother over and said that his wife had something she wished to tell him. Riker explained that he couldn't leave the frontier without protection for very long, so he needed to return as quickly as possible. The gentle Empress said she regretted that the two of them would be separated for so long just before their wedding. So, why not take Alyssa directly to Tessin? Riker asked what she meant by that suggestion. The Emperor thought his wife's idea was splendid. Although it would be a long journey, if the two of them traveled together, it wouldn't be lonely. The assembled subjects applauded their Majesty's brilliant idea. Riker glanced around, trying to avoid everyone's attention. The ladies of the court considered it a romantic tragedy for the couple to be separated just before the imperial wedding. Alyssa also looked around to see who was speaking. Our protagonist thought everyone was making far too much of a fuss. The nobles gathered inside the Golden Hall seemed to support the Emperor and Empress's proposal without giving much thought to what Riker and Alyssa themselves actually wanted. The young couple remained silent while listening to the applause of people who didn't even know them. The Grand Duke realized he had no choice. Finally, he turned toward Alyssa so they could leave together. He asked Alyssa, his beloved fiancée, whether she would like to accompany him on his journey back to Tessin. Wow, our girl was completely surprised. With a graceful curtsy, the girl replied that it would be an honor to accompany him on the journey home. The emperor and empress applauded once again, and all the assembled subjects celebrated along with them. And that was how Lady Alyssa Lane's departure for the kingdom of Tessin was officially decided. Everyone was delighted by the announcement. Sometime later, the sound of horses galloping echoed loudly. Several royal guards raced after Lady Alyssa, calling out her name. Meanwhile, she galloped far ahead of them. Yes, girl, a true Amazon. One of the guards called Roderick an idiot because they had been ordered to treat her with the utmost care, knowing she was the only daughter born into House Lane in 200 years. Only a few hours earlier, they had all welcomed her to Tessin and found Alyssa gently petting her horse. The men informed her that they had prepared a carriage for her, but our girl was full of surprises. They had imagined Alyssa as a fragile young lady who had never lifted anything heavier than a spoon. Instead of taking the carriage, she asked whether she could go for a ride on horseback. How could such a delicate lady ride better than the imperial cavalry? Roderick asked how he could possibly have guessed she would be so skilled. He was terrified. They had to bring her back immediately. Their imperial horses galloped as fast as they could, but it still didn't seem fast enough. Roderick ordered one of the other guards to summon Riker immediately. Oh no! Lady Alyssa had ridden straight into the dark forest. Oh my god! Is she okay? Roderick warned one of the fair-haired guards that the two of them had to do everything possible to catch up with her, because the dark forest lay beyond Tessin's borders. He urged his horse to run even faster. Every second counted. However, the sound of Alyssa's horse's hooves was already beginning to fade into the darkness. Even so, in the distance, Roderick managed to spot a figure that seemed to be the fugitives. At last, he had found Lady Alyssa and her white horse. He quickly approached her, urgently asking her to return because the forest was extremely dangerous. Roderick and the other guard called out to the Duchess, but she remained silent. He approached the girl who stood frozen beside her horse. What was happening? From the expression in the great white stallion's eyes, they could make out the silhouette of a massive predator. Oh no! The beast stepped on a branch, snapping it with a loud crack. That sound seemed strangely familiar. The horse was badly startled and reared up. Roderick bravely drew his sword. That's it. Go teach them a lesson, boys. The fair-haired knight lowered his spear and told Alyssa to stay away from the danger. Roderick and he would handle the fight. However, to everyone's surprise, those wolves were no ordinary beasts. They were the very same cruel stone wolves that had tormented Alyssa in the underworld. Roderick looked extremely tense as he faced the unexpected battle, and a bead of sweat rolled down his face. The noble knight launched the first attack. The two men charged straight at the stone wolves. Wow! Now that's some action. Get them, boys. Roderick tried to strike the beasts with his sword. The other young knight joined the battle. He thrust his spear into one of the wolves. The blade created a crack in the stone, and a gentle golden light began to shine. However, the knight tried to pull the weapon free without success. He finally realized that his spear was stuck. Roderick noticed that his companion might be in serious danger. The stone beasts began surrounding the fair-haired knight. Oh no! I hope everything turns out all right. Where were the reinforcements? He tried to defend himself from one of the wolf's attacks, but with a powerful swipe of its paw, the beast knocked his spear away before he could react. His spear flew through the air. It finally landed at Alyssa's feet, well away from the battle. The young knight shouted for Lady Alyssa to protect herself. Help! She noticed that the spear was a well-crafted, high-quality weapon. As one of the wolves approached from behind her, our protagonist politely asked whether she could borrow the spear for just a few seconds. The beast opened its massive jaws to attack Alyssa. The blades forged in the capital were made from the finest silver. The fair-haired guard warned Alyssa about the incoming attack, but before anything could happen, she was already gone. To everyone's astonishment, Alyssa performed an acrobatic leap over the stone wolf. Then she landed squarely on top of its snout. That's it, girl. She explained to the men that the wolves were made of stone, making it impossible to cut straight through them. Careless attacks would only damage their weapons. Leaping once again, Alyssa explained that they should strike other parts of the creatures instead. That way they would succeed. The enormous beast opened its mouth, revealing its terrifying razor-sharp fangs. Alyssa used the spear exactly as she had explained. Her strike created another crack, glowing with brilliant golden light. Our protagonist landed gracefully on the ground, looking quite pleased with herself. She asked the guards to gather the black stones once the battle was over. Roderick asked, for heaven's sake, what she was talking about. Meanwhile, even more creatures came charging toward them. Alyssa explained that stone wolves, just like real wolves, lived in large packs. The two knightly guards prepared themselves for the counterattack. The girl reminded them that Daisy was waiting for her, so they had better finish everything quickly. The beasts charged directly at the humans. Roderick attacked one of the creatures again, this time much wiser. He skillfully wielded his sword. The fair-haired knight aimed directly at one of the glowing cracks in the stone. As Alyssa struck another stone wolf, she felt relieved by how quickly the soldiers had learned. Of course, men trained in Tessin would naturally be highly skilled. Another stone wolf leaped toward her. Oh no, not again. Alyssa believed she would soon eliminate every last one of them, thanks to the many years she had spent training in the underworld. Unlike the others, this beast aimed directly for her spear. Using its massive paw, it snapped the weapon in half. Wow! Now Alyssa was genuinely worried. Apparently the wolves were capable of learning as well. One half of the broken spear flew high into the air. But before all hope was lost, a new warrior joined the battle. The skilled man hurled an axe at incredible speed. The impact struck one of the stone beasts. Alyssa watched in shock as the creature split cleanly in two. The heavy axe landed right beside her. Amid the shower of falling stones, Alyssa discovered the identity of the warrior. Riker Tessin had come to save her. He was breathing heavily from the effort. Wow, that was exactly the twist we had been waiting for. He immediately grabbed her by the shoulders. The Grand Duke asked whether she was all right, but she only stared at him, completely mesmerized. With a smile, Alyssa said she was fine and asked whether there were any more of them. Then she pointed at the large pile of stones left behind by the wolves. Riker said he was relieved that she wasn't hurt, and promised he would tell her more about the forest later. He turned toward Roderick and Oliver, the fair-haired young man. The two immediately introduced themselves, even though they were exhausted from the battle. The Grand Duke demanded to know how the two of them had failed to protect a simple young girl. Roderick was terrified, but Riker said he wouldn't blame them for the Grand Duchess running into the forest. He also ordered everyone to keep absolutely everything they had witnessed there a complete secret. Riker instructed them to clean up the area, return to the castle, and take every single one of the stones with them. A few days later, Alyssa was sitting in her room while Daisy brushed her hair. Our protagonist had mistakenly believed she would be staying in the same castle as Riker, but that wasn't what he had planned. The man ordered her to stay in a smaller, more secure castle located within his estate. Daisy explained that the entire castle would belong to Alyssa once they were married, so she should get used to living there. Alyssa complained that Daisy should be on her side and agree with her. The girl pointed out that it had already been a month since they had arrived in Tessin, yet ever since then she hadn't seen Riker even once. The only thing left for her to deal with was the endless line of carriages arriving at the palace, filled with desperate nobles hoping to catch a glimpse of the Grand Duke's fiancée. One of the butlers announced the arrival of House Greitz. The men quickly stood up to head toward a meeting. The butler led them into the reception room. However, one of the guests decided to slip away. Oh my! Who could it be? The man quietly separated himself from the others without anyone noticing. He hurried down the corridor. He noted that sneaking inside had been the hardest part, and from that point onward, his mission would be much easier. He was a first-class assassin from the Gregan clan. The spy remembered being told that the girl was nothing more than a naive young lady from the Northern Kingdom, and that the palace's internal security was a complete mess. He reached inside his coat, preparing to draw an ornate dagger. To him, this was the perfect opportunity to portray the lord of the castle as a heretic. Suddenly, he realized he was no longer alone. A strange presence filled the air. He quickly turned around to see who had arrived. Before he could react, he was struck. The assassin spy collapsed onto the floor and was no longer a threat. Alyssa picked up the small weapon he had been carrying and casually remarked that they were receiving far too many visitors. Night fell over Tessin, and the smaller palace was peaceful and silent. A window quietly opened under the cover of darkness. Oh no! A mysterious figure slipped into one of the luxurious bedrooms. Who could it be? Alyssa slept peacefully, completely unaware that a stranger was approaching. The sinister spy watched her closely, confirming that she was indeed his target. He slowly raised a sharp blade above his head, but before anything could happen, Alyssa opened her eyes. The spy was utterly startled. The spear was knocked out of his hand. The dagger spun wildly through the bedroom. Our skilled protagonist effortlessly caught the weapon and asked whether he knew how many nighttime visitors she had received so far. She turned as she climbed out of bed, explaining that she didn't mind visitors. Alyssa asked whether it was really necessary to wake her up for something like this. Our girl even had a sense of humor in the most dangerous situations. The spy looked thoroughly confused, but he still managed to draw another blade he had hidden. He narrowed his eyes and asked whether Alyssa truly intended to make things difficult. The man admitted that he had been wondering why none of his previous spies had ever returned. After all, who would have guessed that the Grand Duchess was a monster? Outside, someone climbed onto the balcony. Two mysterious figures quietly approached without the masked man noticing. The ruthless assassin asked Alyssa whether she knew how many elite assassins he had been forced to hire just to deal with her. He declared that she wouldn't stand a chance this time. But before he could make his move, someone attacked him. A mysterious figure stood behind him. Alyssa looked slightly startled. After all, who were these new visitors? One of them said that fortunately, they had arrived at exactly the right moment that night. The young woman removed her mask. It was Jordana Pearl, the seamstress in disguise, who had become the Grand Master of the Chroma clan. She cheerfully announced that she had come to deliver the embroidery Alyssa had commissioned some time ago. Wow, great news! Alyssa was delighted to see Jody again. She ran her fingers over the fabric. The embroidery was incredibly refined and elegant. Our protagonist said the material was perfect. It looked exactly as she had imagined, and she was glad she had chosen Jody for the commission. Alyssa praised her friend's work as she placed it on the table. Jody was thrilled that Alyssa was pleased with the result. The clan master took the opportunity to ask whether Alyssa wanted her and her men to deal with that filthy spy. The man, still kneeling on the floor, asked whether they truly believed they could get rid of every last one of them. Alyssa admitted that she had no idea how many members his clan had. Jordana ordered one of her men to silence him. Alyssa then asked who had hired him. The spy scoffed and asked whether she honestly believed he would reveal his client. He would never disclose any information about those who hired him. Without wasting any more time, Jody revealed that it was House Greitz. She had learned that the Baron was determined to make his daughter, Lady Greitz, the next Grand Duchess. The spies they had sent carried every kind of weapon, from ornate blades to ordinary daggers. Jody sighed and said he would never succeed. He would be better off abandoning the assignment, because apparently the Greitz family was utterly incompetent. Alyssa felt incredibly proud of Jody. She truly had become a great master of the Chroma clan. The spy was horrified to hear the name of the secret clan spoken aloud. How could such a young girl have become its master after everything that had happened? Alyssa declared that Jody had done an excellent job. Then she stood up to deliver one final message. As for her unexpected visitor, our protagonist said that his employer should deal with him personally. The following day at Tessen's main castle, inside the study, a warm fire crackled in the fireplace. Riker asked whether Alyssa had eliminated all of the intruders. He looked at her while she quietly sipped her tea. She replied that she hadn't taken any action against the visitors. The Grand Duke said that was good news. He would assign a team to dispose of the unwanted guests. That way, no evidence of the unexpected visitors would remain. Riker explained that, depending on how serious the situation became, Alyssa was free to act however she deemed necessary. However, he asked her not to bury anyone in the ground because that might create even more problems for her in the future. The girl was stunned by her fiancé's words. She asked whether that was all he had to say. Didn't he even want to ask whether she was all right or anything like that? The man simply replied that the gifts he had given her had attracted the attention of many people. Because of that, he unfortunately expected incidents like the previous night's attack to happen again. He also took the opportunity to inform her that he would reinforce the security at Chateau des Lilacs, the smaller castle where Alyssa lived. At last, she was beginning to understand him. For someone like Riker, dangerous situations like those seemed perfectly normal. They were practically part of his daily life. The Grand Duke asked whether she had any other questions or requests. Alyssa assumed that he had spent his entire life surrounded by danger, so to him it was only natural that his fiancée would eventually become involved as well. The girl replied that everything was fine and that he could continue doing things however he wished. However, she had one last thing to say. Alyssa revealed that she had waited patiently for him. Now that she was always left alone, their enemies would probably assume she was an easy target. So, from that day forward, she wanted them to start acting more in accordance with the agreement they had made. A new day dawned at Chateau des Lilacs. Oh no, wait, the castle was on fire. Alyssa stretched lazily in bed while complaining about all the noise people were making. Apparently our girl had no idea what was happening outside. Then she heard someone knocking on her door. Annie and Daisy stood outside, almost completely covered in smoke. They urgently told Alyssa that they had to leave immediately. Alyssa was completely shocked when she heard that the Emerald Tower was engulfed in flames. The maids quickly helped her cover her face, so she wouldn't breathe in the smoke. Our protagonist had considered the possibility of an invasion, but she had never imagined her own castle catching fire. Outside, one of the guards was already waiting with the carriage prepared. Alyssa remarked that she thought only one of the towers was burning. The guard explained that the fire was spreading far too quickly. She needed to head to the main castle immediately. She declared that it was time to leave. Let's go at once. Inside the carriage were our protagonist and her two most trusted maids, Daisy and Annie. Suddenly they heard the horses neigh, and the carriage came to an abrupt stop. Right ahead of them, two figures dressed in black were kneeling on the road. The guard climbed down from the carriage and ordered the two strangers to identify themselves immediately. Look, it was Jody. She told the guard that they were Alyssa's allies and asked him to deliver a message to her. Alyssa quickly stepped out of the carriage, even though Annie begged her to stay inside. She instructed the guard to remain on alert. Turning to everyone else, she asked them to wait for a moment. Jody revealed to Alyssa that House Corals was responsible for setting her palace on fire. She and her clan had rushed there as soon as they detected the attack, but this time they had arrived too late. Alyssa carefully considered her friend's words. Apparently, the Corals family wanted to eliminate her for one specific reason. They wanted their second daughter, Amber Corallis, to be named as the next candidate to become Grand Duchess. Since Tessen was such a harsh land, it was easy for accidents to happen. Our protagonist remained silent for a few moments. Then Alyssa announced that she had a new mission for Jordana Pearl and her clan. She wanted the clan master to investigate the 6 major noble families closest to the imperial family: Greitz, Corals, Geronimos, Strass, Moreau, and Landfell. Money would not be an issue. Jody replied that she wouldn't treat it as a job. Instead, she would do it as a favor for a dear friend and an important ally. In response, Alyssa offered her a pouch filled with freshwater pearls as payment. There were around 15 pearls inside, worth approximately 30,000 gold coins. The girl said that the little gift should help cover the cost of the mission. Far away from there, inside the study of the main castle, someone reported that, fortunately, the fire had been extinguished quickly. Henrik explained that only the palace's outer walls had suffered significant damage. Overall, however, the losses had been minimal. Riker Tessin thanked him for the report and instructed him to announce that the fire had been accidental, so as not to attract unnecessary attention. In addition, the troops were to capture those responsible and establish measures to ensure such an incident never happened again. Henrik bowed politely and informed him that Lady Alyssa had arrived at the main castle. It would be an excellent opportunity for the two of them to spend some time together. However, Riker remained silent. A magnificent and lavish dinner had been served. Henrik continued insisting that the Grand Duke allow Lady Alyssa to stay in the main castle for her own safety. Riker appeared increasingly irritated by everyone's persistence. Alyssa finally arrived at the dining table and wondered what the men had been arguing about. The Grand Duke then turned his attention toward her. He asked whether she would like to stay at the main castle for a while. At that very moment, countless workers were busy restoring her own palace. Alyssa was delighted by the invitation and accepted immediately. However, Riker explained that she would be staying in one of the towers together with her maids. That comment left our protagonist thoroughly annoyed. He went on to explain that she would not be allowed access to the rest of the castle. For her own safety, she was not to leave her tower. That sounded strangely familiar. The maid was clearly upset. How could he go to such lengths just to avoid his own fiancé? Alyssa asked whether she wasn't even allowed to take a walk. Riker simply replied that she couldn't, even if she wanted to. My goodness, what exactly did he mean by that? Finally, he stood up from the table, explaining that he had several matters that required his attention. The Grand Duke said he was relieved that she hadn't been injured and that it would be a good idea for her to get some rest after everything she had been through. Alyssa called out to her fiancé. He merely turned around briefly to remind her to lock her door before going to sleep. The girl was left speechless by that response. She felt disappointed that she had finally reached the main castle and still wasn't allowed to enjoy herself. His words lingered in her mind. Our protagonist remarked to her maid that her fiancé always said the strangest things imaginable. The woman replied that he truly was a very strange man. Several hours later, inside the castle study, a few crimson drops fell onto the paper Riker had been writing on, causing him to stop immediately. The man coughed painfully and even more blood splattered in front of him. Suddenly, he became violently ill. Then Riker collapsed heavily onto the floor. Oh no, was he all right? Out of nowhere, a sinister energy seemed to begin manifesting itself. Outside the room, Henrik heard a heavy thud. The Grand Duke lay on the floor, struggling desperately to breathe. He heard the butler knocking repeatedly on the door, calling his name. Riker urgently begged Henrik to stay outside. Henrik insisted that if the Grand Duke needed help, he should call for him immediately. Riker slowly tried to stand up. He still looked incredibly weak. What was happening to Riker? Red stains suddenly appeared. Riker was struggling to breathe. What was wrong with him? Contrary to what anyone would expect, his body began healing rapidly. The Grand Duke tried to stand, still completely disoriented. He knew he had to return to his chambers immediately. He staggered through the vast, empty corridors, cursing his own curse. The origin of that pain was ancient, passed down through every generation of the Grand Dukes of Tessin. Many of them had tried in vain to rid themselves of the curse by summoning physicians and creating medicines. Some even recited prayers day after day. Others, in their desperation, turned those prayers into curses. Some rulers, unable to endure their agony any longer, destroyed everything around them, only to ultimately destroy themselves. In the end, none of those methods truly worked. The pain was so intense that the Grand Dukes became completely paralyzed. Whenever the red moon appeared, the period of pain and suffering began all over again. Not even the deadliest poisons or the most powerful healing tonics had any effect. Taking any kind of medicine was completely useless. The curse was inherited by every descendant, and Riker deeply resented his father for passing that pain on to him. If the former emperor had changed his fate, would he have found relief? It was a divine curse. An emperor without heirs had placed Riker upon the throne as the Grand Duke of Tessin, condemning him to a lifetime of agony. He fell silent as memories of the past resurfaced. Riker wondered whether he should annihilate them all. He knew he would have to endure that pain for at least another 10 days, until the red moon disappeared. The man staggered through the corridor, talking to himself. At last, morning arrived beneath a gentle rainfall. Alyssa removed her cloth hat, while Daisy wiped the rainwater from her forehead. Roderick welcomed the Grand Duchess. The girl asked whether the Grand Duke was still asleep. Looking rather embarrassed, the butler asked Alyssa to let the man rest because he wasn't feeling well. Alyssa asked what the physician had said. Roderick explained that the doctor had already left. She became worried. Were his symptoms really that severe? The butler explained that his grace had been in terrible condition and had finally fallen into a deep sleep. The man tried to explain that the Grand Duke rarely became ill, and because of that, he disliked receiving visitors while in such a state. Alyssa assumed that he was simply a very sensitive man whenever he became sick. She asked Roderick how long Riker had been asleep. The butler replied that it hadn't been very long. Alyssa explained that both she and her maids had gotten soaked in the rain and asked whether they could rest there for a little while. Roderick replied that he would never allow the ladies to leave in such a condition and assured them they were welcome to rest there. Alyssa declared that while her maids rested, she would go check on Riker. She was the Grand Duchess. She should be able to do as she pleased. Riker Tessin was regarded as a demon because he always emerged unscathed from the fiercest battles. How could a man like him possibly fall ill? Besides, our protagonist had noticed Roderick's rather strange behavior. She explained that she preferred to go alone. She only wanted to make sure he was all right, and afterwards she would let him continue resting. Roderick replied that he wouldn't stand in her way and merely offered to escort her there. Inside his room, Riker was sleeping deeply. There wasn't a single servant or nurse watching over him. There wasn't even a guard standing outside his door. How outrageous! Someone should have been there protecting him. Alyssa approached him, wondering whether he always became so vulnerable whenever he was sick. She noticed how heavily Riker was sweating and how labored his breathing had become. Our protagonist couldn't understand what was wrong with her fiancé. She picked up a handkerchief. The girl gently wiped the sweat from his forehead, reflecting on the Grand Duke's vulnerable side. Oh no, he was burning with fever. Alyssa suddenly remembered something extremely important. During their very first meeting, he had become terribly ill, and she hadn't been able to help him. Riker had looked utterly desperate, as though he had been completely lost. But she remembered how calm he had become the moment she held his hand. If his pain lessened whenever someone held his hand, why didn't he simply keep someone by his side? A short while later, Alyssa returned to the main hall. Roderick asked whether Lady Alyssa was already leaving. She explained that she would return early the next morning to visit the Grand Duke again. The butler looked genuinely surprised by that statement. Come on, let the girl visit her fiancé. The night sky was overcast, with only a handful of stars visible. Inside her room, Alyssa slept peacefully. Suddenly, someone slowly opened the door. Oh my God! The Grand Duke quietly entered the young woman's chambers. Alyssa appeared to be dreaming. Riker gazed at her with deep anguish. He looked utterly exhausted. Our protagonist continued sleeping peacefully until she opened her eyes as she felt the weight of the Grand Duke's hand. To our surprise, he simply begged her to forgive him. He leaned closer to her, pleading with her not to be afraid. With a distraught look in his eyes, Riker begged Alyssa to hold his hand. Alyssa woke up with a start. What was happening? Riker repeated that she must not let go of his hand. The girl was completely stunned and didn't know what to say. Riker once again begged her to forgive him. Suddenly, the Grand Duke collapsed unconscious on top of Alyssa. The girl could barely support him in her arms. Poor thing, he must have been in terrible pain. Our protagonist tried calling his name, but the Grand Duke didn't respond at all. In the silence of the room, Alyssa could hear the gentle beating of his heart. Early the next morning, little birds were singing outside. Riker Tessin woke up feeling completely refreshed. He no longer felt any pain, not even the slightest headache. He hadn't experienced such peace since he was 14 years old. The Grand Duke looked to the side and saw his fiancée sleeping peacefully. The truth was, he couldn't remember how he had ended up there. Had Roderick carried him there? The fire crackled softly in the fireplace before him. Riker remained silent for a few moments. He had discovered back in the forest that holding Alyssa's hand made his pain disappear. He never would have imagined that a girl like her could put an end to such unbearable torment with nothing more than the touch of her hand. As he gently caressed her cheek, Riker thought that Alyssa truly must be the savior heaven had sent to him. She slowly began to wake up. He quickly pulled his hand away. Alyssa woke up, rubbing her eyes after sleeping for so long. The girl yawned, only vaguely remembering what had happened the previous night. Then she noticed that he had let go of her hand. How dare he? Suddenly, she heard Riker say that letting go of their hands for a few moments wouldn't hurt. With a gentle smile, he asked whether she had slept well. Alyssa was still a little surprised and asked whether he was feeling better. The Grand Duke took her hand and declared that he should be the one asking whether she was all right. Oh my goodness, what a beautiful moment. Riker asked whether she had slept well. Our protagonist answered with a bright smile that she had. She had noticed a remarkable change in him as well. She wondered what could possibly have caused such a dramatic change in his behavior. Could it be that he was acting so sweet simply because they were holding hands? Hee hee hee. Riker admitted that he knew he must seem very strange to her. However, Alyssa shook her head. Our protagonist told him that he didn't seem strange at all. Still, she had to admit that she was curious. Alyssa truly wanted to know what had happened. Riker's expression suddenly grew sorrowful. He asked her not to tell anyone what he was about to reveal. The girl listened attentively as he explained that the root of the problem remained a mystery, but it bound him like heavy chains. Oh my goodness. They're holding hands. That's so adorable. Riker revealed that he could not survive outside Tessin. Alyssa asked how he had managed to leave Tessin on the day they met in the forest. He reminded her of the terrible condition he had been in because that was exactly what happened whenever he traveled too far from his territory. That day, the pain had actually been relatively mild. The man explained that the true agony came during this particular period. Alyssa asked what he meant. Riker told her about the red moon and explained that he experienced such unbearable pain that he often felt he wouldn't survive it. He described countless different kinds of suffering, ranging from the mildest to the most excruciating. During that time, every one of those afflictions descended upon him. He sadly admitted that no physician could help him while he was in that condition. Alyssa looked deeply worried about her fiancé. To her surprise, Riker told her that she didn't need to make such a sad face because he had finally found someone extraordinary who could help him endure the pain. How adorable! Alyssa asked who he was talking about. He simply looked at her with a gentle smile. The Grand Duke truly had a sweet side. The girl asked whether he was talking about her. Riker then decided to make Alyssa an offer, just as she had once made one to him. Once again, they're holding hands. Oh my goodness! They make such a wonderful couple. She eagerly asked what his proposal was. Riker asked her to always hold his hand whenever he was in Tessin. In return, he would grant her any gift she desired, as long as it didn't involve the Imperial family. The Grand Duke explained that there would be no limit to the value of the gift. However, he truly didn't want to create problems involving his family. Alyssa asked whether she really could request absolutely anything. She wondered whether she could ask for something every single time they held hands, or whether it was just a one-time offer. Riker laughed at her question. He suggested that they simply make the reward proportional to the size of whatever she requested. Our protagonist was still amazed that all he had asked for was for her to hold his hand. Riker said that if she was fine with it, then their agreement would already be in effect. Since they were already holding hands, she could ask for whatever she wanted. Alyssa asked if she could have the aquamarine jewelry kept at Des Lilac's palace. He asked if that was all. If all of her requests were like that, he could probably give her a gift every time they held hands. Riker explained that if she wanted other jewels, he could simply transfer ownership of them to her. She was astonished. Was holding his hand really that valuable? Finally, he revealed that he had one last condition. Alyssa sighed, figuring nothing would ever be that easy, and asked what it was. The Grand Duke declared that no one could ever discover that holding her hand temporarily relieved his pain, especially the Imperial family. Alyssa was confused. After all, they were his legitimate relatives. He let go of her hand and revealed that if they found out, they would rush their marriage. Riker wanted their agreement to last for a very long time. However, our protagonist was confused by his words. What did he mean by that? The man remained silent for a few moments. With a dark and troubled expression, he said that they could never get married. Alyssa was utterly confused. What kind of condition was that? She remembered very well that the night before, he had held her hand with all his strength, on the verge of tears, and now he was telling her that they could never get married? What kind of game was the Grand Duke playing? Our protagonist wondered if she was nothing more than a painkiller to him. If that was the case, then wouldn't it only be right for them to get married? That condition left Alyssa extremely frustrated. Maybe next time she held his hand, she should ask for one of his castles. That's right, girl. Either way, she had been rejected in the most catastrophic way possible. She had even woken up in the middle of the night just to hold his hand, and all she got in return was his rejection? How unfair. Worst of all, it wasn't the first time Riker had rejected her. Back in the forest, he had also refused her marriage proposal. She felt deeply hurt, thinking that he had only been using her. Alyssa stomped the ground with all her strength. She refused to let herself be used like that. Riker really was an ungrateful man. Annie believed that the Grand Duke truly had special feelings for Lady Alyssa. After all, he had always isolated himself, and now he did everything he could to spend the day with her. Oh no, Annie really had no idea what was going on. The girl also said that if Alyssa visited him again that day, everyone in the palace would know. However, our protagonist was far too frustrated, and on top of that, she had to hear rumors claiming that the Grand Duke couldn't bear being away from her because it caused him pain. She interrupted Annie, saying that the girl was mistaken. The two maids immediately fell silent. Annie deeply regretted speaking without thinking. The truth was that she was simply happy that the two of them were getting along so well. A little while later, the three girls were walking through the rain. Daisy said that Annie really had spoken too hastily, but the truth was that Daisy was also happy that the Grand Duke only allowed Alyssa to take care of him. The maid revealed that rumors were spreading that Lady Alyssa was the one who was more deeply in love with him, since she was usually the one who went to visit him. What a bunch of gossips. Our protagonist was intrigued by that information. Annie firmly insisted that Lady Alyssa shouldn't pay any attention to those people. After all, they didn't know anything. The girl looked up at the sky, reflecting on what they had just told her. Alyssa had actually considered giving up on visiting him, but now she wanted the rumors about how close they were to spread even further. That way, everyone would think he was deeply in love with her. It was the only way to satisfy her anger. Someone knocked on the door to Riker's chambers. With a bored expression, Alyssa announced her arrival and called out to him. But Riker was in a strange position. Oh no, what was it this time? The Grand Duke looked absolutely terrible, struggling to breathe. Our protagonist rushed to his bedside, apologizing for taking so long to come. The man could do nothing but groan from the overwhelming pain. She asked him what had happened. After all, he himself had said that he would be fine for a while. Alyssa gently stroked his hair. With great effort, Riker said that he really could stay fine for a certain amount of time. Alyssa scolded herself, saying that she would never again be so petty toward a sick man. She asked if he felt better whenever she touched him. He explained that the sharp pain disappeared whenever Alyssa touched him. She asked what he meant. Our protagonist touched his head, asking if touching him there would make the pain in that area go away. The man let out a soft laugh and explained that simply holding hands was enough. Alyssa then asked if she should remove her hand from his forehead. Riker reached for her delicate hand and intertwined their fingers. He pleaded with her to keep her hand there. She was very surprised by his plea. Alyssa was genuinely moved seeing him so desperate. Perhaps her anger had faded without her even realizing it. She asked how long it would take for the pain to return. Riker replied that he would be fine as long as he was holding her hand. Despite everything, it was very sweet. The Grand Duke explained that as soon as she let go of his hand, the pain would gradually return until it became as agonizing as before. Alyssa asked why he had never told her that the pain came back as soon as she let go of him. Riker declared that he was simply grateful for the brief moments when the pain stopped. The more she thought about it, the sadder she became. To Alyssa, it was tragic to possess such a powerful body yet suffer through every red moon. Riker asked why she was looking at him like that. The girl held his hand more tightly and confessed that she felt sorry for his misfortune. Riker said that, in that case, would she stay with him while mourning his condition? Alyssa replied that she would stay with him no matter what happened. The Grand Duke remarked that Chateau Luderne was very far from there, wasn't it? To our surprise, he handed her a golden key. Alyssa asked what the key was for. Riker revealed that it was the key to the Grand Duchess's chambers. He told her to show the key to Henrik, and he would take her there. The Grand Duke explained that although the chambers were on the opposite side of the castle, they were still much closer than Chateau Luderne. Alyssa was amazed. According to her memories, none of the Grand Duke's wives had ever set foot in those chambers. Not a single one. Because of that, the future Grand Duchess of Tessen's chambers had remained untouched and had become famous. There were even rumors that the Grand Duke had another woman in his heart, which might have been why he never allowed the others to sleep there. But now, that entire wing of the castle belonged to Alyssa. Our girl really was very special. Our protagonist seemed deeply touched by the Grand Duke's gesture. His nobility was like golden roses. She remembered hearing Riker say that he entrusted himself to her. Wow, how sweet. Back in the Grand Duke's chambers, Alyssa asked him why the castle was so enormous. Then Riker revealed that there was a secret passage connecting his room to the Grand Duchess's chambers. From then on, she would be free to use that passage whenever she wished. Our protagonist, both exhausted and annoyed, asked why he was only telling her that now. Haha, poor Alyssa. Sometime later, Alyssa realized it was the 4th day of the Red Moon cycle, while Riker gently touched her hair. Alyssa asked if it always lasted 10 days, and he confirmed that it did. Riker called to the girl and she looked at him. The man asked why she had asked for his help braiding her hair. Alyssa explained that it was simply more convenient that way. Even so, he thought he was terrible at it. Riker explained that it would be fine if she let go of his hand for a few moments. Alyssa asked if he wanted to know the real reason she had asked him to help braid her hair. To preserve her dignity, she needed to bathe frequently and always stay clean and well-groomed. However, she couldn't leave his side, knowing the pain would return. In other words, she couldn't take as many baths because she didn't want to leave him alone. Alyssa explained that she could tolerate the routine because the servants brought her meals and helped her change her clothes. They were always very attentive. Our protagonist hoped that their closeness would make people believe the Grand Duke was even more in love with her. At last, they finished the braid. Alyssa looked absolutely beautiful. She wanted to ask him something. He told her she could ask him anything she wanted. She asked if the Red Moon always lasted 10 days. After all, how had Riker endured all those years without her? The girl asked how he had managed to keep the title of the undefeated commander despite suffering so much. He asked if she truly wanted to know. Suddenly, he touched his sword. Oh my goodness. So suddenly, an alarming feeling began to grow inside Alyssa. She quickly grabbed his hand, stopping him from drawing the sword any further. Riker told her not to worry, but she revealed that she had acted purely on instinct. The Grand Duke explained that he had no intention of hurting her and asked Alyssa to promise that she wouldn't run away. Between us, that usually means you absolutely should run. To the girl's surprise, he used the sword to demonstrate his point. However, as if by magic, the red stains began to disappear. Alyssa was deeply shaken, remembering everything she had gone through in the underworld. He explained that it reduced the pain, but in exchange, an even worse pain would come shortly afterward. Apparently, it didn't only work with injuries. If he went days without eating or drinking water, or even without sleeping, the pain would lessen. Alyssa remembered experiencing something very similar in hell. She was stunned by the revelation and couldn't say another word. Could it be that, just like Alyssa, Riker had gone to hell? Our protagonist grew worried. She approached him carrying a basin of water. He noticed the sudden change in the girl's behavior. Deep down, Alyssa was struggling not to tell him. She didn't know how Riker would react. The truth was that she needed to think about it more carefully, and in the end, she dampened a towel. With a sigh, Riker said that everyone called him a demon, but his fiancée didn't need to worry because he had never been to hell. Before he could explain that his condition wasn't contagious, Alyssa smacked him in the face with the wet towel. She asked Riker why he would say something like that. A little embarrassed, he replied that it was because of the way she had been looking at him. Our protagonist asked how. The Grand Duke answered that she had been looking at him with pity just like before. He was absolutely right. In hell, she had never felt hunger or thirst, and that was how she realized she was no longer alive. Alyssa had forced herself to eat tree bark and roots, but she barely had the strength to swallow them. Since she couldn't digest them, she would end up vomiting. Seeing Riker in that condition reminded our protagonist of the suffering she herself had endured. Sometime later, the Grand Duke asked what all of that was. Alyssa explained that they were going to have lunch together and that she would really like him to join her. Riker asked if that was truly necessary. Alyssa said yes. After all, he had promised to grant her wishes every time they held hands. She asked whether, instead of that, she should simply ask him to marry her. How mischievous. Riker immediately replied that the food looked delicious. The man awkwardly picked up the spoon. He was kind of adorable, wasn't he? Alyssa asked what was wrong. The Grand Duke explained that he was right-handed, but our radiant protagonist had the perfect solution. She suggested that he sit beside her. Problem solved. Now Alyssa knew very well that the pain lessened wherever she touched him. Because of that, they began eating their meals together, drinking tea together. Our protagonist and the Grand Duke found comfortable ways to spend time together, and so they lived like that for many days. Meanwhile, Riker taught her everything about Tessin. Wow, how interesting. He told the girl everything about the region's political climate, the clans scattered across the continent, and how none of them could ever set foot in the Empire without first passing through Tessin. Alyssa asked where the piece for that spot was. She said the puzzle was easy for Riker because he had assembled it many times before. The Grand Duke explained that he could easily distinguish certain faces of the Empire and even taught Alyssa the characteristic features of the Imperial family. Our protagonist listened as he told her that the Imperial family cared greatly about their official portraits, testing numerous artists until they found one they liked. He revealed to Alyssa that one day, her portrait would probably be painted as well. The girl looked closely at the monarch depicted in the puzzle. To her, Riker undoubtedly had imperial blood, even though he didn't resemble his relatives very much. She thought he was incredibly handsome, so that detail hardly mattered. Suddenly, they were interrupted by someone knocking urgently on the door. Urgent news had arrived from the capital. The Emperor had never contacted Riker during the Red Moon period before, so it had to be something very serious. Perhaps it meant that political affairs in the Imperial Palace were in trouble. Alyssa would have to help them, but what exactly could our protagonist do? No matter how fast you traveled, it still took at least 5 days to reach the capital. The letter sent to the Grand Duke was no ordinary correspondence. Alyssa overheard the butler's concern. After all, how could Riker possibly travel in his current condition? He had barely recovered. Everyone seemed to be trying to buy time before the Grand Duke departed. The news was that a woman was pregnant with the Emperor's child and had been brought to the palace to give birth. Through Jodie, our protagonist discovered that she wasn't just any woman. She was Lady Maureen, the daughter of Marquis Marcel. Alyssa asked whether that would be a problem, since it was such an important family. Jodie explained that the young woman's father was the leader of a faction that had served the former emperor. She concluded that if the emperor accepted Maureen as his concubine, it would pose a great threat to Tessin. Wow, our girl was as clever as a fox. The imperial court, already divided by factions and conflicting interests, would begin to lose its balance because of that news. It would be impossible for the emperor not to favor one side, especially after so many years without either faction producing an heir. No matter how loyal Riker Tessin had been to the throne, if he opposed Lady Maureen's entrance into the palace, that would be his downfall, and he could no longer expect the emperor's favors or protection. Alyssa looked up at the moon and decided it was time to deliver another prophecy. Outside the palace, Henrik pleaded with the Grand Duke not to overexert himself and to travel safely inside the carriage. However, the stubborn man said he wanted to arrive as quickly as possible and preferred to ride ahead on horseback. But before Riker could mount his horse, someone called his name, and he tightened the reins. Lady Alyssa had arrived. Just in time, girl. Riker wondered where she had come from. Before he could ask what she was doing there, a heavy box fell onto the ground. He was astonished to hear the girl say that she was going with him to the capital. Alyssa politely asked the servants to leave them alone for a few moments. She approached Riker with a warm smile. As she held his hand, she said that the two of them would travel together in the carriage. Alyssa brought up his condition. After all, he had said that the pain lessened depending on where she touched him, hadn't he? Over the past 8 days, she had also learned that the healing effect worked through clothing, although it was slightly weaker, but it did not work through leather. She held his hand and said that she had thought of a new way to make him feel better. What are you suggesting, girl? Riker simply replied that he already felt better, but Alyssa insisted that wasn't true. She knew he could still hear those horrible voices in his head. And to make matters worse, she also knew that the farther he traveled from Tessin, the worse his symptoms would become. He looked exhausted. After all, Alyssa was right. That's right. The Grand Duke finally opened his eyes and was met with a surprise. Alyssa rushed forward and hugged him. She really was adorable, wasn't she? She asked him how he was feeling. Had the voices disappeared? Riker looked completely stunned. Haha. At last, he realized that this was the new method she had discovered to help free him from his torment. Alyssa explained that she believed a larger area of physical contact might improve the healing effect. Then she gently caressed his face and said how much she hoped this method would prove useful in emergencies. Riker remained silent for a few moments. The stubborn man insisted that none of this would be necessary. However, he was defeated because his fiancée was even more stubborn than he was. That's right, girl. Show him who's boss. Alyssa cheerfully patted the side of the carriage, signaling for the procession to depart immediately. The forest was peaceful, and the sound of the carriage wheels echoed through the surroundings. Up ahead, a shepherd was trying to guide his sheep off the road. Inside the carriage, the couple sat in silence while Alyssa sipped her tea. The Grand Duke was certain that the girl was about to tell him something. Bullseye. Alyssa interrupted his thoughts. She asked whether, if Lady Maureen gave birth inside the Imperial Palace, the child would be the Emperor's firstborn. Just thinking about it irritated Riker. He explained that for that very reason, she should understand why he did not want that child to be born in the palace. If the child were born after Maureen had officially been named the Imperial concubine, that child would have the right to the throne because under the Empire's laws, the crown always passed to the Emperor's first heir. Alyssa asked whether Riker was worried about whether that child was truly legitimate. She gently tilted her teacup. Our protagonist explained that the legitimacy of an imperial child could be recognized by a birthmark. The Grand Duke was very surprised to discover that Alyssa knew about that. That kind of birthmark appeared only on those born from the imperial bloodline. He revealed that he had the same birthmark, just like all of his brothers, cousins, and other close relatives. He asked whether she understood what he was trying to tell her. Alyssa replied that she did while pulling out a handkerchief. However, the truth was that the mark was created by a potion administered to members of the imperial family, causing future generations to inherit it as well. It was a safeguard used to protect the imperial bloodline, but it had certain flaws. Alyssa asked whether Riker suspected his own brothers. If an imperial concubine conceived a child with one of the emperor's brothers, it would be extremely difficult to determine whether the child was legitimate. And given Riker's uncompromising personality, he would inevitably make enemies on every side and could find himself in very serious trouble. She said she understood why he was being so cautious about the matter. But did he truly believe that child might not be legitimate? Alyssa explained that getting angry would not help him, and she suggested that for now, he should simply congratulate his brother because the child's birth would not interfere with his future. Our protagonist performed a graceful curtsy and offered another prophecy. She began by saying that Your Majesty, but before Alyssa could finish her sentence, she was thrown forward. The carriage jolted violently. Now she was breathing slightly out of breath. She began to reveal a very important piece of information. Soon, the Emperor would have a little daughter, a princess. Riker and Alyssa stared at each other for a few moments. Wow, the chemistry between them was incredible. They finally realized just how close they were. Unfortunately, the lovely couple pulled apart, apologizing for the small incident. Riker seemed flustered but remained silent. Alyssa also stayed quiet. The two of them really needed to admit that they liked each other. After several days of travel, Tessen's procession arrived in the capital, where they were greeted by cold, rainy weather. The palace was strangely silent, like the calm before a storm. With Lady Maureen's arrival at the palace and the news that the Grand Duke was on his way, everyone seemed extremely restless. Alyssa understood the reasons perfectly well. She thought everyone was even more unsettled because they had seen someone known as a demon smiling. One of the butlers asked Riker to accompany him to the meeting chamber. Alyssa called out to her fiancé for a moment. She asked him not to forget what they had discussed earlier. Marquis Marcel, Lady Maureen's father, insisted that the Emperor make a decision as quickly as possible, and that for the sake of both the mother and the child, her arrival at the palace should not be delayed. Counts Strass and Corlys opposed Maureen's admission and emphasized that they should abide by what was written in the law. Furthermore, the Grand Duke had not yet arrived, and they believed everyone was applying far too much pressure. The Emperor stood up and declared that enough was enough. Suddenly, it was announced at the door that the Grand Duke wished to join the audience, and the monarch ordered that he be admitted. The men were startled by his arrival, uncertain whether Riker would immediately oppose Lady Maureen's admission into the court. Then he entered the chamber, his imposing figure. Something about his brother deeply unsettled Emperor Leonard. He wondered what the Grand Duke was doing. Finally, Leonard asked for his opinion on such an urgent matter. Why was his brother smiling so much? The Emperor was stunned to hear Riker reveal that he wished to congratulate both the child and the mother, declaring that his greatest wish was to welcome them so that she could give birth in peace. The other men were shocked by the Grand Duke's decision. Riker raised his hand, signaling them to remain silent. He had one condition: plot twist. Earlier, in the carriage, he and Alyssa had discussed how they could not ignore the Empire's laws simply because the child would be a girl. Our protagonist had said that if they only looked at the succession laws, a political crisis would become inevitable, so he should demand one condition. Riker declared that he was overflowing with happiness over the arrival of the new heir, but he also could not deny that the child had been conceived outside the palace walls. Then the Grand Duke played his trump card and stated that this fact would inevitably raise doubts about the legitimacy of the child's bloodline. Marquis Corlys appeared to agree with him, but the one who was truly surprised was Marquis Marcel. After hearing Riker declare that the Emperor should use his royal authority to officially proclaim the child legitimate, One of Riker's brothers called out to him. The fourth prince, Stava, asked whether such a matter truly ought to be resolved by the Empire itself. After all, making such a public declaration could create even greater controversy. Prince Lennox remained silent. Riker knew his family well and understood that his brothers would oppose the Emperor's wishes because their only chance of ascending to the throne was if there were no heirs. Alyssa suggested that Riker ask them to postpone discussing the matter until after the child was born, and only if the baby turned out to be a boy, because if it were a girl, the laws were different. The succession laws generally did not distinguish between genders, but Alyssa could not remember a firstborn daughter ever inheriting the crown. Our protagonist reminded him that the law favored the first child of the current empress. Riker said that even if that were true, and the Empress failed to bear any children, Alyssa hurriedly revealed that would not happen. Suddenly she realized what she had done and immediately regretted it. Riker was left speechless. He wondered whether he would have many nieces and nephews in the future. Then in the present moment, he had to maintain his composure and keep a serious expression. The Emperor said that the Grand Duke's heart was in the right place and that they would proceed as he had suggested. Lady Maureen would be brought into the palace, and he would make the official announcement. Riker said that his brother was being a just and noble emperor. He stood up and before leaving welcomed Marquis Marcel. However, the man remained highly suspicious. The Emperor wondered how his brother had changed so much. He knew it was good news, but Leonard leaned back in his chair and wondered whether it was really possible for someone to change so drastically simply because they had become engaged. Alyssa walked through the palace. She stopped for a few moments. Wow, Alyssa looked incredibly elegant. In front of her hung a portrait of Empress Eleanor. The girl thought she was so beautiful. And she truly was. Eleanor, who came from the kingdom of Izern, was a highly renowned woman. When she was younger, the people in her village called her the Nymph of the Seas. She was a prima donna of such extraordinary beauty and talent that her fame reached the empire's capital. And so, Emperor Leonard asked for her hand in marriage, being her greatest admirer. That was how she became empress. Alyssa could hardly believe that 9 years had already passed. Suddenly, one of the maids called out to her. Our protagonist was quite surprised to hear that Her Majesty wished to meet with her. 9 years was more than enough time for many things to change. Lady Eleanor told Alyssa that it had been a very long time since they had last seen each other. Or perhaps she should call her the Countess of Everlands instead. The lady remarked that they had not spoken since Alyssa had received her title. Our protagonist curtsied before the Empress and asked her to simply call her by her name. Eleanor said she was happy that the girl had come to visit, revealing that she had been feeling very lonely. Alyssa glanced discreetly toward someone nearby. There was something strange about that maid. Despite serving in the Empress's chambers, the girl was wearing the crest of House Marcel. Why wasn't Eleanor doing anything about it? Alyssa realized that the Empress seemed to have no one truly on her side. Then she surprised the monarch by speaking in her native language, the language of Izern. Eleanor asked what she was talking about. Our protagonist replied that she was truly pitiful and completely unaware of the situation around her. The Empress ordered all the maids to leave them alone. The young women departed while she and Alyssa quietly laughed together. The atmosphere quickly turned serious, and Eleanor remarked that Alyssa spoke her language very well. Alyssa apologized for her insolence, explaining that it had been the only way for them to be left alone. The Empress quickly rose to her feet. She revealed that Alyssa could simply have requested a private meeting in her own language. Eleanor asked whether she had merely come there to laugh at her, just as so many others had. Alyssa explained that she had assumed one of the maids might understand enough of the Izern language. The Empress clenched her fists tightly. She admitted that Alyssa was probably right. In the end, Eleanor understood the girl's actions and forgave her, saying that she could now go and see Lady Maureen. Alyssa corrected the Empress, saying that she was now Lady Maureen of Tessin. The Empress was shocked to hear the girl reveal that Lady Maureen had been granted the title of Baroness upon being accepted as the imperial concubine. Time seemed to stand still for Eleanor. Alyssa looked sadly at the Empress as she said that her husband seemed very happy. After all, it was his first child. It was common for an emperor to have several concubines in addition to his official wife. However, Leonard had always favored Eleanor above all the others. But unfortunately, after many years without producing an heir, the new Baroness of Tessin had become pregnant, and the atmosphere within the court would change completely. With sorrow, Eleanor admitted that she had always believed he would eventually do something like this. And that was precisely why she had always rejected him, even though he sought her out year after year. Filled with fury, the Empress declared that, in the end, the Emperor was nothing more than a man who collected women as though they were trinkets. And if she were merely one more among them, the Empress began laughing, asking Alyssa how he could possibly have done such a thing to her. Our protagonist held Eleanor's hands as she lamented having left her entire life behind to become his Empress. But at what cost? Alyssa had something to offer her. Our protagonist filled Eleanor's hands with sweets. Wow, Alyssa truly was incredibly sweet. The girl explained that the sweets might cheer her up whenever she felt sad. A few moments later, Eleanor asked the true reason for Alyssa's visit. She was under the impression that Riker supported Maureen's admission into the court, so why was Alyssa there comforting her? Then Alyssa revealed the reason. At that moment, everyone was trying to curry favor with House Marcel, but the Baroness would soon give birth to a baby girl. In the future, the Empress would give birth to a son, and despite many obstacles along the way, Eleanor would ultimately emerge victorious. The truth was that the Grand Duke had only supported the Baroness in order to avoid creating conflict with the Emperor, but he had never sided with House Marcel. Alyssa revealed that, in the past, her dignity had been gravely wounded, yet she had been forced to hide her feelings and found herself unable to trust anyone. Our protagonist confessed that if she had sought support from the right people, she might have received the help she desperately needed. Eleanor asked whether Alyssa was offering to become her confidante, but to her surprise, the girl instead asked whether she herself could speak personally with the Emperor. The Empress stood up, scolding Alyssa for interfering. Our protagonist explained that she was not sure Eleanor would be able to have an honest conversation with him. The girl asked her not to forget one important detail. Eleanor was still the Emperor's favorite. Those words made the Empress blush. How adorable! At last, Eleanor revealed that Leonard still called her his sea nymph. Alyssa stood up to comfort the Empress, telling her that she was still as beautiful as a sea nymph. The lady looked confused. What was Alyssa trying to say? Eleanor asked whether the girl was suggesting that she cry in front of the Emperor. Alyssa replied that she thought it was a good idea because she was certain Leonard would understand the reason. With a steady gaze, our protagonist revealed that such a gesture would surely break his heart. With a graceful curtsy, Alyssa bid farewell to the Empress, saying that everything would soon pass and that the monarch should follow her heart. After she was left alone, Eleanor thought about what a remarkable fiancé Riker had found. Our protagonist decided to get some fresh air. She turned around to see whether anyone was following her. The truth was that she was not sure whether she had meddled too much. In her previous life, she had known very little about imperial affairs, merely assuming that the Baroness's pregnancy had been the cause of all the conflicts. Supposedly, everything was destined to happen that way regardless. Eleanor was destined to give birth to the future crown prince, but the conflicts would wear her down, preventing her from making public appearances in the future. Alyssa thought that if she could ease even a little of someone's suffering by revealing her prophecies, it could not possibly be a bad thing. Under different circumstances, she would never have set foot inside the palace or spoken with the Empress because she would have been locked away in her room. Or perhaps not. By that point, she probably would have married Gregory Baker, and the Lane family would have fallen into chaos after his affair was exposed. Alyssa wondered whether anyone in the world had a normal marriage. Then she remembered Riker telling her that they should never marry. Those words had truly hurt her. Was he waiting for another woman? Then he approached her and asked, "What other woman?" Wow, he appeared out of nowhere. Alyssa asked what he was doing there. While they walked together, Riker said that he had heard she had gone to visit the Empress. She was quite surprised by his timing and by his remarkable hearing. Alyssa lied, saying that she had been thinking about the imperial concubines. Of course, a great warrior like him could approach without making a sound. He wanted to know how his sister-in-law was doing, and the girl replied that Her Majesty was a truly gracious woman. Riker asked whether Alyssa intended to visit the Baroness. Alyssa replied by asking why she should visit her. He explained that if she only visited the Empress, people would talk. The truth, however, was that our protagonist did not care about other people's opinions. Alyssa told him that there was no need for her to be on good terms with the Baroness. The Grand Duke was impressed by how confidently she said that. To him, his fiancée spoke as though she knew exactly what was going to happen. Suddenly, he draped his elegant coat over her shoulders. Riker explained that it was starting to get cold and that it would be best for them to return to the palace. As the two of them walked back, a suspicious figure watched them from afar. She seemed quite irritated that Alyssa had no intention of visiting the Baroness. The girl wondered, who does she think she is? 1 week later, Leonard asked his brother whether he and his wife were plotting something. Riker simply replied that Alyssa was not yet his wife. The Emperor reminded him that she was his fiancée. The Grand Duke calmly replied that an engagement was different from a marriage. Leonard sighed and thanked his brother for supporting him during that day's meetings. Thanks to him, they had been able to move the Baroness into better chambers, leaving Marquis Marcel's family deeply grateful. Riker merely said that he wished for both her and the child to live comfortably. Leonard replied that he appreciated his concern, but he had also learned that Alyssa had been visiting the Empress every single day since then. Eleanor had told him that the girl was extraordinary. Leonard said that all she had done was bring a wide assortment of sweets and biscuits to his wife. So why did her actions seem so calculated? Riker asked whether there was anything wrong with that. To him, it simply looked like the ladies were getting along. Leonard found his brother's way of thinking utterly absurd, and because of that, to him the whole situation felt very strange. Riker Tessin possessed an impenetrable wall of defense that kept even the most influential nobles at a distance. Leonard remembered that his brother was not called the impenetrable wall for nothing, for he had spent his entire life antagonizing others with his uncompromising nature. At first, the Emperor had been grateful to see him changing. But the more he thought about it, the more absurd the situation seemed. The greatest recent change in his brother's life was that he and Alyssa were now engaged. It was a perfect division. One side supported the arrival of the imperial concubine, while the other offered comfort to the Empress during her time of grief. However, Leonard knew that Riker could never have orchestrated all of that on his own. Could it all have been Alyssa Lane's scheme? He decided that he wanted to meet with her privately as soon as possible. Leonard asked whether his brother's fiancée had mentioned visiting the Baroness. He also asked whether Alyssa intended to visit the other concubines. Riker admitted that he had no idea. However, Alyssa had made it very clear that she would not be visiting the Baroness. Just as he had suspected, there was something very strange about that girl. He told Riker to stay away from her. That evening, someone confessed that rumors about Alyssa were spreading throughout the capital. Our protagonist was completely surprised. Wow, how could that be happening? Alyssa told Jody that she had only arrived in the capital a week earlier. She asked whether the new novel by the foreign author was already becoming popular. Apparently, one of the gifts she had sent to the concubines had worked. Rumors about Alyssa were spreading everywhere. Jody hesitated as she tried to say something. The girl explained that people were saying the future Grand Duchess was rude and arrogant, doing whatever she pleased. Alyssa thought that was absolutely ridiculous. Jody said that the young ladies claimed Alyssa looked down on them, answering only with short, cold remarks. Not only that, but the rumors claimed she barely spoke to anyone and attended social gatherings without being invited. What a bunch of liars. Our protagonist asked her friend what she was supposed to do. It really was a delicate situation. Alyssa was very frustrated because she practiced constantly and still wasn't improving. She wanted to embroider as beautifully as Jody. The blonde girl scolded Alyssa because they were discussing something very serious. Our protagonist said she regretted her failure even though she was being taught by the Empire's finest seamstress. Jody replied that she knew that was not what they had been talking about. Alyssa hurried to explain that all those rumors were false. She said they usually did not bother her because they eventually faded away. However, the more outrageous they were, the faster they seemed to spread. Our protagonist looked quite upset. Jody handed her the embroidery hoop, saying Alyssa only needed to finish the final stitches. She said that one day she would create a beautiful embroidery all by herself. Meanwhile, Jody was already busy fixing the terrible embroidery Alyssa had made. Perhaps it would take her 10 years to become good at it. Alyssa asked who exactly was spreading those rumors about her. Jody asked what she would do if she found out. The girl replied that this was the first time something like this had ever happened. Jody asked whether her friend had anyone in mind. The one responsible for the malicious rumors was Vivienne Marcel. Alyssa seemed relieved that they had not been started by the Baroness. Vivienne was Maureen's younger sister and the Marquise's third daughter. Jody quickly snatched the embroidery hoop out of Alyssa's hands. Haha, she really was a perfectionist. Alyssa realized just how irritating the entire situation was. Then she asked Jody to investigate the girl. She wanted to know whether Vivienne was acting under her family's orders or something even worse. Our protagonist also wanted to know whether the Grand Duke was involved in any way. Jody agreed to help her. Look at that. She had finished the embroidery and it turned out beautifully. At last, Alyssa remembered that she wanted to ask for one more favor. She wished to send a present to Vivienne. Sometime later at the Marcel estate, a bouquet of beautiful white lilies arrived. A very irritated young woman demanded to know whether the sender had gone insane. Alyssa Lane had sent funeral flowers to Vivienne. She believed Alyssa had become arrogant simply because she was going to marry into the nobility, even though it was her own sister who would bear the emperor's child. How dared a mediocre peasant girl from the north challenge the great House Marcel? Vivienne declared that she would certainly put Alyssa in her place. As time passed, our protagonist grew accustomed to life in the capital. To be honest, she had Vivienne's hatred to thank for that. Living among high society required knowing an extensive code of etiquette and countless rules. Alyssa noticed the ladies laughing together and wished she could approach them. The girl curtsied, but the others completely ignored her. Before Alyssa could say anything, they all walked away. Despite her efforts, everyone in the capital ignored her and treated her as though she were the problem. Some gossips even claimed that Alyssa had behavioral issues because she came from the north. What did that have to do with anything? As time passed, the situation became rather amusing. Our protagonist thought she ought to take it as a compliment that she had become so famous people talked about her behind her back. Suddenly, she heard someone sobbing inside the palace. Alyssa asked whether someone was crying, but the truth was something far worse. It was Vivienne, spreading even more lies about her. The girl falsely claimed that Alyssa did not even treat her like a person. Oh no! She could hardly believe that spoiled girl was gossiping about her again. Alyssa and her maid exchanged glances. What a strange situation. In the palace courtyard, Vivienne was being comforted by several members of the court. It was incredible how talented that little brat was as an actress, fake tears and all. Alyssa figured the girl must have far too much free time. In the end, she decided to behave like a mature adult and let it go, because confronting Vivienne would only make things worse. However, Alyssa remembered all the rumors Vivienne had spread. After all, why should she be the one forced to stay silent? That's right, girl. Vivienne was tarnishing the reputation Alyssa had spent years building, so why should she simply stand there and do nothing? Our protagonist tried to remain calm and endure the situation. Suddenly, Alyssa heard something so outrageous that she ended up punching the wall. The newest rumor was that Alyssa had struck Vivienne across the face. How could that little brat be so awful? She could not allow this to continue any longer. That's right, girl. The maid looked startled, and Alyssa remarked that the palace walls were very old. The girl asked for a short break before they continued. To tell the truth, Alyssa greatly preferred the life she had lived hunting monsters in hell. There, she could simply sit down and relax, without having to live by the rules of high society. Our protagonist asked whether she had ever actually slapped Vivienne. The girl was startled by Alyssa's arrival and immediately stopped crying. She refused to let anyone speak to her so informally. The little brat declared that she had no idea what Alyssa was talking about. She only had enough time to see Alyssa raising her arm toward her. Our protagonist decided she had to take drastic measures. Vivienne fell to the ground after receiving a powerful slap. Alyssa declared before everyone that she had overlooked most of the rumors, but this had crossed the line. She shook her hand to ease the pain. Then she announced to everyone that the slap she had just delivered was not even 1/5 of her full strength. Everyone watched in shock as she asked Lady Vivienne to get back on her feet because this time she would receive a slap delivered with Alyssa's full strength. Alyssa boldly walked toward the girl, asking why she was so quiet, now when she had been so brave just moments earlier. One of the ladies-in-waiting explained that Vivienne had lost consciousness. Suddenly, someone called out to Alyssa, the Countess of Everlands. Emperor Leonard asked what all the commotion was in the Imperial Concubine's chambers. Far away, inside the throne room, everyone looked anxious. The Marquis found it outrageous that someone had slapped his daughter, while one of the men beside him tried to calm him down, assuring him that justice would be served. Vivienne continued sobbing endlessly. Who did she think she was fooling? Meanwhile, Alyssa looked around, wondering where the Grand Duke was. Oh, finally someone arrived. She was beginning to feel relieved when she realized Alyssa recognized that man immediately. What? What was her father, Marquis Lane, doing there? She became afraid that the situation had escalated far beyond what she had imagined. Behind her, the doors swung open. Thank goodness, Riker had just arrived. Finally, he hurried over to his fiancée, asking whether it was true. The Grand Duke looked horrified as he asked whether the victim had been seriously injured. Alyssa was confused by his questions and could not answer him properly. He begged her to tell him once and for all. Riker grabbed the girl by the shoulders and asked whether she had annihilated someone. Alyssa immediately replied that she had not. All the nobles in the room looked utterly confused. The Grand Duke said that was a relief. Apparently, there had been a misunderstanding. Alyssa replied that she would never be capable of doing something like that. Riker declared that if she had truly used her full strength, not even the victim's clothes would have been left flying through the air. Alyssa became deeply frustrated. After all, he was the one everyone called a monster. How could her own fiancé fail to stand by her side in such a critical moment? Just who did he think Alyssa was? The Emperor interrupted the two of them, saying that the victim was fine and everyone could take their seats. Riker apologized to his brother and gave a respectful bow. The unfairness of the situation greatly upset our protagonist. "We're with you, girl." Leonard finally said that he appreciated everyone's presence in the hall as there were serious matters to discuss. He declared that an act of insolence had been committed in the Imperial Concubine's chambers, and he had convened the meeting to clarify what had happened. He would ask questions, and everyone was expected to answer honestly. Standing before him, Alyssa and Vivienne silently watched everything unfold. Then he asked which of the two young ladies wished to speak first. Everyone remained silent as the maid gave her testimony. She declared that Lady Vivienne had been slapped across the face, while Alyssa insisted that everything the girl was saying was a lie. The nobles became increasingly shocked by the accusations. How could the Countess of Everlands have struck her with such force that she lost consciousness? The Emperor then concluded that it was true. Alyssa had used physical force. Our protagonist found the whole situation increasingly unfair. Now she could no longer deny delivering the slap, especially with so many witnesses present. It was her responsibility to prove that Vivienne had started spreading the rumors. The little brat finally decided to break the silence. She declared that she had been deeply shaken by the slap and that Alyssa's ferocity had been so overwhelming that she had lost consciousness. Alyssa hated being in that situation, especially after spending years keeping all her pain to herself. She had hoped the Grand Duke would say something, but he remained silent. After spending so much time with him, the girl had forgotten just how fragile the people of the Imperial Court truly were. Alyssa desperately wished he would do something. Leonard noticed the troubled expression on his brother's face. He knew Riker was not a careless man and possessed absolutely no sense of humor, making the entire situation even more peculiar. The Emperor grew increasingly intrigued and decided to address Alyssa. He asked whether she had anything to say in her own defense. She remained silent, trying to compose her answer. As much as she wanted to say that Vivienne had started everything, Alyssa restrained herself. Before she could speak, Empress Eleanor arrived. Leonard revealed that since the incident had taken place in the Imperial Concubine's chambers, he wished for his wife to preside over the hearing. He looked lovingly at Eleanor and asked her to uncover the truth behind what had happened. Vivienne became furious, nervously biting her nails. She feared that the Empress might side with the Countess, ruining all of her plans. Eleanor declared that she was disappointed Alyssa had resorted to violence within the palace. When she said she wanted to hear no more about the matter, Vivienne thought she had won. More than anything, she wanted to mock Alyssa, believing the Empress had taken her side. Vivienne was almost convinced that her rival was about to suffer the consequences. Besides, she was confident because her sister was carrying the Emperor's child. But to her surprise, the Empress pointed out that Vivienne herself was at fault for causing trouble, especially as the imperial concubine's sister. She tried to justify her actions by claiming she was the true victim. Vivienne lied even more, saying that besides being ignored by Alyssa, she had also been slapped on previous occasions. Alyssa found the little brat's performance utterly pathetic, especially with how smug she looked. The Empress asked when those incidents had supposedly happened. Vivienne hurried to answer. The girl falsely claimed that Alyssa had slapped her that very morning in the garden after saying many terrible things to her. Eleanor revealed that she had already investigated that claim. She declared that the maids who had been working in the garden had testified that Vivienne's and Alyssa's paths had never crossed. The gardeners, who were also witnesses, confirmed that the two had not even spoken to one another. Oh yes, it seemed the tide was finally beginning to turn. Eleanor asked whether the incident might have happened at some other time. Vivienne tried to change her story, claiming it had not happened in the morning but rather in the afternoon. Alyssa was beginning to lose hope. The Empress asked whether the girl was claiming Alyssa had repeatedly slapped her with all her strength. Vivienne insisted that she had suffered terrible pain, had nearly lost her eyesight, and had even gone to see a physician afterward. What a liar! Eleanor calmly suggested that she summon that physician to confirm her testimony. Now the little brat was completely speechless. Her plans were beginning to crumble before her very eyes. Alyssa felt pleased because she knew that the secret to telling a convincing lie was knowing when to stop. Now what? What could Vivienne possibly do? The Empress was demanding that she produce another witness to confirm her story. Vivienne tried to explain that her friends could testify on her behalf. However, the Empress replied that their testimony carried no value whatsoever. Marquis Marcel attempted to intervene, asking whether his daughter could summon the physician. The girl refused to accept what was happening. Marquis Marcel's daughter surprised her father by declaring that everyone in the castle was biased and favored the Empress, knowing that Lady Alyssa visited her every day. The little brat challenged the Empress, asking how she could favor her own servants over Vivienne's friends. With all her grace and elegance, Eleanor asked whether the girl was accusing the palace staff. The girl desperately tried to justify her words. "You're not getting out of this one." Her father tried to stop her from saying any more nonsense and begged the Empress to forgive her for not knowing any better. Eleanor declared that Vivienne had lived in the palace her entire life and therefore should have known better. The girl had failed to prove her story and had no credible witnesses. The Emperor intervened, saying there was only one way to verify Vivienne's accusations. When Alyssa slapped her, she had said she did so because the girl was spreading rumors and that she had not used her full strength. So he was curious to know what would have happened if she had actually used her true strength. Marquis Marcel begged his daughter to immediately apologize to their majesties, and especially to Alyssa. Vivienne could not understand why everyone was behaving that way when her sister was about to give birth to the Empire's first heir. Leonard then announced a decree. Until the day the Baroness gave birth, the entire Marcel family was forbidden from entering the imperial concubine's chambers. Vivienne absolutely hated that decision. He asked whether she was threatening the Emperor. Leonard wanted to know whether she was implying that something would happen to the Baroness if she were not allowed to be there. Because of Vivienne's insolence, the Emperor banished her from the palace and from all social gatherings indefinitely. The crowd dispersed without making a single comment. Leonard called Alyssa over. He wished for her and his brother to prepare their marriage vows as soon as possible. That was his sincere desire. Riker quietly asked Alyssa not to visit the Empress for a while, and she asked him why. The Grand Duke explained that she had attracted the Emperor's attention, and it would be wise to stay out of his sight for a few days. Alyssa asked whether Leonard was angry with her. Riker revealed that his brother was extremely curious and had become suspicious of Alyssa. Our protagonist quietly insisted that she had not done anything extraordinary. Riker explained that the Emperor, his brother, had good reason to be suspicious of people, so she should remain discreet. Riker told the girl that they were not alone. Standing right in front of them was none other than Alyssa's father. Honestly, what was that awful man doing there? Marquis Lane approached the couple and expressed his regret that the Grand Duke had been forced to come because of his daughter. He asked whether his daughter had already apologized to His Highness. Why was he speaking to her now? In any case, he was not entirely wrong, and after giving a respectful curtsy, she apologized to the Grand Duke. He replied with a warm smile that everything was fine. Alyssa wanted to know whether her father had anything else to say. The man let out a deep sigh. Then he surprised our protagonist by telling her that she had made the right choice. Wow, why was he suddenly being so kind? Her father explained that although he did not approve of violence, Vivienne had many friends to support her, whereas Alyssa had no one. She was deeply surprised by her father's unexpected kindness. Sometime later, a carriage was waiting for Riker and Alyssa. The Grand Duke extended his hand to her. Alyssa graciously accepted it so they could leave together. She stepped into the carriage and he followed after her. However, before he could climb inside, Riker suddenly collapsed onto the ground. He was already beginning to grow weak, and once again he asked for Alyssa's hand. The man threw his gloves into the air. Alyssa immediately hurried over to help him. Holding his hand, she asked whether his condition had worsened. Riker explained that it was because of the voices in his head. He had rushed to the palace as soon as he heard the rumors about his fiancée. Our protagonist felt slightly disappointed, thinking that his condition had worsened because of her. She asked why he had not told her sooner. Our girl was not even sure whether the Emperor knew about his secret. Riker said that simply having Alyssa by his side made him feel strong enough to keep going. Then he asked whether it was really true that she had no friends. The Grand Duke explained that Daisy and Jody did not count. Alyssa remembered the beings she had met in Hell, the cat boy who had given her countless mana stones, and even her pet chimera. Unfortunately, Alyssa could not tell him about them, so she simply said that for her, life was a journey she would have to walk alone. She remembered the conversation she had had with her father only hours earlier. He had told her that her mother missed her and that it would be good for Alyssa to visit her. The Marquis had also said that her mother could help her make valuable connections and allies, and that it would be good for his daughter to expand her circle of friends. Thanks to her father's words, even the Grand Duke now pitied her. What a tragedy. Alyssa said that if she were powerful, she would not need friends. Riker probably understood that better than anyone, but he surprised her by revealing that although he had enemies, he also had good friends. She only had to ask Henrik or Roderick. The two of them left the palace at sunset. How could the monster of Tessin have friends? Social events were a frequent occurrence in the capital. Even so, Alyssa decided to keep a low profile to avoid drawing the Emperor's suspicion, taking a few days to stroll around with Daisy. Unfortunately, the girl knew that some people were still talking behind her back. Even after several days had passed, there were still rumors that the future Grand Duchess was a legendary menace, and Alyssa thought that was much better than being known as an annoying little brat. At last, they stopped in front of a large shop. Karen, the owner of the store, greeted them. Alyssa told her that she was looking for a gift but was not sure what to choose. Karen was impressed to learn that it was a gift for the Empress, so it could not be anything ordinary. Karen suggested scented candles, but Alyssa thought the Empress probably already had plenty of them. Then the shop owner suggested a new fragrance that had not yet been released to the public. Alyssa loved the idea and asked for the gift to be sent directly to the palace. Our protagonist watched as Karen carefully wrapped the present. She was surprised when Alyssa remarked that Karen seemed to have many friends. Karen replied that she did not have many, but she did have a few. Karen explained that it was difficult to find true friends in the capital. Alyssa was convinced. If even a future legend of the perfume world did not have that many friends, then she did not need them either. Karen asked whether the girl had made many friends since arriving in the capital, but the answer was not very encouraging. The shop owner explained that nobles formed friendships through social events, and the capital was already buzzing with stories about Alyssa. Who knew? She might receive a few invitations soon. Alyssa sighed. She was not worried because she had ignored previous invitations, and they would probably stop arriving before long. A few days later, Alyssa was riding through the forest. Riker called out to his fiancée, interrupting her ride. The girl insisted that she was riding properly. The Grand Duke said that Henrik had told him about a letter and asked what Alyssa had done with it. Alyssa asked about Henrik, but Riker was referring to the letter. She answered that she had thrown it away. The man looked disappointed. How could she have done that? The girl simply explained that she had thrown away all the old letters. Suddenly, he grabbed the horse's mane. With remarkable skill, Riker mounted the horse.
Wow.
He quietly told his fiancée that the estate was full of the Emperor's spies. The Grand Duke asked whether Alyssa had really thrown away Josephine's invitation. Alyssa asked how he could possibly know who the letter was from. It was an invitation from one of the Tessin family's branches, and he believed it would be a good idea for Alyssa to accept it. Our protagonist wanted to know whether it had been the Emperor's request. Riker replied that not exactly. Alyssa asked whether it had been his idea. He explained that it would be a good opportunity for Alyssa to meet new people and discuss a certain person they had in common. Alyssa froze when she heard a particular name, Gregory Baker. She was utterly shocked. Riker explained that after their engagement had been broken off, it had been decided that Gregory would marry a descendant of the imperial family. Our protagonist remembered all too well what a despicable man Gregory was. Oh no, that meant Gregory Baker was engaged to Josephine, Riker's cousin. Oh no, no one deserved that rat. Alyssa turned to him and asked whether she could borrow a carriage. In one of the capital's noble districts stood one of the estates belonging to a branch of the Tessin family, West Palace. It was such an imposing place that it was known as the Imperial Palace of the region. The estate was filled with noble ladies eagerly awaiting Alyssa's arrival, curious about all the rumors surrounding her. Among them, with her long blonde hair, stood one person who was especially interested. Vivienne asked how she could possibly have invited that creature. The blonde girl asked what Vivienne had expected her to do. The Emperor had ordered her to get along with the future Grand Duchess, so it was a request she simply could not refuse. She ordered Lady Vivienne to leave Alyssa alone and to be grateful enough that she had not been expelled from the imperial court. The carriage finally came to a stop as several young ladies whispered about what had happened between Vivienne and Alyssa. Now all eyes were fixed on the arrival of the future Grand Duchess. On one side stood Lady Alyssa Lane, the only daughter of Marquis Lane from the northern region of the country. On the other stood Lady Josephine Tessin, the empire's most noble flower, the daughter of a Duke Tessin and a princess. One question echoed throughout high society. Who would claim the throne of high society? Someone jumped out of the carriage far too quickly. Take it easy. Now the two ladies stared at each other in silence. Alyssa greeted Lady Josephine with a graceful curtsy, thanking her for the invitation. One of the ladies in waiting was impressed by the girl's manners. Lady Josephine said it was an honor to finally meet the Countess of Everlands. She was impressed by how refined Alyssa was and asked who had made her dress. Our protagonist replied that it was a design by Augusta Valette, who specialized in shades of blue, but she was interrupted. Oh no. With a mischievous smile, Josephine ordered Alyssa never to wear that dress again. What a rude girl. The noble translation: the girl's status was far beneath her clothing. The ladies of high society were shocked by Lady Josephine's audacity. Everyone waited to see Alyssa's reaction. At last, she replied that she understood. What a surprise. Josephine had not expected that answer. What did she mean? Alyssa was simply giving in? Then Alyssa's long hair swept right across the girl's face. Haha. Well played, Alyssa. Alyssa bowed, asking Josephine to forgive her. Josephine could not understand the girl's behavior after she had been openly insulted, so she simply told Alyssa to be more careful in the future. Our protagonist gave her a lovely smile and accepted Lady Josephine's words, explaining that she was still getting used to the customs of the capital. All the girls were impressed by her composure. Alyssa was an angel. Josephine could not understand the reason behind the girl's smile. She thought for a moment and decided to continue. The blonde lady invited everyone to visit the Grand Hall. At last, a tour. Alyssa accepted and thanked her for the invitation. However, deep down, our protagonist was thinking about how Josephine's life was about to change because of her. She felt so guilty that she decided to overlook any humiliation. Lady Josephine noticed something strange about Alyssa. Wait, was she crying? How could Alyssa be crying over something so trivial? Alyssa complimented the other ladies on their perfumes. They were becoming more and more impressed by the Countess's knowledge. She even offered to recommend her favorite boutique, the very one where the Empress herself purchased her perfumes. Lady Josephine observed the situation, noticing that despite a few minor mistakes, Alyssa seemed to possess excellent social grace. The day went on. Late that afternoon, Riker arrived to pick up his fiancée. He asked how her outing had gone as he extended his hand to her. Alyssa took his hand and said that her day had been wonderful and that everyone had been very kind to her. She told him that she had learned a great deal about high society, and in return she had taken the opportunity to teach them something as well. Riker asked what exactly she had taught them. Standing atop a white horse, Josephine greeted her cousin. He looked at Alyssa with obvious concern. Alyssa replied that she had taught the ladies how to ride a horse while standing up. That was so like Alyssa. Haha. Lady Josephine glared furiously at the two of them holding hands. She finally understood what was happening. The Emperor wanted his cousin to interfere in their relationship. From Josephine's perspective, her cousin seemed completely enchanted by that country girl, so she immediately raised her hand. But when she tried to separate them, where had the two of them gone? She could not stand another second of it. Josephine angrily told them both to let go of each other's hands. She thought it was outrageous for them to be holding hands before the wedding, and that they ought to behave with proper decorum. Riker asked what decorum she was talking about. Josephine declared that she would tell her uncle, Emperor Leonard, everything. The Grand Duke replied that, on top of everything else, she looked like a wild bird whenever she wore red. Haha, we love you, Riker. He thanked her for the warm farewell and announced that they would be heading home. Phew, finally a little distance. Alyssa asked whether he had been in much pain that day. Riker nodded and admitted that he had. The truth was that he had endured the pain for so long that now he could barely bear being apart from her. How adorable. He also revealed that he had just returned from carrying out the task she had asked of him. Alyssa asked whether he had managed to shake the Imperial family up a little. Riker replied that he had planted a few seeds of doubt. He had suggested to the Imperial court that perhaps they should prepare for the possibility that the Baroness had shared her bed with someone else. The girl asked how they had reacted. Riker revealed that everyone had become desperate to investigate the concubine's previous relationships. He also confessed that he was curious to know why Alyssa had asked him to spread those rumors. In the past, she had asked whether he suspected his brothers. That question had left him speechless. Was she suggesting that his suspicions had been correct? Alyssa said she was not certain, and that part of it was merely speculation, but she was certain that the Baroness would give birth to a daughter and that the child would arrive sooner than expected. In fact, she would be born today. Wow, what an incredible revelation. Late that night, knights carrying torches made their way toward the Grand Duke's palace. One of the attendants said that the Emperor had ordered them to head to the palace as soon as the preparations were complete. Alyssa replied that they could leave immediately. One of the guards asked whether they had received any advance communication from the Emperor. The other guard said it was better that way because there would be fewer complications. The carriages sped through the forest. Roderick approached the Grand Duke's carriage window. He reported that the Emperor had summoned several nobles to the palace, but the Marcel family was to remain confined to their residence. Although it was supposedly for their protection, Riker thought that sounded more like house arrest. Just as Alyssa had predicted, the Baroness of Tessin went into labor much earlier than expected, causing Leonard to grow even more suspicious. Where could His Majesty be now? One of the butlers informed them that he had entered the delivery room. Riker and Alyssa finally arrived, and the atmosphere was tense. Maids hurried in and out of the Baroness's chamber. Alyssa noticed the blood-stained cloths. Inside, the Emperor urged his lady to stay strong. The maids commented that the labor pains had begun the day before, yet the Baroness still had not given birth. Even the imperial physician was worried. Princess Stephen and Lennox were anxious, hoping they would soon celebrate a birth rather than prepare for a funeral. Time passed slowly. Then even more time passed. Leonard stepped out of the room and Eleanor looked at him with concern. He silently shook his head. The Emperor ordered one of the guards to lift the confinement imposed on the Marcel family and bring them to the palace. Everyone knew exactly what his words meant. They had to prepare for the worst. Leonard told his wife that she should get some rest because the physician had said the baby would not be born anytime soon. He turned to look at his brothers, then he asked them to remain nearby. Just behind them, Alyssa and Riker had finally arrived. Alyssa rested in one of the imperial chambers. What a beautiful dress. She calmly said that everything would be all right. Riker noticed how confident she sounded. Our protagonist said that she had already foreseen the delay. She told her fiancé that if the child had not actually been born yet, there was no way she could have predicted that it would be a princess. Riker seriously asked how many heirs there would be, but the girl simply turned her face away and said she did not know. He insisted that she did know. He walked over to her. The Grand Duke asked whether she truly did not know, or whether she was simply refusing to tell him until the seasons changed, but Alyssa no longer responded. Oh no, what happened? Haha, our sweet protagonist had fallen asleep. It must have been exhausting to leave so late at night. Riker remained silent for a while. Then he began taking off his coat. The Grand Duke looked at his fiancée sleeping peacefully. Alyssa Lane truly was an extraordinary person. He remembered all the times he had watched her sleep. Riker used to play with her hair. How adorable! Despite his stern appearance, he was a very gentle man. At least when she was asleep, Alyssa almost looked like an ordinary person. Outside, someone leaped over the palace garden wall. He landed lightly on his feet. Oh no, who could it be? The stranger was immediately spotted by the Imperial guards. They chased after the intruder, ordering him to stop. The desperate man shouted that he only wanted to meet someone. Then he crashed straight into Prince Stephen. The guards caught up with the man and asked whether the prince was all right. He demanded to know who the intruder was, as they explained that the stranger had been caught climbing over the garden walls. The red-haired man burst into tears and begged to see her one last time. Stephen was stunned when he heard the intruder speak Maureen's name. One of the guards approached and said that something had fallen from the intruder. Stephen picked up the cloth and declared that from that moment onward, he would personally take charge of the matter. The following day, the latest newspaper edition welcomed the new imperial princess, Dorothea. The people were overjoyed because the empire finally had an heir, and she had been blessed as a child of the empire. Back at the Imperial Palace, that night the celebrations were in full swing. Everyone celebrated the birth of the princess. Leonard thanked everyone for their congratulations. He explained that unfortunately both the concubine and the princess needed proper rest after the difficult childbirth. The emperor declared that there was still much to do, including confirming the child's lineage, and those words deeply worried Marquis Marcel. Alyssa watched the Emperor with great interest as he celebrated. Oh my god, what would our protagonist's next move be? It happened at the happiest possible moment. Leonard told Maureen that he hoped their daughter would grow into a beautiful princess just like her. Thanks to the birth of the little girl, the Marcel family's prestige reached its peak. Leonard suggested that she be named Dorothea. Suddenly, a butler announced Prince Stephen's arrival. Leonard insisted that his brother wait until tomorrow. Despite the request, the emperor was informed that an intruder had infiltrated the concubine's garden. Stephen recounted the events of the previous night and explained that the intruder had begun calling out for Maureen. Standing before the emperor, the man called out to her once again. He demanded to know how she could have abandoned him. The emperor's expression turned grim, while the child's mother looked deeply worried. Stephen said that he had found this on the intruder. It was a handkerchief embroidered with the initials MM for Maureen Marcel. Like a token exchanged between lovers, the intruder claimed that she carried a pendant engraved with the initial of his name. The emperor demanded to know who the man was. One of the guards revealed that his name was Alexander de Lorenzo. He swore that he was the Baroness's lover. The furious emperor declared that he had never wanted to hear any of this. Distressed, Maureen insisted that she did not know that man and that it was all a setup. Alexander claimed that he had gone days without eating or sleeping because he had been thinking about her, begging her to look at him just one last time. He asked whether the child was his. The woman's face was filled with anguish at his words. Leonard ordered his brother to remove that bastard from his sight. Maureen pleaded with the emperor, insisting that it was not true, but he simply told her to rest and not worry about it. The mother asked where he was taking her daughter, but he left without saying another word. Hours later, he was still deeply upset. Riker congratulated him on the birth of the princess, but Leonard seemed indifferent. After all, he did not even know whether she was truly legitimate anymore. The Grand Duke said that he was sorry to hear that. The emperor asked whether he truly knew nothing about it. Riker revealed that he had heard rumors but had never taken them seriously. He had not wanted to bring disrespectful gossip into the imperial palace. Leonard admitted that he had always harbored suspicions because of the unusual circumstances and had intended to deal with the matter later, but he had never imagined that the lover would appear in person. He thanked his brother for always standing by his side. Before Riker could reply, one of the guards approached. He quietly informed the emperor that he had searched the concubine's room, just as ordered, and he had found this. Oh my god, Riker noticed the piece of jewelry. Unexpectedly, the emperor picked up the pendant and plunged it into his wine. According to the events of Alyssa's previous life, the emperor and the Grand Duke drifted apart soon afterward. By resolving the incident through the emperor's own decision rather than through the Grand Duke's accusation, the future had changed. What else could Alyssa accomplish? Our girl was unstoppable. Outside the palace, Alyssa suspected that the emperor intended to get rid of Alexander. Riker asked whether Alyssa had really needed to do that. She wondered whether he was worried about the Baroness's lover. The Grand Duke said that if it had been up to him, his brother would never have learned about the intruder or the scandal. He himself would have dealt with the man. Oh, Riker, you know nothing about politics. Alyssa believed it was far more appropriate for the emperor to handle the matter himself. On the other side of the garden, two men were carrying Alexander. The intruder was thrown onto the ground. He pulled the sack off his head and asked where they were. The guards began drawing their swords. Moments later, only bloodstains remained on the ground. Princess Dorothea was officially accepted into the imperial court as the legitimate daughter of Leonard Tessin, and he appointed one of his concubines as the little girl's guardian. He was overjoyed as he held his little daughter in his arms. That night at Chateau Ludern, Alyssa finally lay down. Our girl was exhausted. At last, one scandal had been resolved, and all because the emperor insisted on having lovers. Thinking about that, the girl suddenly sat upright. She remembered a time when the Grand Duke had almost become involved in a scandal of the same magnitude. There had once been a rumor that Riker Tessin was having an affair, and the woman in question was none other than Countess Ruthia. But Alyssa, knowing about his condition, believed it was almost impossible that he would leave Tessin just to see someone. Several pieces of luggage were waiting outside. Alyssa told Henrik and one of the maids that she owed them a great deal. They wished her a pleasant journey. In truth, they wished Alyssa could remain at the Grand Duke's palace a little longer. She explained that she had left Chateau Ludern closed up for quite some time. Then she placed a large bag full of money into Henrik's hands, telling him that all the staff could divide it among themselves. In addition, Riker was preparing to travel elsewhere soon because he was going to meet Lord Turin. She smiled as she recalled that piece of information. Henrik explained that Lord Turin lived near the capital and that Riker should know just how worried she was about him. The truth was that Lord Turin was Countess Ruthia Turin's father. That visit meant they might end up meeting. Alyssa opened her jewelry box, and just as she had expected, some rumors simply could not be ignored. Inside were all the accessories Alyssa had left behind after removing the mana stones. So where had they all gone? Hours later, Alyssa looked utterly dejected. "What's wrong, dear?" Jody asked what was troubling her. The girl looked sadder than ever. Alyssa was not the best seamstress, but she could not even follow the pattern she had drawn herself. Our protagonist decided it was time to ask Jody for another favor. She wanted information about Lord Turin, who lived near the capital. In addition, she asked for information about Countess Ruthia, his daughter. Secretly, she wanted to reclaim every single mana stone she had lost because of the broken engagement. Sometime later, in a beautiful palace, Riker approached, and the butler opened the door for him. Everyone bowed before the Grand Duke. The bright room was silent. He walked past the nearly transparent curtains. A mysterious woman reached out her hand to greet him. He carefully took her hand. Wow, who could she be? Riker told the woman that he had finally come. She touched his face and said how much she had missed him. The Grand Duke admitted that he had missed her very much as well. Far away, during tea time, Jody had some revelations for Alyssa. She quickly explained that she still needed a little more information, but there was something our protagonist needed to know. Alyssa leaned forward curiously. "Come on, Jody. Tell us everything." Oh no, why did Jody look so serious? Could Riker be emotionally attached because there was someone he truly loved? Had it been an impossible love story full of twists and turns? Alyssa crushed her fork in her anxiety. The girl was surprised to hear that Lord Turin did not actually govern any territory. He merely paid taxes to the capital, and that was all. That was unusual because even the Empire's smaller regions were governed by the Emperor's brothers. So Alyssa reasoned that if a small city had no strong ruler, could it secretly be under the control of one of Leonard's concubines? Jody explained that another strange detail was that the attendants currently serving Countess Ruthia belonged to the Grand Temple. The temple's scribes were the only people who could access the imperial family's official records. Alyssa listened as Jody explained that the Countess had to be someone from the royal family or someone of equivalent status. So who exactly was she? They had no idea. Jody had investigated thoroughly, but the Countess might have been one of the late Emperor's concubines. However, those women had mysteriously disappeared one by one. The mysterious woman told Riker that it had been a long time since his last visit. She understood that he had been busy, but it still saddened her. She added that even Riker had stopped visiting her. Perhaps he had truly become a grown man. She said he was such a funny little boy, far too adorable to scold. Riker looked utterly confused. One of the maids appeared behind him. She looked deeply concerned but remained silent. The Grand Duke seemed extremely uncomfortable and said his goodbyes. The mysterious woman called out to him once more. According to Jody's informants, the woman appeared to be nearly 80 years old. The elderly lady lying in bed asked the Grand Duke to send her love to Riker. Alyssa was completely astonished. How could the woman possibly be 80 years old? Jodie explained that she had been unable to send spies into the woman's palace, so she had relied on informants nearby instead. One of the caregivers explained that she had cared for the elderly woman for many years. According to her, the old lady had already looked very elderly long ago. Alyssa pointed out that if the woman had already looked 80 back then, she should now be close to 90. Jodie replied that this was where things became even stranger. Even stranger? According to the people living near Turin Palace, the Countess had looked very old for a very long time. Alyssa replied that none of it made any sense. What mystery could possibly surround that woman? How could she have looked so elderly even many years ago? Riker hurried down the stairs. One of the maids tried to call after him, but the man looked haunted. He asked the woman, "Since when?" The maid revealed that not even her own servants had noticed the symptoms. They had only discovered what was happening about 2 years earlier. Riker angrily demanded to know why no one had told him. She explained that the woman had never failed to recognize him before. Her condition had only worsened over the past 6 months, but she had already begun confusing the past with the present. The Grand Duke was about to say something, but he found himself speechless. He bowed his head and expressed how sorry he was that everyone had been enduring such suffering. The man hurried down the steps before the maid could call out to him again. Outside, Riker looked deeply tormented. Dark emotions seemed to be consuming him. The Grand Duke remembered a wedding, the woman standing at the altar. Who could she be? Aw, how adorable. Little Riker discovered that the woman would become his mother. Right after the wedding, she and his father, the Emperor, would move away. Riker hurried to speak to his new mother despite the butler calling after him. Calling out to his mother, the little boy chased after the carriage. He asked why she had never told him anything, but the woman crying beneath her veil was no longer young. She looked as though she had aged 50 years. The sight left Riker frozen. Everyone who was bound to Tessin through marriage vows met with misfortune. Alyssa was furious. Her fiancé had left nothing but a letter without offering any real explanation. How long did he intend to keep avoiding her? Daisy told Alyssa that it was time for her to get ready. Our protagonist grabbed the girl by the shoulders, declaring that she had arrived at the perfect moment. Alyssa needed to ask her for a favor. Far away, several young gentlemen said that it was an honor to meet her. No matter how important the Grand Duke thought he was, Alyssa would always be right on his heels. Riker looked utterly alarmed. That afternoon, Roderick arrived on horseback to summon Riker. He informed the Grand Duke that they had received an invitation directly from Marquis Lane. Riker asked what the invitation was about. He read the letter, and something immediately caught him off guard. The guest list was filled with unmarried men of marriageable age. Apparently, Alyssa's father was playing some sort of trick by sending the invitation at the last minute. Roderick explained that he could send a letter declining the invitation, but Riker simply tossed the letter back to the young man. He immediately mounted the available horse. It was time for Riker to act. Things could not continue like this. Roderick watched as his master galloped away at full speed. That's right, Riker. Go win your girl back. He had to hurry if he wanted to arrive in time. Alyssa was having a drink with a young nobleman. What in the world was happening? It was wonderful to see her laughing so happily. A few hours earlier, Alyssa had been overcome by a terrible feeling. Her father had gathered every unmarried man Alyssa had ever been on a blind date with into a single social gathering. Marquis Lane truly was an unbelievable man. Alyssa was determined to get it over with and return to Riker as quickly as possible. Our protagonist asked whether Albert McAllen enjoyed gardening. He asked whether she liked plants as well. The girl replied that she had absolutely no talent for gardening. However, he was curious to know how she had learned that he enjoyed gardening. Alyssa pointed out that Harry had told her. Afterward, she spoke with Joachim Lawrence. After speaking with several young men, she decided to pour herself another glass of rosé wine. She had spoken to so many people that her throat had become terribly dry. Someone approached her. Alyssa wondered what would come next after speaking with every eligible bachelor in the capital. Wow, who was that handsome gentleman? What beautiful eyes, what beautiful hair, sir. Alyssa looked at him and her cheeks flushed slightly. She asked whether he was young Lord Geller. He looked surprised that she remembered him. His name was Pierre Geller. He explained that he was training to become an imperial knight soon. Suddenly, the Marquis clapped his hands to make an announcement. The man declared that it was time for everyone to gather for dinner. Alyssa looked around. Her brother Harry was staring at the wine. She found herself wondering what Pierre was doing there. In her previous life, he had married Josephine, Riker's cousin. Not long afterward, he had been responsible for Josephine falling down a staircase. He was bad news. Alyssa remembered that by changing fate, other events had also changed, causing Josephine to become engaged to Gregory instead of Pierre. That was very interesting. Her father had turned a social gathering into an event for forging political alliances. Marquis Lane announced that it was time for dinner. He told his daughter that she should eat. Alyssa told her father that he was the most cunning nobleman she had ever met. Although he thanked her, she revealed that it had not been a compliment. After dinner, our protagonist was admiring several paintings when her brother Harry approached her. He asked whether she was all right. It was obvious that she did not enjoy social gatherings. Thinking back, she had only met Gregory Baker because her brother had introduced him as a decent man. Honestly, she thought the men in that family had terrible judgment. Alyssa told her brother to find better friends. He looked deeply offended. His friends were wonderful. Haha, he truly had no idea. As the two of them talked, the Grand Duke's arrival was announced. At last, everyone bowed respectfully to the nobleman, even though no one had been informed that he was coming. He looked completely exhausted from his hard ride. Riker greeted Marquis Lane. Immediately afterward, he thanked him for the invitation, even if it had come rather late. The look exchanged between the two men was enough to create sparks. The Marquis was pleased that he had arrived in time. Harry told his sister that he had not expected the Grand Duke to show up, since their father had sent the letter when he was supposedly far away. Alyssa's brother asked whether the Grand Duke had come out of jealousy. Our protagonist punched him in the ribs. Oh my goodness, siblings will be siblings. Harry felt as though he had been run over by a carriage. Alyssa quietly admitted that the Grand Duke sometimes even seemed embarrassed by her. Suddenly, he approached her and asked whether she was all right. He noticed that she looked especially beautiful that day. Had she dressed up for the event? The truth was that Riker could not bear to see her in that hall filled with unmarried men. It would be better for the two of them to leave as soon as possible. He extended his hand, asking her to come with him. The two exchanged glances. Riker looked happy to see her. How adorable. But he did not want to grow too attached, so he told her that he would take her back to Chateau Luderne. The two of them walked down the corridor. Then, something seemed to catch the man's attention. Riker recognized a painting depicting the place where they had first met. He deeply regretted that one day they would have to part. After all, he was still only human. The Grand Duke said that he wanted to buy that painting. The carriage rolled away. He asked what had happened at the banquet. Alyssa did not answer. She was still astonished that he had actually come, since he had always seemed so indifferent. That could only mean one thing. She demanded to know whether he was feeling unwell. Riker explained that it was nothing like that. Alyssa insisted that there was no way he was not in pain. Otherwise, there would have been no reason for him to come all the way there. Riker tried to tell her that he was perfectly fine. The Grand Duke fell silent. He wondered whether she believed he only appeared whenever he was unwell. It seemed that Riker was destined to be seen as a heartless person who only showed up when he needed something. He asked what she wanted in return for holding his mother's hand that day. Alyssa was taken completely by surprise by his reaction. She let go of his hands. Our protagonist hated the way he embarrassed her whenever he pleased, especially after she had been helping ease his pain. The girl decided that if he was going to treat her that way, she would return the favor. As her reward, she asked for the white Tessin crystal jewelry. He was surprised by her request, but agreed. Apparently, her engagement to Riker was going nowhere, so Alyssa adopted a new strategy. She and Duke Albert McAllen had been exchanging letters, and he seemed to be very fond of plants. Alyssa picked a little plant and painted it so that he could guess what it was. Meanwhile, the Imperial Palace was filled with good news. Daisy announced that the Empress had sent a gift. Inside the jewelry box were several rings, but two of them seemed to be missing. Alyssa declared that this meant the Empress was pregnant. Our protagonist was delighted because it had finally happened. A letter had arrived from the Duchess of Geitz. It was an invitation for Alyssa Lane to attend the celebration of Princess Dorothea's birth in the Grand Imperial Hall the following week. However, social gatherings bored Alyssa to no end, and she truly did not want to go. Nevertheless, she knew it was her duty to attend. And there she was, our girl. Crowded places made her feel extremely uncomfortable. Before Alyssa could hide away in a corner, Riker surprised her. She was quite startled by his sudden appearance. The Grand Duke asked how she was doing. Why was she all alone? She was speechless for a few moments. Alyssa replied that she was fine and asked whether he was doing well too. Looking closely, she noticed that he seemed tense and was breaking into a cold sweat. He was probably hiding something from her. She took both of his hands, trying to ease whatever pain he was feeling. Alyssa asked whether Riker would like to dance with her. The invitation caught him completely by surprise. How adorable. At last, he felt as though he could breathe again. But a dance? What did that mean? He thought that she had noticed his condition and wanted to help him. The Grand Duke gave her a faint smile. Then he invited Alyssa to dance with him. He released her hand and declared that he was an excellent dancer. Alyssa was confused. How was that even possible? Riker took the girl by the hand and led her toward the dance floor. Our protagonist was stunned because she had never once heard of him dancing, let alone attending royal balls. She asked him to wait. The people at the ball were already gossiping about the two of them, wondering what their dance would be like. Alyssa felt uncomfortable with everyone's whispers and with the fact that they were all stepping back to watch the two of them. The violinist began to play a special piece. Riker took Alyssa into his arms, and the two of them danced beautifully. Wow, what a gorgeous couple. Our girl was truly impressed that he was actually such an excellent dancer. The Grand Duke said that it was only to be expected of the nobility. Of course he danced well. As a member of the nobility, it was nothing out of the ordinary. Alyssa was certain that everyone was curious, which was why they were making way for the two of them. She decided that she wanted to ask him something. Riker asked what she wanted to know. Alyssa replied that she wanted to know about Countess Ruthia. The Grand Duke explained that it was not a relationship she needed to worry about. The girl explained that she was not worried, but she wanted to know something. Secretly, Alyssa believed that the Countess was Riker's adoptive mother. He gently said that he did not wish to talk about it, but Alyssa insisted that she needed to know. He said, "Enough," and the violinist stopped playing. The two stopped dancing and looked at each other. Alyssa was deeply offended by his interruption. She immediately pulled her hand away from him. Our dear protagonist could not endure any more humiliation. She had better leave. Riker deeply regretted letting his emotions get the better of him. He had never meant to snap at her. He needed to follow her. Wait, why was his vision becoming blurry? Alyssa pulled back a set of curtains. She needed a moment alone. The girl felt deeply hurt that there were so many secrets between her and her fiancé, and she herself wished she had not pushed him so far. She turned around and found Riker looking terribly shaken. What was happening to him? He began apologizing, but Alyssa was already nothing more than a blurry figure. Riker started to collapse and fainted right on top of Alyssa. The worried girl asked whether he was feeling ill, but he was far too big for her to support. The two of them ended up falling to the floor. Ugh, why did he have to be so tall and strong? Riker was burning with fever and breathing heavily. Alyssa tried calling out to him, but he did not respond. The girl touched his hand, but it was ice cold. Oh my goodness. At last he regained consciousness and called out to her. The Grand Duke said that she needed to go back, but Alyssa insisted that it was not the time. Before losing consciousness again, he only said that they should go home. She tried to help him up once more. Alyssa begged him to hold on just a little longer, but the man seemed to be in terrible condition. The carriage departed moments later. Back at the mansion, someone watched the carriage leave. The man watched as Alyssa carried Riker outside. He assumed that since they were engaged, she must care about him deeply. Alyssa laid her fiancé down on the carriage seat. He was struggling to breathe. He apologized to her once again. Our girl touched his face, asking him to stop apologizing. She was genuinely worried. However, her touch did not seem to be working. Oh my god, what was happening? Alyssa had no idea what to do. It was a desperate situation. And then, she kissed him. Wow, finally. Our favorite couple, right? It was not just a kiss. Alyssa truly wanted to heal him. How sweet. Riker seemed desperate for her kiss. At last, he fell asleep. He no longer appeared to be suffering. Wow, thank goodness it worked. Now he could recover. He opened his eyes and called Alyssa's name once again. She leaned closer and told him that they were on their way to his mansion. Riker remained silent. He still looked somewhat frightened. And then came the confession. He told Alyssa that he loved her. That's it. The Grand Duke remembered watching her walk away and repeated that he loved her and did not want her to leave. Then, all of a sudden, he fell asleep again. In his dream, wedding bells were ringing. Alyssa Lane and Riker Tessin were finally getting married. He signed the marriage contract. A mysterious hand dragged the contract toward Alyssa. Riker held out the pen to his fiancée. She leaned forward to sign the document. Deep inside, Riker screamed for her not to do it. She brought the pen close to the paper. Then, with swift movements, she began signing her name. Despite Riker's desperate cries, she finished writing and set the pen down beside her. She looked at her fiancé. He looked back at her, but the one holding Riker's hand was a ghostly figure. Oh my god, what happened to Alyssa? At last he awoke from the nightmare. Riker woke up in his bed, holding hands with his fiancé. He turned to look at her. Our beloved protagonist was sleeping peacefully. He gently caressed her cheek. Riker felt happy and safe. However, the beautiful image of his fiancée transformed into a grotesque figure once again. Because of that, he pulled his hand away from her face. He got out of bed without saying a word. At last, he called out to her, and she woke up immediately. Alyssa sat up, surprised that he was already awake. The Grand Duke asked the girl what she was doing there. How rude. Alyssa asked whether he truly remembered nothing about what had happened the night before. He said that he only remembered fainting. Riker asked whether Alyssa remembered what he had said. The Grand Duke repeated that no one must ever find out that his pain disappeared whenever they held hands, especially the Emperor. Alyssa asked why. The man exclaimed furiously that if they did, they would be married tomorrow. Alyssa became quite irritated by the way he answered. She reminded him that she was his fiancée, and that meant they would eventually be married. Riker declared that he was not going to marry her, and Alyssa needed to understand that. Then he repeated that he loved Alyssa. Oh my god, it was real. Now Alyssa was completely confused. He stepped closer once again and said that he loved Alyssa. The girl gripped the bedsheet tightly. So she had not imagined what she heard in the carriage. He loved her, but they could not marry, which only strengthened her suspicions about Countess Ruthia. Riker suggested that they should date instead of getting married. Alyssa repeated his words, but they made absolutely no sense. Was he making fun of her? The girl asked what on earth he was talking about. In a passive-aggressive tone, Alyssa declared that if he became involved with another woman while she was still his fiancée, she would have to endure endless gossip about herself. Was that really what he wanted? Riker fell silent at her question. She was disappointed because there had to be a more concrete reason why he loved her but refused to marry her. Riker stepped closer. The man had to think carefully before answering. Alyssa asked, "What is it now?" He hurried toward the door, explaining that he could not tell her. Riker confessed that if she found out, no matter how much she regretted it, he would never be able to let her go. Alyssa challenged him, calling him a coward. "That's right, girl. She said that Riker was assuming she would run away. Was that the extent of the trust her fiancé had in her? The man admitted that he was a coward. He confessed that if he were in her place upon hearing his secret, he would run away immediately, even if he later regretted it. Alyssa did not know what to say because it had to be something truly terrible, but she would never be afraid to face her destiny. The truth was, she was suffering as well, seeing him like this. Just as the thought of watching him marry another woman was completely unbearable. Simply imagining that scene, Alyssa destroyed a pillow. Wow, that's some strength, girl. Riker was genuinely astonished by what she had done. He asked whether she was very angry with him. Alyssa let out a weary sigh. To be honest, she was hiding a secret too. She felt that she was in no position to blame him for wanting her to stay by his side while keeping a secret from her. Alyssa knelt in front of him and revealed that she had a secret as well. She suggested that they play a game and try to guess each other's secrets. With a mischievous look, our protagonist said that perhaps she already knew his secret. Riker said that Alyssa was overestimating herself. Haha, he really had no idea. Our protagonist knew very well that he was the one who always thought himself superior, even as his illness became more frequent and more painful. In the future, he would have no choice but to make a marriage vow through the sacrifice of someone capable of enduring that pain. Alyssa declared that it was time for another prophecy. She declared that they were going to get married, and the Grand Duke was utterly astonished. The girl stepped toward him with determination. She said that this was only the beginning. Haha, take that, Riker. Alyssa gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. Then she stepped away while he blushed intensely. Riker's entire face had turned bright red because of her. She reached for the doorknob to leave. Before walking away, Alyssa declared that she was not in love with him. Oh no, could that really be true? And with that, she left him alone. What he did not see, however, was that her cheeks were just as red as his. Riker could not understand what had just happened. Did Alyssa truly not love him back? Sometime later, at the Imperial Palace, Leonard asked whether Riker was truly about to get married. Prince Lennox asked whether their older brother had seen them the day before. He asked whether it had been when they crossed the terrace together. Leonard said that they had even used the Imperial carriage. Perhaps it had been something very urgent. Prince Stephen remarked that his future sister-in-law had been remarkably proactive, and that she had not let go of Riker's hand even once during the celebration. Lennox pointed out that the spring hunting season would soon begin, and once it did, the month of July would arrive. The Emperor agreed that it would be the perfect time for a wedding. Perhaps Alyssa would need some time to adjust to her new reality. As the curse worsened, the two of them would become increasingly confined within the palace. That was why Riker needed to hurry and get married. After all, only then could Leonard proceed with his plans, right? Daisy informed Alyssa that the Grand Duke had sent her a gift. Our peculiar protagonist asked what it was. The maid seemed hesitant to answer. Alyssa asked what was wrong. Wow, the gift was a very elegant double-headed axe. The girl picked it up, thoroughly intrigued. Daisy wondered what kind of gift that was supposed to be. On the other hand, Alyssa was absolutely delighted. It was sharp, the metal was brand new, and the grip was perfect. The man explained that it was the same model Riker used in battle. Alyssa loved the gift. He handed the girl a letter. Riker formally asked Alyssa to be his girlfriend. The spring hunt would begin the following week, and he wanted her to be his partner. Come on, Alyssa. Don't you know how to answer your fiancé? She asked the man to wait a few moments. Our girl wore a mischievous smile. What could she possibly be planning? Alyssa needed to come up with a worthy reply. She considered writing, Grand Duke, I don't like you. Thank you for the gift. That didn't seem quite right. She had better think of something else. A few moments later, she returned with a letter and handed it to the man. Our protagonist wrote that, as his fiancée, she would gladly accompany him on the spring hunt. Wow, the axe looked perfect alongside the shield painted purple. Another letter from the Grand Duke. What did he want this time? He explained that he was busy preparing for the hunt and therefore could not come to see her in person. He loved Alyssa very much and wanted her to be his girlfriend. On top of that, he had sent her another little gift. She remembered the day he had confessed his feelings to her. Riker had plainly told her that he loved Alyssa. The Grand Duke was an expert at teasing our protagonist. More days passed, and more letters arrived. This time, Alyssa was much firmer and simply replied, no. Why was she doing this to him? The black-haired man wondered what on earth she could have written that had troubled him so much. Riker needed to convince her. After all, he was the Grand Duke and could not back down so easily. Lord Johnny had come to see Alyssa once again. Alyssa seemed happy to receive him. She asked what had brought him to Chateau Luderne this time. Johnny said that Riker had sent her yet another gift. She was quite impressed. The two agreed that it would be best to put it away. He placed the spear against the wall. Wow, Alyssa's collection was growing larger and larger. The two admired the swords and spears. Our protagonist was completely satisfied. It looked just like the gallery of her dreams. Even so, Daisy seemed to disapprove of that hobby. At last, the day of the spring hunt arrived and many nobles had already gathered. Alyssa was impressed. It was a much larger event than she had imagined. The girl noticed the loving couples exchanging gifts. She wondered whether she should have prepared something for Riker as well. While Alyssa was lost in thought, Daisy struggled to carry all of Alyssa's wrapped weapons. Poor Daisy. Suddenly, someone noticed Alyssa's arrival. Standing right before her were Prince Lennox and a beautiful young woman. Alyssa curtsied, but he asked her to skip the formalities since they would soon be family. He turned to speak to his partner, who smiled in response. The pink-haired girl said that she had even sent Alyssa a gift to welcome her into the family. Alyssa thanked her for the gift, but she could not even remember what it was. Everyone seemed to be in high spirits. Prince Lennox said that he needed to leave and would let the ladies enjoy some time talking together. Our protagonist definitely did not want to be left alone with her. The girl said that she had heard a great deal about Alyssa. People said she was an angel. She thanked her for the compliment, but the truth was that she hated dealing with people like that. That woman was Marchioness Rose de Bells, Prince Lennox's current wife, renowned for her inexhaustible wealth. She was known for being completely detached from reality, spending gold without a second thought. Although she seemed kind-hearted, those closest to her knew that it was merely a facade, and that her loyalty extended only to nobles overflowing with gold. Rose said that although the rumors claimed Alyssa had fallen from the heavens, she felt somewhat offended that the girl had never greeted her. Alyssa humbly apologized and admitted that she had been careless for not speaking to her sooner. Suddenly, Rose asked whether the girl was blaming her for not inviting her earlier. Wow, that was rather strange. Our protagonist wondered whether the Marchioness wore the same mask of kindness when dealing with maids and other servants. In truth, Rose de Bells seemed to be a far darker person than Alyssa had imagined. Then, without saying goodbye, the Marchioness walked away. Alyssa found that interaction very strange. The woman had said that she would let it slide this time, but that Alyssa should be more careful next time. Why was she being so hostile? Roderick approached, surprising the girl. She was happy to see him, and the knight looked relieved. He declared that he would take her to his private tent. Alyssa politely asked how he had been doing lately. However, he seemed rather worried. Before she could ask anything else, he suggested that she speak to the Grand Duke as soon as possible. Then he hurried toward the tent. At last, Roderick announced Alyssa's arrival to the Grand Duke. Roderick asked whether everything was all right with his fiancée. Then she noticed an important detail. What was that letter he was reading? Alyssa walked over to Riker. She tried to snatch the letter, but he dodged her. How bold. He asked what was wrong with her. The protagonist ordered him to hand over the letter immediately. While she had been writing that letter, the girl had wondered how Riker was enduring the pain. She remembered what they had talked about some time ago. Alyssa had told him that this treatment was only the beginning. Riker had been thoroughly confused when she kissed him on the cheek. She needed to gather every ounce of strength she had to take that letter away from him. Alyssa jumped, but Riker was much quicker. The protagonist was becoming extremely irritated with him. She grabbed the Grand Duke's hand and pulled him closer. Once again, the girl demanded that he hand the letter over to her. She slipped on her own shoes. Ooh, they were close again. Emotions were running high. Alyssa did not think he was the type to give in. Was that why Roderick had been acting so strangely? To her surprise, Riker apologized. She asked whether he was in pain right now. He looked at her hand resting on his face, then gently held it. And then Riker admitted that he was in pain. But what was going on? He could not possibly be serious. The Grand Duke confessed that he was in pain. Wouldn't she take care of him? Alyssa asked him to come closer. Since he had teased her, the girl decided that this time there would be no kiss. Alyssa hoped that rubbing their cheeks together would have the same healing effect. She leaned closer. Wow, our girl's cheeks were slightly flushed. His eyes sparkled with hope. Being so close to her felt wonderful. If he hugged her, would she really mind? Alyssa wondered whether that would be enough. She pulled away for a moment and confessed that she needed to ask him for something. He wondered what she wanted. Secretly, he wished he could have touched her a little longer. The protagonist asked whether he was feeling any better. Riker, despite feeling much better, claimed that he still felt unwell, so Alyssa decided to make her request. The protagonist revealed that she wanted to lead Tessen's knights that day. To her surprise, he agreed. How had he accepted that so easily? Riker asked whether that was all. For now, she was satisfied, and that was all she wanted. Alyssa told him about her meeting with Marchioness Rose de Bells. She explained that the woman did not seem to like her. The Grand Duke said that perhaps Rose saw her as an enemy. But why? Riker revealed that her first husband had passed away, leaving her with a son. The problem was that the imperial family had the authority to revoke her title. Therefore, Rose de Bells was in a rather unstable position despite her immense wealth. Her son was still only 9 years old, so he would have to wait another 9 years before inheriting his title. The Grand Duke explained that the only eligible male heirs were the Emperor's direct descendants or the young Marquis de Bells. Perhaps because Alyssa was engaged to him, Rose believed that she posed a threat to her son's future. Interrupting the two of them, Roderick entered the tent and announced that it was time to depart. Roderick said goodbye to his fiancée, and Alyssa wished him a safe return. She decided to head back to her own tent. The Imperial camp became peaceful after everyone had gone into the forest. As she walked back, Alyssa overheard a conversation. How strange. Someone seemed to be speaking with an important person. Alyssa was curious to find out who it was. inside the tent, Prince Stuyven was getting ready to leave, and Countess Stella was with him. He had just said that he needed to attend a few appointments. How could he lie to her like that? The entire capital regarded him as a wise man of impeccable reputation, destined to become the emperor's political partner. Apparently, that was just another mask. Stuyven told the girl that he would not be back for dinner. Alyssa became irritated upon hearing him say that after the hunt he would visit the knights, then go see his university friends. He was nothing but a scoundrel who never spent any time with his wife. Stuyven suggested that they meet again only a few days later, and the girl agreed. Poor thing. She deserved so much better. He touched her shoulder and told the girl to go out and make some friends. Stella explained that she was not very good at making friends, and he asked what could possibly be so difficult about it. What an insensitive man. Alyssa saw herself in the girl, remembering how introverted she had once been. Our protagonist listened as Stella said that she preferred reading books alone, knitting, or drawing. Those activities were much more enjoyable to her. Our girl used to shut herself away and spend all her time reading alone as well. Oh no, the prince was about to leave. It was time for our protagonist to hide. Before she could find a hiding place, she saw him push aside one of the curtains. Stephen told Stella that while he was away on the hunt, her assignment was to make at least one friend. The nerve of him. After hearing that, Alyssa realized just how much she disliked him. Our protagonist needed to think of something. Poor thing. Stella looked so lonely and sad. Things could not stay that way. Alyssa decided to bump into the girl lightly, pretending that she was looking for her tent. The two girls greeted each other, and Alyssa had clearly taken acting lessons. Haha. Our protagonist politely curtsied to Countess Stella. The girl remarked that the future Grand Duchess was very kind. Alyssa suddenly noticed something. Stella's pregnancy seemed to be quite advanced. She looked surprised by the size of the Countess's baby bump. Stella explained that after everything that had happened at the palace, they had been unable to announce the pregnancy publicly. She was only in her 5th month, so why was her belly already so large? Alyssa suddenly remembered a few events from the past. The expectant mother looked so happy. However, our protagonist knew that her fate would not be so joyful. Alyssa congratulated Countess Stella. The girl thanked her, unaware that after that day she would never be able to conceive again. Our protagonist had to prevent something terrible from happening. The afternoon continued peacefully. Alyssa entertained Stella with her incredible stories. She never would have guessed that talking and walking with Alyssa would be so enjoyable. So this was what having friends felt like? Stella was fascinated. Then Johnny appeared, surprising the two of them. Alyssa called him over. She had almost forgotten to give him an order. She explained to Stella that she had asked Riker to leave one of his knights behind to protect her. Stella was impressed. Johnny greeted the Countess and asked whether Alyssa had any further orders for him. Our protagonist instructed him to divide the remaining guards into groups of 3 and have them patrol the area on horseback. She believed it would be best to station them at strategic points, but she did not know where the accident would occur. So, Johnny bowed and said that he was at her command. Stella found Alyssa to be a fascinating woman. The two watched the knights talking. Stella declared that Alyssa was incredible. She was so powerful that she even gave orders to the knights. Alyssa reassured her, saying that if Stella gave orders to the knights, they would surely listen to her as well. The Countess fell silent. She tried to explain that they did not treat her badly at all. Alyssa explained that even if she were surrounded only by maids, she would still prefer to be alone. Stella replied that she understood exactly how she felt. The Countess said that she believed the two of them could become very good friends. Our protagonist smiled happily and wanted to invite her somewhere the following week. Suddenly, Alyssa heard a very loud noise. The horses had broken loose. What was happening? The guards shouted for everyone to stay back and for the civilians to be taken to safety. Alyssa immediately started running. She called for her faithful horse, which came galloping toward her. Now it was time for our protagonist to act. One of the guards used a lasso to catch one of the horses. Phew, one had been captured. The guards tried to restrain the horse, but it seemed tireless. One of them threw the axe to Alyssa. She rode toward the panicked horse. Careful, dear. She performed a maneuver with the axe. Oh my goodness. Alyssa, what are you about to do? Bonk. She used the weight of the axe to knock the horse unconscious. Haha, brilliant. The large horse collapsed to the ground asleep, and Alyssa rode off to help the guards. Suddenly, she heard a scream. Countess Stella was terrified. Oh no. One of the remaining horses was charging straight toward the girl. The horse neighed wildly, completely out of control. The girl crouched down to protect her belly. Alyssa rushed forward and made a risky move. Our protagonist hurled her axe. It flew through the air at incredible speed. What would happen next? To everyone's surprise, the weapon landed directly beneath the horse's hooves. That caused the animal to lose its footing. The horse was thrown forward toward the Countess, who remained seated on the ground. But Alyssa was incredibly fast and grabbed the girl before tragedy could strike. The horse crashed to the ground just a few meters away from them. Phew, what a relief. No animals had to be harmed. Alyssa shielded Stella from the full impact. At last, the two of them were out of danger. The protagonist asked if the girl was all right. Stella still seemed deeply shaken by everything that had happened. In total, they managed to restrain all 5 runaway horses. The guards discussed how strange they found the horses' sudden stampede. Stella gently held Alyssa's hands. She thanked her for saving her, because if it had not been for Alyssa, both Stella and the baby could have been seriously injured. Our girl changed fate once again. Alyssa was overjoyed that she had been able to protect her and said it had merely been a matter of luck. It was safe to say that the accident had been resolved without further harm. Outside the tent, Rose DeBelle wandered through the camp looking distressed. As soon as she found Alyssa, she asked what had happened there. The protagonist asked if she had seen the stampede. The Marchioness replied that her heart had been racing and she had needed to see everything with her own eyes. Alyssa noticed that she did not look well. Rose answered that when the tents collapsed, she had thought she would end up trapped beneath the wreckage. The girl explained that the guards assigned by the Grand Duke had been responsible for resolving the situation so quickly. Rose finally seemed to understand what had happened. Alyssa said that the hunting party would be back soon. However, she had no idea that Vivienne and her unpleasant friends were watching her. They found the situation very strange. Was this really the same Alyssa they knew? Emperor Leonard was finally about to announce the winner of that year's spring hunt. Everyone was eager to find out who it would be. Wow, so were we. To everyone's surprise, he declared that the winner was Alyssa. The guards cheered. Lady Alyssa truly was incredible. Riker told her that she would receive a gift from the Emperor. Our protagonist was far too shy, but the Grand Duke insisted that she go. Prince Stephen and Stella applauded happily. The truth was that Alyssa really hated being the center of attention. Leonard said that she had rendered a great service to the capital, and so Alyssa was awarded a magnificent golden bow and arrows. As they bowed, Leonard remarked that he should have gifted her a golden axe instead. Although she felt deeply honored, she wondered how he had come by that information. That night near the carriages, an unknown person said that they simply could not understand how that had happened. The maid asked what had happened, since she had heard that the spring hunt had ended without any accidents. The person replied that something else unexpected had occurred. They revealed that they knew Alyssa had never received any formal training or riding lessons, therefore they needed a different approach. The carriages returned to the capital. At last, it was time for our protagonist to stretch her legs. Alyssa was quite annoyed because there was never a peaceful day at the Imperial Palace. The girl wondered what kind of disaster might happen next. More vague reports and endless gossip at court. Then she spotted Lady Josephine. Oh no, not today. Alyssa decided to keep an eye on Riker's cousin, for her own good. The blonde greeted her, and the girl responded with a polite curtsy. Our protagonist knew she had to appear vulnerable, so she innocently declared that it was her very first opera. To Josephine's surprise, Alyssa asked whether she could accompany her during the reception. Alyssa thanked her for agreeing. In the reception hall, breaking the silence, Josephine congratulated Alyssa on her victory at the spring hunt. Our protagonist looked a little uneasy and said it had merely been luck. Josephine replied that luck was also a talent. Why did her expression seem to suggest something entirely different? Even so, Alyssa knew she could not ask her anything directly, so what could our girl do? Trying to change the subject, the protagonist said she had been disappointed not to see Josephine at the spring hunt. Josephine explained that she had been unable to attend because she had needed to take care of a few matters. Now was Alyssa's chance. The girl stepped closer and asked what had happened. Then Josephine revealed that she wanted to know something. Did Alyssa happen to know anything about Baroness Luane? That name immediately caught our protagonist's attention. Baroness Luane was the very same woman with whom Gregory had been caught cheating on Alyssa in her previous life. Hearing that woman's name was incredibly uncomfortable. Alyssa asked whether Josephine was referring to a young woman of captivating beauty. Josephine realized that the girl knew her and asked what kind of relationship they had. The protagonist knew perfectly well that she could not reveal her secret. The blonde explained that she was simply curious whether anyone knew anything about Baroness Luane. The girl did not know how or even whether she should say anything. Josephine seemed very distracted. Alyssa felt that she should tell her because she could not bear to see another woman suffer because of that piece of trash. She tried to change the subject and said that Baroness Luane was a collector of ceramics, but Josephine already knew that. The protagonist said there was a rumor that besides being a collector, the Baroness also ran illicit side businesses. Josephine seemed a little surprised by that information. The girl continued her explanation, saying that the Baroness used front businesses to resell some of her pieces. The blonde thought that rumor sounded very plausible. Alyssa remembered that in the past, Gregory and Luane had been caught together in one of the studios she maintained through those front businesses. She assumed that if Josephine started investigating soon, she would eventually uncover Gregory's deception. The protagonist had no idea what impact the truth would have, but then Countess Stella arrived. The two girls greeted the newcomer. The Countess asked Alyssa to join her. Our protagonist said she would be leaving first, and Josephine complimented her dress. Wow, how she had changed. At last they left. Alyssa and Stella celebrated happily. The two girls said how delighted they were to see each other again. Then Alyssa noticed a maid carrying candelabras. They were identical to those owned by Marchioness Rose DeBelle. The girl asked her friend whether she had seen the Marchioness that day. Stella explained that perhaps they were rearranging the decorations because she had not attended. Alyssa was not quite sure what to think about that. In the Empress's chambers, there were sweets. Wow, how delicious. Eleanor chatted cheerfully with the girls, reminiscing about beautiful memories. Alyssa hoped the palace would always feel as welcoming as it did that day. Perhaps it was the very first time in her life that she truly understood what it meant to have friends. so it was her duty to prevent that day's accident, no matter the cost. She turned to the Grand Duke, asking him to trust her and follow every one of her instructions exactly. Riker looked both intrigued and worried. She asked him to assign someone to stay beside Josephine all night without her noticing, keeping her away from any staircases. Alyssa also asked him to inspect every chandelier in the opera house. He had to do it discreetly, and no one could notice. His fiancée truly was remarkable, wasn't she? He thought Alyssa was becoming more and more proactive. In addition, she asked that if Pierre Geller happened to be among the opera's guests, he should be removed immediately. Riker did not understand why. The girl began listing even more preparations, and he interrupted her, utterly confused. Wait, there were even more things to worry about. Alyssa asked him to inspect the royal family's private boxes. She remembered well that Josephine would injure her ankle, then meet Pierre, and soon afterward they would become friends. A chandelier would fall very close to Eleanor, causing chaos. The problem was that she could not remember exactly what would happen on the theater's second floor, which might turn out to be the greatest accident of all. He explained that she had given him an awfully long list of preparations to handle. Alyssa declared that she knew she was asking a lot, but it was important to her. The girl said that if he fulfilled her request, she would do everything she could to grant his requests as well. Riker asked whether Alyssa granted wishes. Our protagonist promised that she did. The Grand Duke asked whether she was really going to make such a promise without knowing what he would ask for. He stepped closer and kissed her on the cheek. How sweet. Riker held her by the arms so she would not run away. Haha. With his cheeks flushed bright red, he turned his face away and said that he regretted being such a modest man. What was he trying to say by that? He was a man dressed in the most luxurious ornaments, the rarest gemstones, and the softest fabrics in the entire empire. Then they said their goodbyes. Alyssa's cheeks were just as red, and she wondered whether he did not kiss her far too often. We want more. The guests had already taken their seats. In one of the private boxes, the Emperor was with Eleanor. Our protagonist was keeping an eye on everything. She was surprised when Riker arrived. The Grand Duke reported that so far no accidents had occurred and Josephine was safe. Alyssa was astonished, but also relieved. He revealed that the chandelier near the stage had been replaced because there had been problems with its ropes, so it would not be an issue. Riker also confessed that Pierre had been safely removed from the theater. She felt that something was different. Things were unfolding differently from the past. Could everything be changing because of her interference? The Grand Duke said that if there was anything he had forgotten, he had asked his brother to station more guards outside the royal boxes. Why would that uneasy feeling not go away? At last, the singers stepped onto the stage. The opera singers were incredibly talented. All the guests were captivated by the music. Oh no, the singer's dress got caught on the leg of a table. Oh my god! She was falling! Everyone became deeply concerned for her. Fortunately, the actress was very skilled and managed to keep her balance. Phew, thank goodness, everyone applauded joyfully. Riker asked his fiancée whether she was enjoying the performance. However, Alyssa was completely lost in thought. She thought about the fallen candelabrum. Something was not right. The girl quickly stood up after an idea struck her. The only movable seats were those in the royal box. Alyssa asked him what the chances were of the Emperor's box collapsing. That frightened Riker tremendously. They could not allow that to happen under any circumstances. The Grand Duke told her to leave immediately. She leaned forward to get a better look. Riker had reached Leonard and Eleanor. He had managed to get the monarchs out of there, which was a huge relief. Alyssa left the box as well. She noticed that the corridors had already been blocked off. What incredible efficiency. A man instructed all the guests to proceed calmly to the ground floor. Everyone left immediately, and in an orderly manner. Could there really be something wrong with the royal boxes? At last, the curtains closed. Alyssa realized how strange it felt to be alone inside the theater. She called out to the Grand Duke. From above, Riker waved to her. Then all of a sudden, he began stomping forcefully. Alyssa tried to stop him, but he kept breaking through the floor. Oh no! The royal box began to collapse. Alyssa could not see anything in front of her, only clouds of dust. She called out to Riker once again. The Grand Duke told her not to come any closer. He assured her that he would be down soon and that she should wait for him. He displayed incredible skill as he swung from the curtains. Phew, he finally landed safely on one of the balconies. Before Alyssa could say anything else, he took off running. Then he jumped again, this time climbing up a pillar. That man ought to be an acrobat. He began sliding down, then at last he reached Alyssa. She asked what he thought he was doing by risking himself like that. Riker apologized for making her worry, and she told him never to do anything like that again. Even though he insisted he was fine, Alyssa was still very upset, and she had every right to be. He pleaded for her forgiveness. Behind them, the wreckage of the royal box proved that something had indeed been wrong. Alyssa suggested that he go check on his brother and the Empress. She also suggested that he find out where Pierre Geller was. The only thing she asked for in return was a basket of peaches, which were delicious in the city of Geller. Since he knew he could trust her, Riker said he would grant her request. The Grand Duke told her that he would escort her to the carriage. Outside the palace, a knight approached the guards. Oh no, the man appeared to have terrible news. While Daisy was helping Alyssa get ready, someone called out to them. Daisy said she would go see what it was. Alyssa almost missed the underworld, where she did not have to wear clothes that squeezed her waist so tightly. When the maid returned, she wore a grim expression. She declared that Alyssa needed to gather her belongings as quickly as possible because the two of them had to leave the castle immediately. The knight also looked deeply worried and utterly distressed. Alyssa asked what had happened. Then she heard that both her father and her mother had suffered riding accidents. The physician also had bad news. Alyssa did not even wait to hear the rest and immediately dashed off. She had to act as quickly as possible. Her mother needed her. Alyssa did not remember that accident from her previous life. The horse raced through the forest. She was determined to get there as quickly as possible. Alyssa urged the horse to run faster and faster. Johnny tried to catch up to her, but it was extremely difficult. He shouted for her to stop for just a moment. Despite his efforts, she had already disappeared into the forest. Alyssa's horse was far too exhausted to continue. She urged it to keep going, but the animal lay down on the ground. Our protagonist apologized to it as she climbed off. By the time Johnny caught up with her, night had already fallen. She begged him to take care of her horse, and he scolded her for leaving so hastily and all alone. But Alyssa was far too distraught to accept being scolded. The man handed her a cloak, since it would soon grow even colder. Johnny asked how she intended to complete a 4-day journey without any preparation. Alyssa said that her mother might be in grave danger if she did not arrive as soon as possible. There was no time to think. She was feeling utterly miserable. He told her that both she and the horse needed to rest. Johnny explained that if they set out again at dawn, they could reach Alyssa's home the following day. Our protagonist was far too worried about her mother and wanted to get there as quickly as possible. The guard explained that if she collapsed from exhaustion, she would only create more problems and they could rest at a nearby inn. What else could Alyssa do at that moment? She decided they would rest through the night so the horses could recover, then leave at sunrise. At last they arrived at the Lane estate. Her brother Felix greeted her upon her arrival. Alyssa asked how their mother was doing. Felix explained that she was recovering. He said the shock from the fall had been severe, so she needed time to stabilize. The good news was that her life was no longer in danger, and she would not be left permanently disabled, so there was no need to worry too much. Alyssa insisted on seeing her, but her brother asked her to wait. He revealed that their mother was all right, but unfortunately their father had not survived. The following day, the funeral was held. The family gathered to say their final goodbyes. Felix bid farewell to his father with deep sorrow. He wished him to rest in peace. Shortly afterward, Harry did the same. Now it was Alyssa's turn. She placed a rose beside those left by her brothers. Our protagonist looked at the coffin. She remembered the time they had argued. Alyssa had wanted to become part of the imperial family just to silence his arrogant mouth. But now, all of that seemed so meaningless. She quietly returned to her home. Alyssa knelt beside her mother's bed. The one thing that comforted her was that her mother had not been harmed any further. Alyssa softly called out to her. Her mother breathed peacefully in her sleep. Alyssa was furious that someone had caused her parents' accident. She would never forgive those responsible. Early the next morning, Harry asked how his sister was feeling. She told him that she needed to ask him for a favor. Harry had to go to the Geller estate. He asked whether she was talking about Pierre Geller. The young man was utterly surprised when his sister declared him Lord Pierre Geller's representative and said that she would soon send him the titles. Harry wondered what Alyssa was plotting. He said that he would leave in a month, once Felix and their mother had become more stable. Alyssa said that she saw no problem with that. She told her brother that, in the meantime, she would uncover who the Lane's enemies were and identify the true culprits. Harry asked what she was talking about. Alyssa explained that the horse accident had not been a mere accident. Someone was most likely dissatisfied with the changes to the timeline and was probably targeting their family. That person had caused their mother's accident and their father's death. Alyssa had to respond to the attack they had suffered, but how? Our protagonist was determined to make them pay for what they had done. And that's it for part 2, guys. Hope you liked it. Alyssa's father didn't make it. Her mother is still recovering, and now our girl is determined to find out who orchestrated all of this and make them pay dearly. Meanwhile, Riker is still hiding a secret that could change everything between the two of them. Let me know down in the comments. Who do you think is behind the carriage accident? And do you think Riker's secret will finally be revealed in the next chapter? If you want more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any new videos I post. The name of the series is The Grand Duke's Bride is a Hellborn Warrior, and our recap covered up to chapter 44, which unfortunately is the latest chapter currently available. Kisses, and see you next time.